This boy woke up alone in the middle of the ocean. Terrified, he screamed for his parents, only to watch in horror as their ship vanished beneath the raging storm waves. Amidst the chaos of lightning and sinking debris, he spotted his mother floating face down. When he reached for her, he discovered a blood stain on her chest. She was already dead. Before he could process the shock, a wave engulfed him, pulling him into the abyss where he watched the bodies of the ship's crew and his parents sink into the deep. Luckily, his grandfather, Jin Seoko, the chairman of the powerful Chiangu group, grabbed him and pulled him to the surface. Despite being riddled with gunshot wounds, the old man focused entirely on Taiha's survival. He realized that the boy's parents hadn't drowned. They had been executed before the ship even began to sink. Knowing his own time was short, Seoko pressed a black fountain pen into Taiha's hand, instructing him to find a lawyer named Kim In-soo. He told the boy that no matter what, he must survive to inherit the Chiangu group. With a final act of sacrifice, the chairman strapped a life jacket onto his grandson and pushed him away into the night. By the next afternoon, a container ship belonging to the Salerno family, an Italian mafia syndicate, discovered Taiha drifting in the ocean. The crew was skeptical of the boy's story, but their leader, Regina Salerno, was intrigued when she realized the child spoke fluent Italian. Taiha explained that his family's yacht had been attacked by gunmen, but Regina wasn't one for charity. She demanded a reason not to throw him back into the sea. In response, Taiha used his grandfather's name and the fountain pen to prove his identity as the heir to the Chiangu group, suggesting that returning him would be more profitable than killing him. Regina decided to test this theory by contacting lawyer Kim In-soo in Korea. However, the man on the other end of the line wasn't the ally Taiha expected. Kim In-soo was at a drunken party, and instead of arranging a rescue, he offered the mercenaries $1 million to kill the boy immediately. He even threatened to frame the Salernos for the original massacre if they didn't comply. Hearing this betrayal over the speakerphone, Taiha realized his own relatives were the ones who had orchestrated the hit on his family. As Regina's men aimed their rifles at him, Taiha didn't beg. Instead, he grabbed a knife and carved the Salerno family crest into his own hand. He told Regina that since Chiangu would never pay for his life, she should take him in. He promised that if she gave him the power to seek revenge, he would be loyal to her family forever. Impressed by the boy's sheer grit, Regina laughed and welcomed him into the fold. Fast forward 17 years to the present day. Adult Taiha is back at the memorial hall, but his quiet moment of reflection is interrupted by a hit squad from Chiangu security. They are led by a man named Lee Jang-gu, who believes they are there to rescue an executive director who has been kidnapped. Unfortunately for them, Taiha is no longer a helpless child. Moving with ghostly speed, he decimates the entire security team with 2 knives, cutting through their bulletproof defenses as if they weren't there. Once the guards are dealt with, Taiha walks to the trunk of a car. Inside lies the executive director, the traitorous lawyer, Kim In-soo, now old and pathetic. The lawyer begs for mercy, claiming he was just following orders, but Taiha remains cold. He dumps a bag containing $1 million in cash over the man, noting that this was the blood money promised 17 years ago. Taiha explains that the boy who was supposed to be murdered that day died in the ocean, and he was reborn in his place. He drops a lighter into the trunk, setting the money and the traitor ablaze. As the car transforms into a funeral pyre, Taiha lights a cigarette, finally telling his parents and grandfather to rest in peace. He has returned to claim his inheritance, and the path is already paved in blood. Jin Taiha begins his mission by infiltrating Holdings, a private security firm that secretly acts as a contract violence organization for the Chiangu group. He moves through the building with lethal efficiency, quickly neutralizing several armed guards. After the room is cleared, our hero finds a cowering official in a green uniform. This man tries to intimidate Taiha by mentioning Chiangu's power, but the hero is already well informed. Because he knows this security firm actually handles kidnappings and murders of Chiangu's rivals, he ignores the threats and moves to a back room. Inside, Taiha discovers 3 bound captives. Rather than wasting time, he skillfully throws a knife to sever their ropes and instructs them to flee without mentioning his presence. Once the office is cleared of witnesses, our protagonist turns his full attention back to the man in green. He needs to know the schedule for Chiangu's top executives, especially regarding an emergency meeting he knows is coming. When the official refuses to talk out of fear for his family, Taiha loses his patience. He presses a knife to the man's eye, making it clear that the immediate threat to his life is far worse than any future retaliation. Later, our boy walks through the city, reflecting on the state of Korea. After 17 years away, he notices how the country has changed for the worse. He recalls that years ago, after a president who declared war on crime was assassinated, the nation fell under the thumb of corporate and criminal collusion. Specifically, the Chiangu group used violence and media manipulation to brainwash the public into seeing them as a people's company, even as they crushed their opposition. While adjusting to the local atmosphere, our hero stops at a convenience store to buy a pack of cigarettes. Coincidentally, he runs into a man with purple-tinted hair who is trying to buy the very last pack. To avoid a scene, Taiha politely lets the stranger have them, The man, seemingly grateful, follows him outside and offers him a single cigarette. During this brief exchange, our protagonist's instincts, honed by 17 years in the mafia, kick in. He realizes this stranger is incredibly powerful, likely on the level of the monsters he encountered overseas. Hoping to avoid a future conflict, Taiha watches the man walk away. Unfortunately, that man is Cheon Heeman, a high-ranking member of the Osung faction. Shortly after their meeting, Heeman arrives at the AH Holdings office and finds the bloodbath Taiha left behind. By examining the precise wounds, Heeman realizes the attacker is a master blade wielder. He calls a Cheonggu executive to warn him that the same person who killed Kim In-soo is now coming for the rest of the leadership. Because Heeman noticed the specific scars on Taiha's hand back at the store, he begins to suspect the stranger he met earlier is the culprit. As Heeman leaves the office and heads down a dark alley, he realizes he is being followed. Strangely, it is Taiha who decided to tail Heeman to see where a man of his skill was headed. The two face off, and the casual politeness from the convenience store evaporates. Heeman is impressed that someone managed to follow him unnoticed, but his expression quickly turns predatory as he prepares for a fight. Our hero draws his knives, and the two clash with incredible speed. Their blades create sparks in the dark alley, and the intensity of Taiha's strikes is so great that nearby objects are sliced apart before Heeman can even react. Realizing he is facing a true predator, Heeman looks up to see Taiha perched high on a ledge, silhouetted against the moon. As our protagonist prepares to dive back into the fray, even a seasoned gangster like Heeman can't help but think that Cheonggu is incredibly unlucky to have targeted a monster like Jin Taiha. Despite Heeman's skill, our protagonist moves with explosive speed, leaving the gangster defeated and bleeding on the pavement. Strangely, instead of delivering a finishing blow, Taiha simply begins to walk away. When a frustrated Heeman asks why he's being spared, warning that Taiha will regret leaving an enemy alive, our hero remains dismissive. He explains that he has his own rules. He only kills those connected to the Cheonggu group. Because Heeman once offered him a cigarette at a convenience store, Taiha considers the man's life paid for by that small kindness. Luckily, our protagonist manages to reach his car, though he discovers a wound on his waist from the encounter. It isn't deep enough to stop him, which is vital because he has exactly 32 minutes left to complete a revenge mission 17 years in the making. As he drives, the pain triggers a traumatic flashback to the night his world ended. He remembers his mother, Yeo Hee-jong, shielding his eyes from the spray of blood as his father, Jin Soo-hyuk, stood defiantly against a group of Korean-speaking mercenaries. Amidst the screams and the storm, his mother gave him one final instruction: jump into the sea and survive. Because he followed that command, he lived to see their yacht explode, a memory that fuels his current resolve. Meanwhile, at a high-security luxury estate known as the Gangbok Secret Annex, the corrupt remnants of the Jin family are holding a meeting. The atmosphere is toxic. The siblings, Joo-hee, Ja-shung, and Jong-won, bicker over the death of the traitorous lawyer Kim In-soo and the potential redistribution of company shares. Their eldest brother and current chairman, Jin Gu-ho, eventually silences them to hear a report from his son, Jin Cheong. The report is grim. Cheong admits he has already dealt with potential witnesses at the crime scene to keep the police quiet, but he still hasn't identified the killer. This incompetence infuriates Gu-ho, who violently strikes his son, screaming that Cheong only holds his position because the real heirs died 17 years ago. Despite the physical abuse, Jin Cheong maintains a predatory, manic grin. He assures his father that the killer is still within Cheonggu's reach and promises to find him within 12 hours. As the family argues, our boy is already at their doorstep. He knows this annex well because it is where the family has gathered for emergencies since his grandfather's time. Taeha realizes that these people haven't changed their traditions or their cowardice in nearly 2 decades. Because they chose to kill his parents just to secure a spot in this very system, he decides that strategic planning is unnecessary. He opts for a direct assault, slamming his car at full speed into the estate's heavy metal security bollards. The impact is massive, but our hero steps out of the smoking wreckage unbothered. He moves through the elite security detail like a ghost, neutralizing them in a single fluid motion with his blade. Inside the dining room, the family is startled by the crash, but the real shock comes from within. Suddenly, their own personal guards turn their weapons on the family members. In a staggering act of betrayal, Jin Cheong reveals that he has seized control of the room. He mocks his father's fear, confirming that Gu-ho was right to be terrified of him. With a chilling smile, Cheong confesses the truth. He was the one who orchestrated the deaths of the original chairman and Taiha's father 17 years ago. As the family collapses into internal treachery, our protagonist stands outside the building, ready to begin the final phase of his long-awaited plan. Jin Taiha crouches on the lawn after his initial assault. He is quickly surrounded by guards who are stunned to find their estate under siege by just one man. However, the real chaos is happening inside the dining room. Because Jin Cheong has decided to seize power once and for all, he has turned the emergency meeting into a slaughterhouse. When Chairman Jin Gu-ho tries to berate his son for aiming guns at his own family, he realizes with horror that the betrayal goes far deeper than just one person. It turns out that every sibling's exclusive bodyguard has been bought off. The guards, including Moon Youngmin and the scarred Park Junho, don't even bother to hide their motives. They openly mock their former employers, citing low wages and grueling 120-hour work weeks as the merits of their betrayal. Even the head of Chiangu security, Baek Junsu, refuses to protect the chairman, claiming his loyalty is to the company rather than the man. As the situation spirals, the fourth son, Jong-won, tries to argue that they aren't living in a lawless era, but his protest is cut short by a bullet. Because the guards no longer fear the family, they open fire, turning the dinner table into a blood-splattered crime scene. As the rest of the family is executed, Jin Chong casually approaches his father. Strangely, the chairman isn't entirely surprised. He confesses that he always suspected Chiang was behind the accidental deaths and divorces that cleared his path to the top. Guho admits he only kept his son at a distance because he knew Chiang was a predator. In response, Jin Chong reveals the darkest secret of all. He was the one who pushed the original chairman and Taiha's father into that storm 17 years ago. He mocks his father's cowardice, pointing out that Guho participated in the hit just to secure his own position. When Guho tries to claim that the committee will never recognize a violent coup, Chiang simply smiles. He explains that the noble heir, Taiha, is currently making enough noise outside to serve as the perfect scapegoat for the entire massacre. With that, he executes his father, ending the current leadership of Cheonggu. While the internal execution is finishing, our protagonist is busy carving a path through the elite security detail outside. He recognizes that these general manager level guards are significantly stronger than the average thugs he's faced, but because of his 17 years of mafia training, they still pose little threat. Unfortunately, the wound Taiha received from Heeman earlier begins to flare up, slowing him down just as 3 department heads, led by the cigarette-smoking Kim Il-seok, arrive to join the fray. One of them, Kim Cheol-soo, attempts to capitalize on Taiha's injury with a shockwave-inducing punch. Realizing he can no longer afford to conserve his stamina, our hero pushes through the pain. He moves with a burst of ghostly speed, neutralizing the elite guards with a spinning kick and a series of lethal throat strikes before they can even register his movement. When Taiha finally enters the dining room, he finds a scene of absolute carnage. Jin Chong is sitting calmly on the table, surrounded by the corpses of the relatives Taiha had come to kill himself. Chiang greets him like an old friend, even mocking Taiha's killer lifestyle. Initially, our boy is stoic, but the conversation takes a chilling turn. As Jin Chong complains about an interruption in a very specific, frustrated cadence, a memory clicks into place for Taiha. He recalls the voice of the mercenary from the night of the shipwreck, the same voice that had impatiently ordered the yacht to be destroyed. Realizing that the man standing before him isn't just a corrupt relative, but the literal executioner of his parents, Taiha's calm vanishes. His eyes filled with a murderous rage. Jin Chong, sensing the shift, drops his mocking persona and prepares for a final confrontation. Our hero doesn't hesitate. He raises his blade, ready to finish the revenge he traveled across the world to claim. Jin Chong mocks our protagonist for his informal speech, but Taiha isn't listening to the taunts. Instead, he is mentally dissecting the situation. He realizes that Chiang has known about his survival and his life in the Salerno Mafia all along. Because Chiang needs a scapegoat to justify his violent coup and claim the chairmanship, he has timed this entire massacre to coincide with Taiha's return. Strangely, our boy finds himself in a calculated trap. Jin Chong snaps his fingers, signaling 2 elite guards, Hwang Junhyuk and Park Junho, to engage. Taiha recognizes the gravity of the situation. These men are the core strength of the Cheonggu group and are far more dangerous than any average mercenary. As Junhyuk opens fire, our hero deflects a barrage of bullets with ghostly speed, but the coordination of the guards is flawless. When Park Junho lands a heavy, bone-shaking kick, Taiha realizes with a jolt of memory that this man was also present at the original massacre 17 years ago. Unfortunately, our hero's previous injury from his fight with Heeman begins to bleed heavily, slowing his movements. He tries to find an opening to strike at Jin Chong, but the situation worsens when the chief security officer, Baek Junsu, suddenly joins the fray. Junsu delivers a downward strike that shatters the floor, and suddenly, Taiha is surrounded by 3 high-level combatants. Jin Chong watches with a dark satisfaction, explaining that these men were trained specifically to counter Taiha's speed. He intends to frame Taiha as the villainous killer, while he plays the role of the hero who stopped the massacre. As the guards pin him down, Taiha's mind flashes back to his training in Italy 4 years ago. He remembers a time when Regina Salerno scolded him for the artistic and horrifying way he executed traitors. Back then, Taiha explained his philosophy. A traitor must die in such a gruesome way that the rumor spreads like a plague, ensuring no one else dares to betray the family. Regina had noted that being a mere killer didn't suit him. He was something much more terrifying. Back in the present, that inner monster awakens. Moving with a speed that blurs the air, Taiha shatters Park Junho's face and slams him into a stone wall. He spins and slashes through another guard's defense, breaking a sword with sheer force. The guards panic, realizing they completely underestimated his true power. However, Baekjunsu remains calm. He orders Moon Dane to take Jin Chang to the helicopter while he handles the young master. As the helicopter begins to lift off, a desperate Taiha lunges for the door, screaming Jin Xiang's name. Baekjunsu blocks his path and delivers a devastating palm strike to Taiha's chest, causing him to cough up a spray of blood. Thinking the threat is over, the security team boards the helicopter. Jin Chang looks down at the estate and triggers a remote detonator, leveling the annex in a massive explosion. He laughs maniacally, believing that Taiha has finally died in the flames, a victim of the very family legacy he tried to reclaim. Luckily, our protagonist is harder to kill than they imagined. As the helicopter gains altitude, Taiha, bloodied and broken, somehow manages to leap onto the craft. He bursts into the cabin and stabs Jin Chang through the leg, his face contorted with madness. He refuses to let the man who murdered his parents sleep peacefully. Desperate and cornered, Jin Chang grabs a pistol and fires 3 times at point-blank range, screaming that he, not Taiha, is the protagonist of this world. The force of the bullets blows our hero out of the open helicopter door. He falls through the night sky, crashing through tree branches and slamming onto a truck before rolling into a shallow stream. As he floats in the water, his vision glazing over, a mysterious silver-haired man on a bicycle stops and looks down at him. With his last ounce of strength, Taiha reaches out gasping for the stranger to save him. He refuses to let the story end here. Because his revenge isn't finished, he clings to life with a terrifying resolve. Huang Gray is a silver-haired young man living in a cluttered, tech-filled room in the lawless Wangcheongu district. He spends his nights as a digital information broker, negotiating with strangers over voice recordings of corrupt politicians. In one specific recording, a politician named Kim is heard abusing his power during a breathalyzer test. Gray attempts to sell this data for 200 units, but the buyer lowballs him, offering only 30. This interaction highlights Gray's frustration. Despite possessing high-level dirt on the powerful Chiangu group, he is treated as a bottom-tier gossip dealer because he lacks the status to make the information stick. Gray lives above a small traditional restaurant run by Aunt Nana, a former medical school professor who took him in after he was orphaned. His father, a researcher at Chiangu Electronics, was killed in a staged car accident after trying to blow the whistle on the company's corruption. This trauma fuels Gray's resentment toward the corporate giants, but he is forced to live a quiet life, riding his skateboard to school to avoid suspicion. Unfortunately, the neighborhood is a redeveloped area, abandoned to lawless competition between the Cheong and Oseong factions. This instability brings the Yaburi faction, led by Choi Boksu, to Aunt Nana's doorstep. Because the gang wants to buy the building at half price for the redevelopment project, they harass Nana daily. When Choi Boksu stabs a knife into a restaurant table to intimidate her, Nana remains defiant, even pointing her own kitchen knife at him. However, the situation turns violent while Gray is at school. He returns to find Nana badly beaten, her face bruised and swollen. This assault pushes Gray to the edge. He decides to use himself as bait to get closer to the heart of Cheongu. He leaks a photo of Executive Director Yang Juhak with a leader of a rival organization, knowing it will trigger a response. As he expected, men in suits intercept him on the street, punch him in the stomach, and drag him into a black van. He is taken to an office where an investigator from AH Holdings, the firm Taiha attacked earlier, brutally interrogates him. The investigator mocks Gray's father's ridiculous sense of justice and prepares to pull Gray's teeth with a hammer. Strangely, Gray doesn't beg. He laughs through the blood, calling the investigator a rag. Just as the hammer is raised, a subordinate rushes in to announce a one emergency case. Because the facility is suddenly under attack, the investigator orders Gray to be gagged and thrown into a storage room with 2 other elderly captives. Luckily, the intruder is Jin Taiha. Our hero slices through the door and tosses a small blade to the captives, instructing them to free themselves and flee. Gray watches in silence as Taiha walks through a hallway littered with the corpses of armed guards. This display of absolute power changes Gray's perspective entirely. He realizes that his hoard of data is useless without a sword to wield it. Once back home, Gray plugs a USB into his computer, accessing a security guidelines folder he previously stole. He discovers that during a one emergency, Cheongu executives retreat to a safe house on Bukaksan. While he is trying to pinpoint the exact location, a police radio dispatch reports a murder at a secret residence on Wangcheon 4th Street. Realizing this is Taiha's work, Gray pedals his bicycle toward the scene. As he nears the location, Gray sees a helicopter under the full moon and watches a body fall from the sky following the sound of gunshots. He finds Taiha floating in a stream, bloodied and gasping for help. Gray carries the unconscious warrior back to Aunt Nana's restaurant, where her medical expertise is the only thing that saves his life. In the present, Taiha wakes up in Gray's room, surrounded by monitors. When Taiha asks who he is, Gray turns around with a look of intense resolve. He explains that he is Gray, the man who has been waiting for someone with the power to finally turn his information into a death sentence for Chiangu. After recovering for 4 days in the lawless Wangchonggu district, because he deals in raw, unprocessed data for fixers and financial sectors, he has built a reputation as the youngest in his field. Gray admits he was the boy Taiha rescued from AH Holdings, having tracked the hero down by his face alone. As Taiha looks at his weary hands, he realizes he has been asleep for far too long. He asks Gray to find a specific person, but Gray is initially dismissive. He explains that finding someone requires luck, money, and a network of other merchants. Furthermore, Gray points out that since he and Aunt Nana saved Taiha's life and covered his medical expenses, it is only fair for the hero to grant him a favor first. When Taiha senses the hesitation, he simply turns away, grabs a dark coat, and prepares to leave. Despite Gray's protests about his physical condition, our hero insists his work is unfinished. He leaves Gray with a chilling warning: stay out of his business, or the next kidnapping will be the least of his worries. Outside, Taiha enters the restaurant kitchen and is greeted by the smell of boiling pork. Aunt Nana, working the stove, warns him not to move. Because he was hit by a .22 caliber bullet and has a broken rib, any reckless movement could cause a bone to puncture his internal organs. Taiha offers his gratitude and a promise of future compensation, but the gruff restaurant owner simply tells him not to blame her if his stitches burst. Once in the market alley, Taiha realizes the phone in his pocket isn't his own. Gray's voice suddenly pops through the device, explaining that the original phone was destroyed in the fall. Gray has provided a replacement and a tech earpiece with a 12-hour battery life. He also notes that Taiha's top button is actually a hidden camera. Even though Taiha threatens him again, Gray remains unfazed. He reveals that while Taiha was unconscious, the entire country was thrown into chaos because the news labeled the Chiangu family massacre as an act of terrorism. Gray explains that they are currently in a ceasefire zone, where the Chiangu and Oseong factions are fighting over redevelopment. Because of this instability, he offers a compromise. He will help Taiha with his urgent mission now, but once it's done, Taiha must handle a problem for him. If Taiha refuses, Gray threatens to call Chiangu directly. Recognizing the boy's leverage, our protagonist agrees to test his skills. The mission leads Taiha to Guanghuaman Safe, a private vault company in the heart of Seoul. Because these firms rely on absolute trust and secrecy, they are the perfect place to hide illicit items. Inside a secure room, Taiha retrieves a bag containing fake passports, bundles of dollars, and a bulletproof vest. Gray, watching through the button camera, wonders why there are no guns, but he notices something more pressing. Blood is dripping onto the floor. Taiha is hunched over in agony, his body feeling as heavy as it did years ago when Regina Salerno used to beat him during training. Despite the pain, Taiha asks about Kim Pil-jung, the CEO of Moving at Night. Gray confirms that Pil-jung is the broker who helped Taiha enter Korea and is now desperately looking for a smuggling ship to China. Because the authorities have tightened supervision after the royal family was killed, even a famous broker is stuck. Taiha instructs Gray to bribe other merchants with 10 times the normal rate to trick Pil-jung into believing a ship is available. When Gray asks if Taiha plans to escape with him, the hero draws his knife. He is going there to kill a traitor. The trap is set at a dark cathedral. Kim Pil-jung arrives, nervously clutching a bag filled with 100 million won and $100,000. He meets a shadowy figure in a confessional booth, boasting about his past in Italy to hide his fear. Pil-jung admits he has lost everything to a gambling debt at a Chiangu-owned house, which forced him to sell the information about Taiha's arrival. Suddenly, the cathedral doors burst open as Pil-jung's armed thugs enter to secure the room. Pil-jung mocks the information merchant behind the screen, demanding the exact smuggling route. However, the voice that responds belongs to his old friend. In a moment of absolute horror, Pil-jung realizes the dead man has returned. He tries to reach for his gun while pleading for mercy, reminding Taiha of their 10-year friendship. Taiha doesn't hesitate. He bursts through the confessional and stabs Pil-jung through the throat, ending the betrayal instantly. As blood splatters the walls, Gray panics over the earpiece, begging Taiha to run because of his broken ribs and bullet wounds. But our hero ignores the pain and steps out to face the thugs waiting in the aisle. Because he knows Pil-jung wouldn't allow guns in a church to avoid unwanted attention, he confidently tells the men to pray, for they are about to see God. Faced with a group of thugs in the quiet of the cathedral, Jin Taiha remains entirely unfazed. He realizes that since these men arrived armed with bats and knives to face a single person, they clearly intend to kill him. Because of this, our hero decides there is no reason to show mercy. He dismisses their status as subordinates or mercenaries, treating them only as obstacles to be removed. Watching through a hidden camera from his car, Gray is visibly sweating. He is well aware that Taiha isn't just dealing with an arm injury. His ribs are fractured from a gunshot. He watches with worry as the thugs charge toward the altar, shouting about the money in the confessional booth. Despite his injuries, our protagonist remains sharp and focused. He knows that if he crushes them immediately, he can prevent any unexpected complications. Taiha moves with a speed that defies his physical condition, driving a knife through the neck of a bald thug. In a single, fluid motion, he slashes the throat of a second man and delivers a powerful back kick to a third. When another attacker lunges in a panic, our boy sidesteps and neutralizes him with a brutal elbow and a knee to the gut. As the thugs lie scattered and groaning, Taiha stands over them, pressing a hand against his bleeding side. He realizes that while they are terrified, the adrenaline from the nearby cash keeps them from fleeing. Strangely, one thug manages to bring a pistol into the church, something Taiha hadn't fully expected. Knowing he only has one chance to use his legs effectively, he pivots on his sneaker and executes a high, spinning kick. The strike is so fast that the armed man is sent flying before he can fire. As the gun clatters to the floor, Gray sits in his car, mouth agape, unable to fathom how an injured man could display such monstrous power. Once the room is cleared, Taiha wipes his blade and contacts Gray via the earpiece. Knowing the boy is nearby because of his earlier warnings about people being outside, he instructs him to come inside and retrieve the money. Gray cautiously enters the blood-stained sanctuary, walking past the bodies with a mix of awe and disbelief. He finds our hero slumped in a pew, pale and sweating from the exertion. As Gray offers to get medicine from Aunt Nana, Taiha suddenly stabs a blade into the wood between the boy's fingers. The atmosphere turns cold as Taiha questions Gray's true motives. He notes that while his clothes and phone were changed while he was unconscious, he is still wearing his gloves. These gloves cover the Salerno family crest, and Taiha realizes Gray has already looked beneath them. Our protagonist forces Gray to face the truth. He is Jin Taiha, the eldest son of the late Jin Suyok, and he is also Vendetta, a wanted mafia killer with a 5.5 billion won bounty. Gray admits he knew the truth but chose to keep it secret because he needs Taiha's strength for a personal favor. He explains that living in hiding from the Chiangu group has been unbearable, and he chose to ignore the bounty in favor of finding a sword to wield against them. Taiha is blunt, telling Gray that his lack of experience is the only thing holding him back from being a true information wholesaler. He offers the boy a deal: stay as he is or play on a bigger field. He promises that if Gray is willing to put his life on the line, Taiha will make him the best informant in the business. While this alliance forms, the scene shifts to the grand luxury hotel. Kim Jae-pil and the powerful Cheon Heeman are heading into a private suite to meet with Jin Cheong. Jae-pil warns Heeman to stay quiet and let him handle the talking to protect the Oseong faction's reputation. Inside, they find Jin Cheong waiting with his elite guards, Baek Jun-soo and Moon Dane. Back at the church, Taeha's eyes glow with murderous resolve. He agrees to work with Gray because his ultimate goal hasn't changed. He is going to use Gray's information to destroy the friends and family who betrayed him, once and for all. Back at the Grand Hotel, the atmosphere is heavy with unspoken threats as the Oseong faction leadership meets the new face of Cheongu. Kim Jae-pil and Cheon Heeman have arrived to see Jin Cheong, with Jae-pil noting that he didn't expect an invitation so soon after the family massacre. He suggests that Cheong should have taken time to mourn before jumping into business, but his tone is more mocking than sympathetic. Because Cheong wants to establish immediate dominance, he raises a hand to silence them mid-sentence. He sits back, signaling for absolute quiet while a piano arrangement of Schubert plays through the room's speakers. Strangely, Cheong raises a fist into the air with an intense, dramatic expression that leaves the Oseong leaders exchange confused glances. To break the awkwardness, Jae-pil begins to clap, admitting that he should have listened to the music from the start. Cheong asks if he recognizes the piece, and Jae-pil identifies it as a specific arrangement of the Erlkönig, noting that the playing sounds slightly awkward, implying Cheong played it himself. Our protagonist's rival confirms this, explaining he won a competition with it in the 6th grade but quit because his wrists hurt. He then turns somber, noting that all the family members who attended that performance are now dead. When Heeman asks how they died, Cheong claims they were defenseless because he wasn't there to protect them. This strikes a nerve with Heeman, who firmly reminds Cheong that he called specifically to warn him that the attacker, our hero, Jin Taiha, wasn't normal and the meeting should be cancelled. Because Cheong is more concerned with hierarchy than safety, he ignores the warning and instead demands Heeman put out his cigarette, questioning his education. Cheong explains that emergency guideline number 1 is an unbreakable tradition that even he couldn't cancel. He claims he tried to handle the Oseong faction's stolen money quietly to avoid a scandal, but he ended up suffering for it, gesturing to his leg and his ornate cane. Heeman is skeptical of how Cheong survived a night where even the elite headquarters guards were slaughtered. When he asks why the attacker spared him, Cheong smirks, suggesting that perhaps the crazy terrorist has a rule against friendly fire. This insult enrages Heeman, who stands up and shouts that he would never do anything to dishonor his organization or his parents. Cheong mocks him further, stating he is jealous that Heeman still has parents to look out for him, while his own are gone. Seeking to move past the bickering, Jae-pil asks who finally took care of the attacker. Chiang gestures to Baek Junsu, the former chairman's exclusive bodyguard, who confirms he dealt with the man. Because of Bayek's legendary reputation, Jae-pil accepts this and asks what Cheong wants in return. Surprisingly, Cheong asks for no money or compensation. He only demands that the Oseong faction remain silent. He specifically wants Heeman to deny ever meeting the attacker, no matter who asks. This confuses Heeman, who wonders why Cheonggu is taking the lead in hiding the identity of the person who decimated them. As they conclude the meeting, Jae-pil lights a cigarette, but the tension spikes when Baek Junsu places a hand on Cheong's shoulder to stop him from speaking further. This public display of the bodyguard's influence frustrates Cheong, but he tries to maintain his dignity by warning the old people that he will be the next chairman. Jae-pil doesn't care. He tells Cheong to put his head on the ground like a punk before walking out. His final insult is a demand for a better ashtray next time, complete with water-soaked tissues. Once in the elevator, Jae-pil reveals his true insight to Heeman. He explains that Jin Guho likely never taught his son how the world really works, which is why Cheong is so reckless. Because of this, Jae-pil is certain that Cheong himself planned the villa massacre to seize power. He then drops a bombshell. Our protagonist, Jin Taeha, is still alive. Because Jae-pil knows that Baek Junsu has a code against killing, he realizes the bodyguard lied to Cheong. Luckily for the Oseong faction, they now have a lead. Heeman recalls that the attacker mentioned being back in Korea after a long time. While Heeman suggests they recruit this monster to swallow the Cheonggu group, Jae-pil decides it is better to kill him. He is personally offended that Cheong hired Heeman knowing he would lose to Taeha, and he wants to avenge his subordinate's honor. Back in the suite, Jin Chong is left alone with his thoughts. While preparing a drink with ice, he reflects on his father's ability to read a situation. He realizes that Baek Junsu's confirmation of the kill felt off, especially since Taeha was strong enough to leap onto a moving helicopter despite his wounds. Because nobody has been found, Cheong turns to his silent guards and asks the question that will determine his next move. Is Jin Taeha still alive? Baek Junsu clarifies that he didn't let our protagonist go on purpose. Rather, he frames Taeha as the one who murdered the former chairman. Jin Chong, ever the opportunist, doesn't care about the truth of that night. Because he needs his path to the chairmanship cleared, he simply notes that they wouldn't have made it this far if Baek hadn't finished the boy properly. When Bayek mentions that Taeha has grown surprisingly strong, Jin Chong loses his temper, shattering a glass in a fit of rage before refocusing on the upcoming board of directors meeting. He reminds Baek that regardless of whether Taeha is dead or alive, the bodyguard is now too deep in this conspiracy to ever betray him. Shortly after, Jin Chong prepares to depart by helicopter. He is intercepted on the rooftop by Moon Youngmin, a bloodied and desperate guard who feels insulted by a recent demotion. Because Youngmin was a bodyguard for the immediate family, he views being reassigned to a mere director as a disgrace. Jin Chong, however, shows zero empathy. He mocks the man for getting beaten so easily and tells him to be grateful he wasn't disposed of entirely. As the helicopter lifts off, a resentful Youngmin is left behind, while Baek Junsu tells him to wait for a separate call. The scene shifts to the Bowman Gukbab restaurant. Inside, our boy is finally eating a proper meal. Between bites of soup, he and Gray dissect the young informant's background. It turns out Gray's father was a senior researcher at Cheonggu Electronics, and the data he left behind, including a specific profile picture, allowed Gray to bridge the 17-year gap and recognize our hero instantly. Taeha is impressed by the boy's sharp mind, while Aunt Nana remains the pragmatic anchor, slamming a bottle of painkillers on the table and scolding them for lounging around when revenge is on the line. The atmosphere turns heavy when our protagonist looks Gray in the eye and asks if he plans to betray him. In the world of the mafia, traitors are a plague that must be eradicated, and Taeha's gaze makes it clear he wouldn't hesitate to kill them both. Gray is visibly startled by the sudden coldness, but Aunt Nana, understanding the trauma of a man raised by killers, notes that trust doesn't come easily to someone like him. Yet, Taeha offers a rare glimpse of his logic. He believes that anyone hated by Cheonggu or the Oseong faction can't be all bad. He eats a piece of meat with a slight smile, silently resolving that if they do betray him, he'll simply handle it when the time comes. Suddenly, the restaurant door slams open. Choi Bok-soo and his thugs stroll in, complaining about the heat and the lack of air conditioning. He mocks Nana, despite her having paid off her debts, and tries to assert dominance over the new face at the table. Our hero remains remarkably focused on his meal, staring at a piece of radish kimchi and wondering if the vegetables in Korea have grown larger since he left. His silence only infuriates Bok-soo more. As Gray leaves for school, a flashback reveals the promise he extracted from Taeha. Don't ever kill or do anything of that sort to someone in this village. Gray had explained the delicate balance of the Jangseo district. Years ago, a brutal war between Cheonggu and Oseong was halted by a ceasefire managed by the local Yaburi faction. Now, this local gang is trying to force residents into a housing cooperative to gain leverage for the upcoming redevelopment. Gray sees through the facade. He knows the mayor is in the pocket of the Oseong faction, and the Yaburi protection is just a slow-motion robbery of the powerless. Back in the present, the situation at the restaurant boils over. When Choi Bok-soo ignores Nana's warnings and raises his hand to strike her, our hero's patience evaporates. Within 10 seconds of Gray leaving, Tae-ha blocks the blow and hurls the thugs out of the restaurant and onto the pavement. Gray turns to find the gang groveling in the street, much to his frustration at the broken promise. Tae-ha stands over the defeated thugs, his mind racing. He realizes that his previous 30 revenge strategies were flawed because they didn't account for Jin Chung's unique brand of madness. To win, he must strike where it hurts, the board of directors. Because the Jangseo district redevelopment is the key to the family's corporate power, Tae-ha decides to dismantle it from the inside. He demands to be taken to their leader, eventually finding himself in front of a building draped in protest banners. He is met by Yoon Sori, the pink-haired second-in-command of the Yaburi faction. She mockingly asks if he intends to start a war all by himself. Our hero simply lights a cigarette, flashing a confident smile. He isn't there for a massacre this time, he just wants to talk. Our protagonist stands amidst several unconscious guards outside the Yaburi faction headquarters, a scene that immediately puts the organization's second-in-command, Yoon Sori, on the defensive. Because the street is littered with her fallen men, she is understandably skeptical of Tae-ha's claim that he only came to talk. Despite being surrounded by snipers positioned on the surrounding rooftops, our hero remains remarkably calm, still smoking a cigarette while his left arm is held in a medical sling. He dismissively explains that he only speaks with people on his wavelength, noting to himself that the entire district has essentially been turned into a fortified military base. Tae-ha realizes that if a single spy were to infiltrate these conscripts, the entire intelligence system would collapse, leading him to wonder if a disciplinary system is already in effect to maintain order. Meanwhile, Yoon Sori remains unimpressed, mockingly asking if he is a piece of Cheonggu crap or an Oshang bootlicker, before threatening to leave him with a head full of holes. Our boy clenches his fist in silent frustration, acknowledging that the disgusting things he suspected about the area are actually happening. Luckily, a man named Lee Hwaryong, the Yaburi vice leader known as Tank, leaps down from a building, creating a heavy impact on the pavement. Strangely, when the protagonist tells him to move, Hwaryong complies. This shocking move prompts Yoon Sori to accuse her vice leader of betrayal, especially as a subordinate prepares to fire an AK-47 at the intruder. Before any shots can be fired, Tae-ha appears directly in front of Yoon Sori and snatches her drink. He tosses the sewage water away, telling her that drinking such filth is why things aren't going her way. He then turns his back and walks away, leaving Yoon Sori screaming in the street while Hwaryong watches with a knowing smile, recognizing Tae-ha as a real monster not seen since the war. Later that night, the scene shifts to the local marketplace where Tae-ha and Gray are using a power drill to repair the door of the Bowman restaurant. Because Nana acted as a savior to the Yaburi faction during past conflicts, Yoon Sori and Hwaryong eventually arrive at the shop. The atmosphere shifts instantly as Yoon Sori joyfully hugs Nana, calling her Unnie, only to have her cheeks aggressively squeezed by the restaurant owner for constantly messing with the shop's doors. While Gray explains that Nana is a savior to the faction for healing their previous boss, Tae-ha observes the interaction with narrowed eyes. He realizes that Yoon Sori might be a scarecrow leader because her own subordinates treat her with such rudeness. Suddenly, Yoon Sori flips onto the table and slams her boot down, shattering the peaceful mood. She tightens a high-intensity vibrating wire around Tae-ha's neck, mockingly asking the goody two-shoes to repeat himself. Our hero remains calm even as the wire vibrates against his skin. Yoon Sori reveals that the snipers he noticed earlier weren't aiming for him to protect her. They were actually targeting her, the boss. Tae-ha realizes the truce is a lie and that she is being controlled like a puppet. He catches the vibrating wire with his hand and asks the critical question, who is forcing her to buy up the local houses? When he mentions Cheonggu, her surprised reaction confirms his suspicion. Unfortunately, this shadow play is being orchestrated by a truly sadistic figure. At a luxury villa, director Hong In-gyu, a member of the Cheonggu Electronics Board and a key ally of Jin Cheong, watches a man get mauled by a pet lion for failing a business deal in Lebanon. When his snipers report that a stranger in the Jangseo district noticed their presence immediately, In-gyu is shown a photograph of our protagonist. Recognizing a worthy prey, the director smiles and issues a chilling command to bring Tae-ha in alive. Inside the restaurant, our protagonist wastes no time exposing the rot at the heart of the district. He reveals that the Cheonggu group is the hidden hand orchestrating the destruction of Neighborhood 3. Because he already knows the Yaburi faction is compromised, he confronts Yoon Sori about her failure to purge the spies threatening her organization. When the shocked second-in-command attempts to use her secret weapon, a high-intensity Kevlar thread, to restrain him, our boy effortlessly slices through the nearly invisible fibers. This display of skill forces her to realize she is outclassed, especially when our hero identifies himself as the premier specialist in killing Cheonggu operatives. Strangely, despite his offer of help, Yoon Sori remains defensive. Luckily, Aunt Nana intervenes, vouching for the protagonist's ability to solve the crisis. However, the young leader isn't easily convinced. She believes the situation is too complex for simple violence to fix, as a few deaths won't stop a corporate machine. Warning the hero to leave the village for his own safety, she storms out. Later that night, Aunt Nana clarifies the stakes. She reveals that the root of the problem is Hong In-gyu, a sadistic director at Chiangu Electronics. Because In-gyu is holding Sori's comatose father hostage in a secret wing of Chiangu Severance Hospital, he is able to manipulate the Yaburi faction into doing his bidding. Only Nana and Sori know the former boss is alive, as his death would spark a suicidal resistance from the villagers. Unfortunately, their conversation is being monitored by Peak, a private military company hired by Chiangu. These mercenaries are perched on nearby rooftops, using high-tech digital scopes to track our protagonist's movements. Because they view the woman and student as witnesses, they plan to execute everyone in the store. This turns out to be a fatal mistake. Moving with ghostly speed, our hero appears directly behind the sniper on the rooftop. He neutralizes the man instantly, stabbing through his hand to secure his radio. Impersonating the fallen mercenary, the protagonist tells the rest of the squad not to worry, promising he will arrive soon. The next day, director Hong In-gyu is reveling in his power at the hospital. He treats Yoon Sori with absolute cruelty, mocking her father as a useless piece of meat and stabbing the unconscious man with a fork just to trigger a reaction from the heart monitor. Because he knows he has everything to lose, he forces Sori to stay obedient through sheer terror, grabbing her chin and labeling her as worthless trash. Before leaving, he shows her a photograph of our protagonist, demanding she bring the man to him by the end of the day. As In-gyu enters the elevator, he becomes frustrated that his peak mercenaries aren't answering their phones, labeling them as bugs. His arrogance is short-lived. Strangely, our boy is already waiting in the corner of the elevator behind him. Before the director can even register the threat, his ear is severed and sent flying. As In-gyu collapses in a bloodied heap, the protagonist steps on the severed ear and pulls down his mask. He reveals that he has already dealt with the mercenaries, holding up a fistful of their military dog tags as proof. Because In-gyu thought money could shield him from the consequences of his actions, our hero decides to provide a visceral reality check. He shoves the cold metal dog tags into the director's mouth, pinning him against the elevator wall. He delivers a chilling promise. From this day forward, he will visit In-gyu every single day to deliver a new wound. Director Hong In-gyu is currently living in a state of absolute terror. He attempts to frantically flee down a hospital hallway, but our protagonist intercepts him and sends him crashing to the floor. Because Taeha has already established a routine of violence, the director can do nothing but cringe and beg for mercy. Our boy kneels over him and drives a knife into his thigh, logically explaining that because the femoral region is mostly muscle, the wound is painful, but not fatal. He notes that compared to the previous stabbings, this is a relatively light injury before flicking the blood off his blade and promising to return the following day. Meanwhile, the power struggle within the Cheonggu group continues at a formal dinner hosted by Jin Cheong. He explains to his subordinates that the board of directors is split. 7 are his loyalists, 6 belong to the vice chairman, and 2 remain impartial. Because these impartial members cannot be swayed by mere words, Cheong believes they must be persuaded through successful operations. He specifically pressures Director Hong about the Jongseo redevelopment project, noting that young bloods must outperform the old guard. He makes it clear that failure before the board meeting will result in future hostility. This pressure leaves Hong visibly trembling, as he is caught between the corporate monster in front of him and the physical monster hunting him in the shadows. Later that evening, Director Hong limps toward his car, clutching his wounded leg in agony. He snaps his glasses in a fit of rage, swearing to destroy the crazy bastard who keeps attacking him. When his driver asks if he wants to go home, Hong violently kicks the seat, insulting the man for even asking such a basic question. However, the atmosphere turns cold when the driver responds with a smirk. Director Hong realizes with horror that our protagonist has actually replaced his driver. Because Hong was disrespectful with his feet, Taeha notes the man has no manners and slashes his leg once again. As blood sprays the interior of the car, our hero calmly walks away, leaving Hong to scream in despair, begging to know why this is happening to him. By day 7 of this torture, our protagonist realizes that Director Hong is at his limit. He heads to a dark industrial room to meet with the Yaburi faction, including Yoon Suri and Hwaryong. The local thugs are furious, believing Taeha's actions against Cheonggu will bring a war that will undo all their hard work in driving the company out. One man even suggests killing Taeha to prevent another conflict. Our boy remains unfazed, using a cigarette as a prop to explain Error 307, a digital blockade Cheonggu uses to freeze the bank accounts and internet of journalists and opposition members. He points out that while the residents suffer with unusable internet and data breaches, the Yaburi faction has been too cowardly to use their weapons to actually protect their families. He tells them to prepare for a showdown, revealing his ultimate goal is to seize a director title at Cheonggu for himself. Luckily for Director Hong, he isn't entirely without options. He meets with In-sik Go, the CEO of the private military company Peak. While Go eats a bloody steak, he mocks the director for being humiliated by an outsider. Hong refuses to report the attacks to the board because he is banking on Jin Chang's upcoming appointment as chairman to secure his own future power, a move he considers a stroke of genius for someone lacking connections. He warns the mercenary that if the redevelopment fails, their partnership is over. Strangely, Insik Go has done his own research. He reveals that our hero is actually Vendetta, the premier executioner for the Salerno Mafia in Italy. He describes Taiha as a monster whose name is undisclosed, known only as the best in the business. Because a nuke like Taiha has appeared in Korea, Go suggests they need a countermeasure of their own. He demands a massive sum of money from the director to bring in a professional who can rival the mafia killer's skill. Insik Go introduces his trump card, a man named Jerome, known as Aswang. Because Jerome is one of the few individuals to have crossed paths with our protagonist twice and lived, Go believes he is the perfect counter to the hero. Director Hong Ingyu, however, is visibly skeptical, as he questions why they would hire someone who previously failed to kill the man. To settle the doubt, Go explains that the reason Vendetta is so infamous is his relentless nature toward traitors. He recounts a flashback to a rainy jungle where a blood-splattered Taiha stood over a target. The man had fled to the depths of the Amazon, only for our protagonist to spend a month living off bugs in a suit just to emerge with the traitor's head. Because Jerome was able to escape a predator like that, Go justifies the staggering commission. $700,000 up front, $300,000 after, and a massive brokerage fee. When the director asks if Go's men will join the fray, the mercenary demands double pay. In response, Hong makes a phone call to arrange the delivery of 200 kilos of ammo to his basement. This is revealed to be a massive pallet of 50,000 won bills, totaling a mountain of cash that would allow anyone to retire. Hong notes that spending $1.3 million to deal with one man isn't the Chiangu way, but he is willing to pay for a productive conversation that ends in blood. Meanwhile, back at the Bowman Gukbab restaurant, our protagonist is analyzing the mission. Gray has managed to secure a blueprint of Director Hong's estate by bribing a local security firm. Because most subcontractors have no loyalty to Chiangu and are treated as replaceable, they were happy to go under the table for a bit of money. Taiha looks at the screen with a neutral expression, silently thinking that his grandfather would have risen from his grave if he knew how easily the company's security could be bought. While Gray analyzes the schedule, he notices a gap in the records. The first basement floor is missing from the blueprints. Based on the structural labels, he identifies B1 GRC, a reinforced soundproof concrete bunker often used for zoos or chemical storage. Before heading out, Taiha whispers a favor into Gray's ear that leaves the young informant in total shock. Gray springs out of his chair, questioning why the hero suddenly needs such an item, noting he has it at home but didn't think Taiha was the type to use it. Our protagonist simply tugs his jacket on, stating there is no such thing as a type for survival tools. He gives Gray a final instruction to keep his eyes on the CCTV for any intruders entering the town before walking out into the night. Outside, the vice leader of the Yaburi faction, Hwaryong, intercepts our protagonist. Because Hwaryong has been in the field since the Great Revolution of the 90s, he recognizes that Taiha is a real deal and demands to know who he is. When Taiha remains enigmatic, the gangster drops into threatening to eliminate him as a threat to Yoon Suri. Our hero remains remarkably calm, observing that Hwaryong must be a former Oseong member because he chooses a fair fight rather than a scheme. He gives the a friendly tap on the shoulder, trusting him to protect the village while he's gone, and promising to pay him 10 times what Cheonggu offered for the redevelopment. By 10 p.m., Taiha arrives at the luxury villa in a suit. He neutralizes the guards and hacks the keypad, moving through the dark living room toward the hidden stairwell. As he begins to descend, a heavy metal door slams shut behind him with a bang, sealed by a motorized whir. Suddenly, a speaker on the wall crackles to life. Director Hong's voice fills the room, mocking the bastard, and admitting he knew Taiha was coming because he had been tracking his schedule. From the comfort of his car, Hong watches the video feed on his phone, laughing at how cheeky our boy was to think he could sneak up on him. To end the struggle once and for all, Hong opens a metal gate at the far end of the room. 2 predatory lions emerge from the shadows. Through the speaker, Hong explains that while he had to play nice in the Jongseo district because of those Oseong thugs, he now has a perfect excuse to tear the place down. He reveals that while Taiha is busy being eaten alive, a squad of peak mercenaries is already marching to turn the district into ruins. He gleefully shouts for his pets, Mimi and Yunhui, to attack. As the beasts lunge through the air, Taiha remains remarkably calm, merely criticizing the feminine names Hong gave to the male lions. Because he isn't interested in a fair fight with animals, he pulls the hidden handgun from his jacket and fires twice. The lions fall dead instantly. Luckily, this leaves the director in a state of frozen silence. When Hong finally finds his voice, he screams in disbelief, asking why a legendary knife specialist is using a gun. Taiha simply draws his tactical blade, noting that the knife is specially reserved for humans. He mocks the director's logic, asking if he expected a comic book duel before cutting his medical sling and preparing to hunt Hong down for real. Through his earpiece, he tells Gray to notify Yoon Suri that the mercenaries are approaching the district. As the director trembles in the back of his car, he realizes that the Aswang story was right. Vendetta is coming, and no amount of concrete or cash will stop him. Gray delivers a grim warning to the Yaburi leadership. The Chiangu Group's private military firm, Peak, is closing in. He shares a final message from Jin Taiha, who has promised to return after hunting down Director Hong. Despite the internal panic from thugs who believe our hero has abandoned them, Gray clenches his fist in resolve. He makes it clear that because this confrontation was inevitable, they must stand their ground now or face total destruction. Unfortunately, the Yaburi subordinates aren't as confident. Because the hero has vanished to pursue his own mission, several thugs begin to panic, accusing our protagonist of running away after starting a war. When Gray tries to defend him, an older thug aggressively points a finger in the boy's face, mocking his youth and reminding him of the sheer brutality and loss of the previous war. Luckily, the bickering is silenced by Suyeon Kim, a former military major and gang advisor. He shames the men for their cowardice and turns the decision over to their leader. Yunsuri closes her eyes, reflecting on how she became a puppet for Chiangu out of fear for her comatose father's life. However, she decides that it is finally time to end the deception. As she prepares her signature Kevlar wires, she apologizes to her men and declares that the Yaburi gang will finally drive Chiangu out of their territory. Meanwhile, Insik Go, the CEO of Peak, reveals the cold logic behind the attack. Because killing the residents of the third neighborhood would eliminate their land rights, the construction company stands to make far more profit on high-end apartments. He notes that while a truce with the Oseong gang usually prevents violence, they are using the appearance of vendetta as a legal excuse to intervene. He plans to use our hero as the bait and the scapegoat, ensuring that Taiha and the mysterious Aswang take the fall for the massacre. High above on a brick ledge, the killer Jerome, also known as Aswang, watches the neighborhood with a predatory grin. The smell of impending war reminds him of past conflicts, and he finds the situation in Korea increasingly interesting. As a fleet of drones takes off to provide air support, Insik Go reminds his men that as mercenaries with no rules, they can take down anyone as long as the money is right. Elsewhere, director Hong Ingyu is a nervous wreck. He screams into his phone at Insik Go, demanding to know if the guards are actually doing their jobs. Even though Go tries to reassure him that he has as much protection as a president, Hong remains paranoid because of the repeated stabbings he has already suffered. He punches his car seat in a fit of rage, terrified that the man who threatened to hunt him down is already close. He is right to be afraid. Our protagonist is currently driving a black sedan, tracking the director's movements via the GPS devices he secretly installed on the Cheonggu vehicles. Although he is worried about how Gray and the Yaburi gang are holding up, he resolves to finish this hunt quickly. When the mercenaries in a nearby van spot the hero approaching, they are stunned by his fearlessness. They immediately open fire with heavy weaponry, shattering the glass of our boy's car. Taiha skillfully swerves and ducks to avoid the barrage of bullets. Because he is being squeezed by multiple vehicles, the situation becomes a high-speed game of survival. Our hero slams his foot on the accelerator, impacting one of the enemy vehicles before his own car skids and crashes violently into a wall. Strangely, the wreck doesn't stop him. Our protagonist slides out of the smoking car and immediately uses the detached door as a projectile, throwing it at an approaching motorcyclist to clear his path. He lands on another mercenary's head with a heavy blow, seizes a motorcycle, and accelerates down the road. Even as the mercenaries yell for their comrades to open fire from the left, Taiha leans low over the handlebars to perform a high-speed maneuver. Using a ramp-like truck to launch himself into the air, our hero leaps from the flying motorcycle into air. He lands in a perfect lethal crouch, shocking the men inside who thought they had him cornered. As he stands tall and draws his twin tactical blades, he calmly announces that it's time to get started. Mercenaries are horrified to see Taiha standing on the roof of a vehicle ahead of them without a single firearm. They attempt to coordinate a strike, planning to crush him the moment he jumps from the side. However, our hero is already several steps ahead. With a burst of power, Jin Taiha sprints toward the back of the convoy and leaps over a guardrail, disappearing from their line of sight just as the confused guards cry out. Before they can process his location, he crashes through the side of a moving bus with a violent shatter, his blades already drawn. Moving with the ghostly speed honed in the Italian mafia, the hero then bursts through the front of the vehicle. The driver cowers in terror, unable to comprehend how a flying motorcycle from a moment ago has turned into a man sitting in his passenger seat. Strangely, our boy sits calmly and hands the terrified man a thick stack of 50,000 won bills. With a bloody smile, he apologizes and requests that the driver speed up, noting that his revenge mission won't take much longer. While our hero handles the convoy, the defense of the neighborhood begins. In the command center, Gray monitors a swarm of 16 confirmed drones, realizing that they are splitting up to attack from a lower altitude. Soo-yeon Kim, the gang's advisor, identifies these as small FPV drones, confirming the Yaburi faction's fears. This tactical shift triggers a memory for Soo-yeon Kim about the nature of the previous war. He explains to Yoon-suri that in the past, Cheonggu and Oseong fought under prior agreements, almost like a staged medieval tournament where both sides stopped when the day ended. They used small weapons only because neither side wanted to escalate the conflict, largely because of the terrifying monster who once dominated the battlefield. Because Peak wants to seize the land quickly without reaching Oseong's radar, they have abandoned these old rules. Soo-yeon Kim realizes that while searching every building for the Yaburi men would take days, the mercenaries plan to use these drones equipped with RPGs or grenades for instant self-detonation. Luckily, the Yaburi thugs are prepared with electronic drone guns. From the balconies, they successfully jam the initial wave, watching as the drones wobble and crash to the ground. Unfortunately, this small victory is exactly what the mercenary captain, In-sik-go, expected. As he listens to his radio reports about the drone guns, his expression turns predatory. He mocks the idea that a few signal jammers could stop a professional military firm. Suddenly, Gray's laptop screen fills with icons, and he realizes with horror that the night sky is now filled with at least 100 drones. In-sik-go laughs, explaining that a drone gun has a limited range. Once it is aimed at one group, the others become active again. With 800 programmed drones spreading wide across the sky, the captain believes no one in the third neighborhood will survive. As the machines begin to infiltrate the houses through vents, Soo-yeon Kim panics and orders a general retreat over the radio. However, he stops when he realizes Yoon-suri has already taken her position on a high ledge. In a shocking display, the young boss stands amidst the swarming drones and reveals her true weapon, high-intensity Kevlar threads. During a flashback, she apologizes to her men for keeping this a secret, explaining that while she was missing during the last war, she was actually away mastering this deadly string technique to help her father. Though she was too late to save him then, she is determined to make things right now. Moving with incredible precision, Yoon-suri weaves a web of wires that causes the drones to explode behind her. This display of skill leaves In-sik-go staring in disbelief, as this level of resistance never happened in the previous war. Infuriated, he screams for his men to bring in the next batch and blow up anyone they see. Strangely, his commands are cut short by a car crashing through a wall near his command center. The driver is Hwaryong, the Yaburi underboss known as the Tank. Acting on Soo-yeon Kim's intelligence, Hwaryong has located the mercenary site. He leaps from the car, preparing to dismantle the ground forces personally. Because he is the organization's heavy hitter, he tells the command center he will take care of the mercenaries first. 10 years ago, the Yaburi gang was born from a simple need for survival. Because the times were changing and the weak were being preyed upon, Giseob Yoon convinced a younger Soo-yeon Kim that forming their own organization was safer than paying outside gangs for protection. Giseob reasoned that bribing the police and managing their own territory would be more efficient for their survival. Soo-yeon Kim, a soldier by trade, initially scoffed at the idea of being a common thug, but he agreed to do the heavy lifting if it meant easier negotiations for the neighborhood. This toasted agreement over soda cans is what gave the Yaburi gang its name and its purpose. In the present day, the alleyways of the district have become a nightmare for the Peak mercenaries. Hwaryong Lee has successfully tracked down their position, throwing the gunmen into a state of panic because they didn't expect to be found. As Hwaryong performs a powerful dash toward them, Commander In-sik-go is forced to scream at his men to stop aiming for the head and instead target the legs to slow the giant down. This tactic fails completely. Hwaryong violently slams a mercenary into a brick wall with enough, then delivers a massive punch that leaves another target bloodied and slumped against the wall. Luckily, the ground forces aren't fighting alone. From the rooftops, Yoon-suri acts as a silent guardian. When a mercenary sniper spots Hwaryong through a thermal scope and prepares to fire, Suri leaps through the air and slits the sniper's throat with her wires. This coordination is overseen by the older Soo-yeon Kim, who uses his tactical military experience to direct the defense over the radio. Because the mercenaries are focused on the ground, Soo-yeon realizes they are vulnerable. He logically concludes that since snipers need clear lines of sight at intersections, the center of their cluster must be the drone station. This deduction allows Gray to track a black van with fake plates parked near the community center, identifying it as the mobile depot for the drone swarm. While Suri moves to the coordinates, a gunshot rings out. In-sik-go emerges from the shadows, his bullet grazing Hwaryong's shoulder. The mercenary commander, armed with an axe and a shotgun, mocks the Yaburi leaders. He reveals his true motive. Because Hwaryong was once the 16th in command of the powerful Oseong faction, killing him would elevate In-sik-go to a national-level mercenary. He threatens to kill the girl next, but Hwaryong stands his ground, his metal arm guard glinting as he prepares to finish their long-standing rivalry. Meanwhile, on the highway, A car crash has left director Hong In-gyu at the mercy of our protagonist. Taiha remains cold and methodical, plunging his knife into the director's shoulder to fulfill his promise of a daily wound. When the terrified Hong In-gyu screams that he has already spent over 100 billion won, roughly 76 million USD, to have the district wiped out by bombs and missiles, Taiha remains unmoved. Because the director believes money is the ultimate power, he laughs maniacally, claiming his men won't discriminate between children or the elderly. Taiha, however, understands a different kind of strength. He explains that while those who have lost everything are dangerous, those who have family to protect are even stronger. Our boy recalls a vision of a weeping Insuri, whose fury was born from In-gyu's cruelty toward her family. He realizes that the director has inadvertently created a force of vengeance that money cannot buy. Because of this, Taiha silences In-gyu with another stab and forces him back toward the district, noting that fleeing abroad won't save him from the people he has wronged. Back in the alley, the fight between Hwaryong and In-sik-go reaches a breaking point. The mercenary commander fires his shotgun while laughing, but Hwaryong uses his metal arm guards to shield himself from the blasts. Just as In-sik-go prepares for a finishing blow with his axe, Yoon-sori's wires suddenly clasp around his neck and arm, rendering him immobile. She vows to take his head to soothe the hearts of the townspeople he butchered. Strangely, before Hwaryong can deliver the final punch to the commander's face, a new figure intervenes. Jerome, the elite killer known as Aswang, arrives. He sends In-sik-go sliding backward to safety, mocking the commander for relying on childish toys, like drones to win. The elite killer Jerome stands in the center of the alley holding his red and black staff, ready to begin. Watching from the side, Yoon-sori is wide-eyed and startled, wondering if this is a new enemy. She intensely observes the scene, realizing that although she had the mercenary leader In-sik-go wrapped up in her strings, Jerome managed to snag him by the coat and pull him out of the trap with ease. Luckily for In-sik-go, Jerome's arrival provides him with a mix of anger and relief. He begins to berate the punk for showing up late, but Jerome remains calm, pointing toward a rundown building 350 meters to the northwest. He identifies this as the Yaburi base and instructs In-sik-go to head there and do what he must. Suddenly, Hwaryong slams Jerome against a brick wall, catching In-sik-go by surprise. While pinned, Jerome looks directly at Hwaryong, telling the warrior to stay there so they can have a little fun. This gives In-sik-go the opening to press his communication device and frantically scream for all drones to be put in the air. When a mercenary on the radio questions the point of launching them without knowing the command center's location, In-sik-go explains that it doesn't matter because the town's best man is currently occupied with Jerome. He orders his men to kill everyone in the town while the distraction lasts. Meanwhile, Jerome pushes Hwaryong back with a massive kick, freeing himself from the wall. Hwaryong is left sweating and stunned, realizing that Jerome was able to send his 120-kilo body flying with just a leg strike. He concludes that if Jerome's kicks are this powerful, his staff must be even more dangerous. As Jerome walks forward confidently, dragging his weapon, Hwaryong tells a panicked Yoon-sori not to worry about him. He resolves to handle Jerome personally so that Sori can go deal with the drones. Yoon-sori agrees, ordering Hwaryong to take the killer down and return to base within 5 minutes, warning that the war is over if the mercenaries reach the base first. Jerome tries to block her path, playfully suggesting she stay longer, but Hwaryong lunges forward and lands a massive impact on Jerome's body. This creates a window for Yoon-sori to dash away from the fight. As she runs into the distance, Hwaryong feels a sense of pride, noting that even though this is her first war, she hasn't lost her composure. Jerome breaks into a loud laugh, wiping blood from his lip and stepping forward. He admits that if he takes any more punches like that, he might actually kick the bucket. Hwaryong is confused as to how Jerome survived a square hit to the chest and asks where he is from. Jerome reveals he is from the Philippines and learned Korean because he was bored and missed the heat of real fights. The two face off, and Jerome leans in with a manic smile, introducing himself before landing a rapid series of punches that snap Hwaryong's head back. Hwaryong stands his ground and retaliates with his own strikes. As they lock into a close-quarters grapple, Jerome asks if Hwaryong used to be with the Oshang gang. This triggers a flashback to a younger Hwaryong with Giseob Yoon. He remembers Giseob trusting his abilities to protect the neighborhood while he was away. Hwaryong recalls that during the first Jangseo District War, he was a head squad leader for the Oseong gang, while his close friend Giseob led the Yaburi gang. Giseob had refused to let the elderly residents be displaced, choosing to fight and die for his home. His final request was for Hwaryong to look after his daughter and the neighborhood. Back in the present, Jerome delivers a devastating slam that floors Hwaryong. Reflecting on his past, Hwaryong realizes he originally joined the Oseong gang to find strength, but the impossible mountains of real monsters there drove him to despair. However, he now understands that his strength doesn't come from those mountains, but from the people standing behind him. He stands up, bloodied but unbowed, declaring himself the tank who paves the way for others. He performs a ground-shaking slam on Jerome, whose eyes widen at the fist full of conviction. Jerome stops playing and gets serious, using his red-patterned staff to deliver a horizontal blood slash. Behind Hwaryong, a building wall crumbles into debris. He stands in the middle of the destruction, beaten and kneeling. In a sudden moment, a voice tells Hwaryong he did good work. Hwaryong is now wounded on the ground. Jin Taiha finally appears, looking down at Hwaryong and offers to take it from there. Despite the brutal beating the warrior just took, Taiha calmly offers a word of praise for his endurance. Standing just a few meters away is the source of that violence. Jerome rests his staff casually over his shoulder, greeting Taiha as if they were old friends, though he makes sure to note how late Vendetta is to the party. Because the situation is critical, Taiha tells the wounded Hwaryong to step back so he can handle the fight personally. He checks on the man's condition, and although Hwaryong is clutching a shredded blood-soaked shirt, his pride won't let him stay down. He insists he can still move. Recognizing this resolve, Taiha gives him a vital task. He instructs Hwaryong to head 1 block over to a black sedan parked under a street lamp. Inside the trunk of that car lies the bound and gagged director, Hong In-gyu. Taiha's plan is simple. He will finish the fight here while Hwaryong secures the hostage at their hideout. Jerome, however, has no intention of letting his prey escape so easily. To block the path, he stomps on a manhole cover, flipping the heavy metal disc into the air before batting it toward Taiha with his staff. This display of raw power is meant to test the hero, but Taiha remains dangerously still until the last possible second. As Jerome flips through the air to build momentum for a follow-up strike, our boy suddenly draws his twin tactical knives and lunges forward. He moves low and fast, allowing the heavy manhole cover to whiz harmlessly past his head while he closes the distance. The two killers collide in the center of the alley, their weapons locking in a shower of sparks. During this intense power struggle, Taiha looks Jerome in the eye with a cold, unimpressed gaze. He mocks Jerome's claim of being his rival, dismissively labeling him as nothing more than a stalker. Jerome isn't offended. In fact, the insult only seems to fuel his excitement as they exchange a flurry of lightning-fast blows that echo throughout the district. While the duel rages on the rooftops, the rest of the neighborhood is falling into chaos. Because the peak mercenaries have launched a big drone swarm, the night sky is filled with explosions and fire. Yunsori watches from a ledge, realizing she is running out of time and resources to keep the drones at bay. Nearby, at the Yaburi headquarters, the older advisor Soo-yeon Kim is firing back at the mercenaries, desperately telling his men to hang on until that man returns. Back at the car, Hwaryong reaches the black sedan and confronts the terrified Hong In-gyu in the trunk. As he stares at the man responsible for the death of his friend and the destruction of the town, Hwaryong is momentarily tempted to end the war right there by crushing the director's skull. He realizes that if he kills the employer, the mercenaries and Jerome would have no reason to stay. However, a vibration from a nearby rooftop snaps his focus back to the present. High above, Taiha and Jerome are locked in a struggle so violent it causes the surrounding buildings to shake. Our hero finally finds an opening and delivers a bone-shattering kick to Jerome's midsection, sending the killer hurtling backward. Jerome slides across the roof, wiping blood from his lip with a delighted expression. He tells Taiha that Korea has become a paradise for killers like them before launching a counterattack that sends our protagonist crashing through a window into the building. Luckily, the fall doesn't stop him. Taiha tumbles through the furniture and rolls back to his feet, leaping back onto the roof just as Jerome descends on him like a predator. While the two titans continue their clash, Gray explains the truth to a weary Soo-yeon Kim back at the base. When asked who the mysterious helper really is, Gray confirms that Taiha isn't just a terrorist or a mafia killer. Because he is the rightful successor to the corporate empire that started this war, Gray notes that the most accurate title for him is the heir to the throne. Because our protagonist happened to be hunting the same target in England years ago, he first crossed paths with Jerome in the claustrophobic darkness of a brick-lined train tunnel. The meeting was anything but civil. The silence was shattered when a figure was violently slammed into the wall. Strangely, despite the brutal impact, Jerome didn't stay down, looking up with blood-stained grin. Our hero didn't hesitate, swinging his blades in a wide arc that left a trail of blood in the air, yet Jerome managed to absorb the momentum with his staff. As a train roared past, Jerome sat calmly in its path while Taiha watched from the shadows. By the time the train sped through, the confrontation had vanished into the blur. Our protagonist was almost certain he had finished the job that night, but fate proved him wrong. Sometime later, while Taiha was dealing with a traitor fleeing to Russia, Jerome reappeared. Because the target was aboard a cargo plane, the two rivals engaged in a surreal mid-air combat while falling through a clear blue sky. High above the clouds, their weapons collided, creating sparks against the sun. Even a heavy kick to the chest and a stomp to the hand couldn't end the rivalry. As Jerome fell toward the distant ground, Taiha realized that this man simply refused to die. Back in the present, Jerome stands under the moonlight in the Yangseo district, and it's clear to our boy that his rival has grown stronger with every encounter. Jerome, sporting a bloody smirk, is quick to point out a flaw in the hero's form. Because Taiha is nursing a lingering injury, Jerome notes that the blows from his right arm are slightly weaker than those from his left. He mocks our protagonist, calling him Vendetta, and questioning how a fighter of his caliber could let himself get injured in this lawless country. Jerome's obsession with Taiha has reached a fever pitch. He views our hero as his ultimate mentor, believing that Taiha is the only one capable of dragging him to the brink of death just to make him stronger. During the fight, Jerome delivers a overhead strike that shatters the pavement, creating a cloud of dust. For a moment, it looks like our hero has vanished, but that's just a tactical distraction. Strangely, Jerome thinks he has the upper hand until Taiha whispers directly into his ear from behind. Our protagonist has moved with such blinding speed that he appears only as a streak of light. Because Taiha also grows in the face of death, he has used the intensity of the fight to push his own limits. With a final strike silhouetted against the night, Taiha finishes the confrontation, leaving Jerome bloodied and defeated. While Taiha deals with Jerome, Yunsuri is busy scanning the streets for the last batch of drones. She needs to clear the area to protect the base, but her mission is interrupted when she spots a group of mysterious men unloading someone from a black car. As they noticed her on the rooftop immediately, she wonders if she's facing a new set of adversaries. Luckily, these men identify themselves as a special ops force of the Oseong gang, acting under the orders of Cheon Heeman. Back at the site of the duel, Taiha sits atop the bloodied body of Jerome. Suddenly, Cheon Heeman appears before him. The atmosphere turns tense as Heeman admits he has been ordered to kill our protagonist. Although Heeman claims he has been ordered to deliver a death sentence, he doesn't immediately attack, instead posing a mocking question about what he should do. Our boy remains entirely calm, mentally noting that this is the same man he crossed paths with previously. Taiha begins a quick internal analysis, wondering how Heeman knew his exact location. Because this man isn't one of Chiangu's lackeys, Jin Taiha deduces that the corrupt director Hong couldn't have called him. Our hero realizes that if Heeman's true goal was an execution, he would have opted for a silent ambush rather than revealing himself under the streetlights. Recognizing him as a high-ranking member of the Oseong faction, our boy acknowledges Heeman's special status, while the gangster mocks the hero's polite tone, warning him about the consequences of causing trouble in the district. Before their conversation can escalate, Taiha attempts to explain that he wasn't the one who made the first move in the Jiangsu district, but he is cut short. The logic of the scene is shattered by the sudden appearance of Jerome behind our protagonist. Despite the brutal beating he took earlier, the Aswang has crawled back, a knife protruding from his chest as he spits a spray of blood. This distraction forces both Taiha and Heeman to look back in absolute shock. The manic killer only grins through the gore, leaning forward to admit how close he came to death. Our boy immediately drops into a crouch to finish the job, performing a rapid horizontal slash, but Jerome is prepared. He pulls a flashbang from his vest and tosses it to the ground as a parting gift. Luckily for the killer, the blinding white flash provides the cover for his escape, leaving our hero to shield his eyes and curse the man's zombie-like resilience. Strangely, as the light fades, Taiha feels a sharp spear point tapped against his throat. Heeman has used the chaos to position himself, coldly instructing the hero to go in order, because Jerome was technically first in line. As Heeman raises his weapon for a forceful strike, our protagonist is forced to raise his knife to block, resulting in a heavy clash of metal. While their blades lock in a shower of sparks, Taiha realizes with a sweat that Heeman predicted his move. Heeman smiles, admitting that while his eyes can't track Taiha's ridiculous speed, he noticed the hero started the same way as their last fight. He mocks the hero, stating there is no bigger embarrassment than being fooled twice, and suggests that our boy is in no condition to fight anyway. While locked in this stalemate against a building, our protagonist assesses Heeman's power, realizing the man is the real deal and hasn't even reached his full potential. He deduces that if this is the case, Heeman must be capable of pulling significant strings within the Oseong gang. Taiha pushes off to create distance, but instead of attacking again, he looks at his opponent with newfound respect. He boldly points out that despite the gangster's skill, he doesn't seem to have ever actually killed anyone. This observation hits a nerve, prompting Heeman to leap into the air for a vertical strike, shouting that he has at least beaten many to a bloody pulp. Our hero meets the attack, lunging forward with incredible speed to pass his opponent mid-air. Rather than continuing the fight, Taiha walks away without looking back, leaving a stunned Heeman in the center of the alley. He gives the gangster directions to the neighborhood hideout, an abandoned building 450 meters northwest where the locals are camping. He promises that while Heeman won't get a kill, he will walk away with something just as rewarding. This leaves the Oseong representative standing alone, grumbling about how much he dislikes dealing with our boy. While these two were clashing, the rest of the district has fallen under the control of the Oseong gang's special ops. Radio transmissions echo through the city, demanding the immediate surrender of the remaining mercenaries and threatening total destruction. In a construction site littered with dead mercenaries, a bloodied Insik Go hears the broadcast and realizes with a curse that the Oseong faction must have had moles planted in the area. Nearby, Gray and a heavily injured Suyeon Kim hunker down in a dark basement hallway. Gray desperately pleads with the older man not to pass out, but Suyeon Kim remains determined. clutching his rifle and whispering for Gray to keep his voice down so they aren't discovered. High above the hideout, mercenaries monitor the scaffolding but are too terrified to move because of potential ambushers. When a subordinate begs to retreat, Go screams into his radio, silencing the descent. Because there is over 10 billion won on the line, he views this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity he refuses to abandon. He vows to personally rip Giziobyun apart, believing Jerome will handle the rest so they can take the money and escape. Unfortunately for the mercenary leader, his arrogance is his downfall. Just as he reaches for a shovel to settle the score, a hand reaches out from the dark and snatches his face. Hwaryong has survived the earlier onslaught and is standing right behind him, heavily bloodied but conscious. Enraged that his life and the lives of the townspeople were valued at a mere 10 billion won, Hwaryong delivers a massive, bone-shattering punch that sends Go flying through the air. The man crashes through a brick wall and falls through the center of the building. With their leader neutralized, Yoon Sori leaps through the air, using her signature wires to slice through the remaining mercenaries. As the dust settles, she stands on a metal walkway, realizing the war is finally over. 5 minutes later, Cheon Heeman walks up the stairs of the hideout, looking around in confusion at the aftermath. He enters a room to find a composed Jin Taiha sitting with Yoon Sori and the bound director Hong. Our hero welcomes him to the table, formally identifying the representatives of the neighborhood, the Cheonggu group, and the Oseong faction. With a confident smile, our protagonist announces that the time for violence has passed. Because all the necessary parties are present, he is ready to officially negotiate the redevelopment rights of the Jangseo district, intending for everyone to walk away happy. In a dark urban cityscape, Huimin Cheon stands on a blood-splattered balcony, frustratedly explaining to his superiors that he wasn't tricked into the current mess, but admits he isn't the right fit for the delicate negotiations ahead. As he wanders through the alleyway, sighing at the weight of his duties, Jin Taiha steps out to offer him a lighter. Despite their history, the two share a cigarette, with Huimin admitting he likely won't win a rematch today or even the next time. However, the gangster confidently claims that after 3 more fights, he will eventually find a way to win. Taiha remains unimpressed, noting that it's a shame Huimin only has 1 life to gamble with. Before their walk ends, Huimin questions how our hero is still alive after the elite enforcer Junsu Baek claimed to have killed him. Taiha tells him to hold on to his questions until their next meeting. As our boy descends a set of stairs, Huimin warns him to see if he can maintain that same arrogance with the man who is about to arrive. Shortly after, the vice president of the Oseong gang, Jae-pil Kim, arrives at a construction site with his guards. Hwaryong Lee, the former Incheon branch leader, greets him with deep respect, but Jae-pil scolds him for bowing. He reminds Hwaryong that even though he left the organization, he shouldn't lower his head so easily. Watching from the side, Hwaryong is stunned. He recognizes Jae-pil as the 11th in power, the political mastermind who transitioned Oseong from a violent street gang into a sophisticated, systematic organization. Because Jae-pil has a history of winning where violence fails, Hwaryong realizes this is a far bigger challenge than the Cheonggu group ever was. Inside, the meeting begins with Jae-pil immediately pointing a finger at the bound and gagged director Hong In-gyu. He refuses to negotiate or discuss anything until the Cheonggu executive is released immediately. Unsuri is outraged, arguing that Hong is a criminal who tried to slaughter the villagers. Taiha attempts to interject, noting that Hong violated their agreement, but Jae-pil coldly tells our protagonist to keep his mouth shut. He labels Taiha an outsider with no business in the meeting and threatens to leave if he hears another word. Because the negotiation hinges on his presence, our hero signals Suri to comply. Taiha draws his knife and slices the ropes, allowing Hong to scurry toward the exit. The director pauses only to thank Jae-pil and swear that he will make everyone's death agonizing before he flees to a waiting car. With Hong gone, Suri slams her hand on the table, demanding to know why Jae-pil is siding with a man who held her father hostage. Jae-pil remains unmoved, asking how he can possibly believe her version of events when the war today could just as easily be interpreted as a brawl sparked by secret negotiations. He points out that since Taiha assaulted Hong at the hospital first, the conflict was actually a provocation by the Yaburi gang, using an outsider to aggravate Cheonggu. Because Suri cannot refute this political case, she is forced to state that they refuse further negotiations. Jae-pil adjusts his glasses and gives them 24 hours to review a new proposal, leaving the room in a total stalemate. After the Oseong leadership departs, Suri kicks a heavy spool in rage, realizing there is a spy among them who leaked their intel to Jae-pil. Surprisingly, Taiha tells her she did good work and confirms everything is proceeding according to plan. Outside, Jae-pil kicks Huimin out of his car, calling him a coward for losing his fight and refusing to give him a ride. This leaves the young gangster screaming in the street as the car drives away. Suddenly, Japel's car is forced to screech to a halt because our protagonist is standing directly in the middle of the dark road. Taiha leans into the window and explains the true logic of his move. He points out that if the newly freed director Hong were to suddenly go missing, the power vacuum would prevent Chiangu from replacing him in time for the board of directors meeting. This would weaken the alliance between the rival gangs. Taiha reveals that Huaryang was actually waiting outside to apprehend Hong upon his release. Because our boy possessed the foresight to secure the hostage again, he now has a case strong enough to negotiate. Impressed by this tactical brain, Japel's cold demeanor vanishes. He smiles and invites Taiha to take the empty seat next to him, finally acknowledging him as a peer. Jin Taiha agrees to the meeting, but he remains hesitant to enter the car, suggesting they speak through the window because they lack the familiarity for a shared ride. However, Japel Kim remains persistent, explaining that he isn't setting a trap, but simply wishes to move the discussion to a high-end cigar lounge. Because Taiha is particular about his tobacco, he initially views this as a nuisance. Luckily, the vice president mentions that the lounge carries Toscanello Italian cigars. This specific detail appeals to our hero's history in Italy, and with a sudden slam of the car door, he is seated in the sedan before Japel can even finish his sentence. The drive through the narrow alleys of Seoul is a study in contrasting temperaments. While Japel Kim calmly notes the local speed limits are 31 miles per hour, our boy is focused only on the urgency of their task, telling the driver to hurry. This leads them to a luxurious lounge, where the wood paneling and leather chairs provide a sophisticated backdrop for their negotiation. Once an attendant provides the tray of cigars and cutters, Japel Kim politely acknowledges the service, while Taiha requests matches to begin his ritual. Our hero prepares a specific cigar made of Kentucky leaves, explaining that it was traditionally enjoyed by laborers and even nicknamed the cigar of friendship because it is designed to be cut and shared. By selecting this short smoke style, Japel Kim realizes our protagonist is signaling for an exchange lasting no more than 15 minutes. Once they are settled with their cigars, Japel Kim reveals his true motives. He admits that the redevelopment of the Jiangsu district is actually a minor matter beneath his station. He only appeared because his subordinate, Heeman, was struggling to handle the situation, and because he was deeply curious about why a man capable of dismantling the Chiangu royals was hanging out in a place like that. Taiha responds with a rare moment of candor, explaining that he almost died the day he fought the Chiangu family, and the only reason he survived was because of the people in that district. Because our hero wants to protect his saviors, he lays out his demands: guaranteed housing, full relocation support to Gangnam Standard apartments, and an absolute freeze on extra payments for the residents. Japel Kim points out the massive financial burden of these requests, noting the construction costs alone reach 3 trillion won, meaning residents stand to gain 10 times their original property value. However, Taiha remains unfazed, suggesting that Japel's curiosity about the future of Cheonggu is worth the price of the negotiation. Strangely, Japel clarifies that his presence isn't just about curiosity, it's about the committee. He explains that South Korea is governed by a secret equilibrium of 5 powers. This includes Cheonggu, the industrial giant, the Oseong faction, the ability-based criminal organization, the Eternal Life Sect, a religious lobbying group with influence over presidents, the Dobang Association, a syndicate of military elites and loan sharks, and the Yan household of Changju, who organize the balance. Japel Kim fears that the recent coup in Cheonggu will shatter this decades-long stability. Specifically, he identifies the true threat as Baek Junsu. While Cheongjin holds the title, the world knows that Cheonggu's power rests on Junsu, a monstrous superhuman who controls all security forces. Because Junsu has moved from the shadows of a bodyguard into the light of a coup, the Oseong leadership believes he is using Cheongjin to fuel his own ambitions. Our hero listens intently, realizing that Japel wants him to eliminate both Cheongjin and Baek Junsu to restore the committee's balance. Rather than giving a direct answer, Taiha stands up and thanks him for the cigar, taking the silence as an agreement to protect the Jiangsu residents. Japel issues a parting warning, stating that anyone outside the committee who learns of its existence is usually disposed of, so Taiha shouldn't think of running. Our boy merely smiles over his shoulder, telling the vice president to look forward to the upcoming Cheonggu board meeting. The focus then shifts to the 31st floor of Cheonggu Electronics headquarters. A routine day is interrupted by the whir of a fax machine, and a female employee is left in total shock after reading the incoming document. Meanwhile, at a remote waterfall, the vice chairman is training when a panicked director, Pyodo Jang, arrives with the news. He reveals that senior director Hong Ingyu will not be attending the vital board vote. Instead, he sent a fax stating a proxy will attend in his place. As the vice chairman's eyes widen in anger, he demands to know who this proxy is. In the heart of the Jiangsu district, where protest banners still hang in defiance of demolition, Jin Taiha takes a moment to focus. Because he was raised in the high-stakes world of the Italian mafia, he treats his morning coffee with the precision of a ritual. Our protagonist carefully selects a 7-3 blend of Arabica and Robusta beans, grinding them darkly before pulling a ristretto drop by drop. He explains to the group that the light crema floating on top is the real deal, the mark of an authentic Neapolitan-style shot. Unfortunately, the Yaburi gang members don't share his refined taste. When Suri and Hwaryong Lee attempt to drink the coffee, they react with immediate shock, complaining that the liquid is both scalding and unbearably bitter. Because the shots are served pure, Gray even jokes that his throat feels like it's on fire. Our hero remains unfazed, sipping his own drink and explaining that he uses the intense energy boost to jumpstart his workday. When Suri asks if adding sugar is a crime in Italy, Taiha simply tilts his head. He didn't realize they wanted any. The cultural clash reaches a peak when Suri attempts to order an iced Americano to wash away the bitterness. This forces our protagonist to instinctively reach for his knife, visibly offended by the suggestion of such a drink. Luckily, Aunt Nana intervenes to move the conversation toward the actual status of the Oseong negotiations. Reflecting on his time at the cigar lounge, our boy details how Jae-pil Kim accepted the initial terms of the proposal. Because of this deal, residents will receive free rental of the new apartments with no extra financial burdens during construction. However, Oseong has ensured they will profit by controlling all future sales and taking a 50% cut of the property value. Strangely, Jae-pil added a final unexpected condition. Suri must step down as boss. Our hero explains that Jae-pil is wary of Suri because of her specialized wire fighting style. During their meeting, the vice president noted that only one person in Korea uses such a weapon, and while Suri's training was abruptly cut short, her connection to that renowned mentor makes her a wild card Oseong wants to sideline. Suri admits she was once scouted to join the best group in the field and lived in a traditional hanok house for training, but she did it mostly for the high pay. Regardless of the past, our protagonist insists that the Yaburi gang must officially go under Oseong's leadership. This causes a sudden outburst from Suri, who refuses to work for the sworn enemy responsible for her father's condition. However, Taiha remains firm because this is the only way to save Giseob Yoon. Since her father is still at the Cheonggu hospital, his safety will be compromised the second the company realizes Ingyu Hong has gone missing. The tension is settled when the veteran Suyeon Kim and the other bandaged survivors arrive. Suyeon agrees with the hero, logically concluding that the Yaburi gang cannot withstand the real forces of Cheonggu security once they return for vengeance. He recalls how the neighborhood stood strong only because of Suri's leadership, even when everyone else was too afraid to rescue Giseob from the hospital. Because the entire gang bows to her in a show of deep gratitude, Suri is moved to tears. To hide her distress, our hero's ally tugs her cap over her face and finally agrees to the deal. She shifts the mood by calling for a celebration at the Bowman restaurant. As the gang cheers and sets up for a night of drinking, our protagonist sits quietly in the background. Because he has successfully secured Ingyu Hong's fingerprints and stabilized the district, his preparation is complete. With a confident smirk, Taiha realizes it is finally time for him to enter the board meeting and take back what belongs to him. Inside a speeding black car, Director Pyoto Jang is in a state of visible distress. As a key supporter of the vice chairman, he frantically demands updates over the phone regarding the whereabouts of Director Ingyu Hong. Unfortunately, the news from headquarters is grim. Despite the HR and PR departments coordinating a search across all known affiliates in the Gangbuk area, Hong remains missing. The situation turns from suspicious to alarming when investigators reach Hong's residence. Because the director's two prized lions were found shot to death inside their enclosure, Pyotojang realizes this isn't a simple disappearance, it is a violent removal. Adding to the chaos, the Oseong faction has officially reached out to declare that Hong's recent actions in the Jongseo district violated their long-standing armistice. As a result, Oseong has invoked treaty terms to seize all redevelopment rights, effectively stripping Cheonggu of a massive asset. Pyotojang is left sweating, grappling with the logic of the situation. While he viewed Hong as an unqualified man who only rose to power through the favor of Cheongjin, he cannot fathom how the man could be so reckless. This leads him to a chilling conclusion. If Hong has been murdered, then the proxy scheduled to appear at the board meeting must be someone far more dangerous. He turns to the man in the front seat, Vice Chairman Gwang-hoo Yong. The vice chairman remains stoic, simply asking Pyoto to remind him of the specific name listed as Director Hong's proxy. In a dark industrial room far from the corporate high-rises, Ingyu Hong sits bloodied and tied. Our hero, Jin Taiha, stands over him, casually scrolling through his phone to confirm the layout of the Cheonggu headquarters in Uido. Because he is meticulous, he forces the terrified Hong to verify the structure of the directorate, a group of 15 members who hold the fate of the company on the 60th floor. When Hong hesitates, our protagonist suddenly swings a tactical knife toward the man's eye, forcing a frantic confirmation. When Hong questions what Taiha wants from him, our protagonist dismisses the idea of needing further information. He explains that he is merely double-checking his existing intel. Strangely, he points out that even if he were to let Hong go, the director is as good as dead. Once Cheongjin realizes that Hong's incompetence handed the Jiangsu district to Oseong, the company will have no use for him. Taiha walks away, leaving Hong with a haunting instruction: to spend his remaining time thinking of a single reason why he deserves to live. Outside the building, our boy prepares to depart in a black car. He is intercepted by Yoon Suri, Hwaryong Lee, Gray, and Aunt Nana. Because Hong is a director, Taiha instructs the group to keep the man alive as a political insurance policy in case Oseong tries to manipulate the redevelopment deal later. Gray looks at the hero with a serious expression, recalling a past promise about stepping into a bigger arena. Taiha taps the young informant on the shoulder, confirming his intent, but warning the group to stay low until the inevitable retaliation from Chiangu settles down. With a final smirk, the protagonist drives off, heading toward the heart of the empire. At a bright airport tarmac, two executive bodyguards, Hwang Jun-hyuk and Moon Young-min, wait for a private jet. Young-min, who has picked up smoking again due to the stress, discusses the upcoming power struggle. Because Hong's proxy remains a mystery, the two neutral members of the directorate now hold the key to the chairmanship. They reflect on their own positions. Jun-hyuk recalls being denied a raise, while Young-min remembers a desperate, failed plea to stop a forced transfer. They conclude that their only path is to follow the captain. The first neutral power arrives in a massive display of force. Do-kyung-han, a tall man in a trench coat and Junsu-baek's official successor, descends from the plane. Because he is considered the idol of the security forces and possesses exceptional political insight, hundreds of guards stand at attention to welcome him. He represents the security seat on the board, a position granted only to those who excel far beyond typical combat duties. Meanwhile, in the Southern Sea, Jin Chong has traveled by helicopter to meet the second neutral board member, Heron Yan. Standing on her yacht, Heron represents the legendary Yan household of Changju, an organization of women rumored to rival Oseong's strongest warriors. As she shows off a 900-pound marlin caught with a spear, Jin Chong brings up the matter of Director Hong's proxy. Heron is visibly confused because the name listed on the fax is Suyok Jin, the third son of the late chairman who died 17 years ago. Jin Chong clenches his heart, explaining that a ghost has returned as a monster. To counter this threat, he formally requests the council to issue a huge bounty. He wants our protagonist dead, and he sets the reward at a staggering 20 billion won. 17 years ago, a heated confrontation broke out in a parking garage between the founding chairman of the Cheongu Group, Shoko Jin, and his eldest children, Guho and Juhee. Because the chairman was preparing to leave on a trip with his third son, Suyok, the older siblings were desperate for an explanation as to why Suyok was being favored. Seoko Jin, however, offered no such clarity. He sternly reminded them that he didn't need their permission to act, labeling them insolent brats before driving away in a two-car convoy. Inside the car, Suyok felt the weight of this family friction, worrying about how he would ever face his brothers again. His wife, Heejong, gently encouraged him to focus on the present, even suggesting they pick up a painting for the eldest brother on their way back to smooth things over. While our 10-year-old hero, Taiha, watched from the window, the cars passed through the gate toward a long line of executives. These men bowed deeply, shouting their wishes for the chairman's safe return. Seoko Jin was visibly frustrated by the display, ordering his executives to simply focus on the company and avoid rash decisions while he was away. As the car passed the bowing men, Suyok used the moment to teach the young protagonist about the people outside. He explained that these were the loyalists, men who had been saved by the chairman and rose to power through his charisma. Some had even pledged blood oaths of allegiance. Because of this bond, Suyok believed these men would one day become a vital help for Taiha's future. In the present day, our boy reflects on those loyalists while standing in a room with Gray. He wonders if any of them are still alive and asks Gray to search through the files his father left behind. Despite it being over a decade, Taiha remembers every single name because there were fewer than 20 of them. Gray is initially skeptical, but he eventually finds a record for a retired man who now owns a pub in Yongin. When our protagonist arrives at the traditional-style pub in Yongin City, Gyeonggi Province, he is greeted by a cheerful chef. Taiha sits at the bar and requests the best dish available, leading the chef to recommend the fresh mackerel. However, the mood shifts instantly when Taiha asks when the owner, Mr. Gwangsu Gu, will be coming in. The chef claims he is the owner, but our boy immediately sees through the lie. Because the man is holding a heavy-duty tactical blade instead of a fish knife, Taiha calls out the poor disguise. The chef slams the blade onto the counter with a loud slap and lunges. The two clash violently, and strangely, Taiha's own knife begins to crack under the pressure of the chef's strike. Before the fight can escalate, a man with a scarred forehead slides the door open. This is Gwangsu Gu. When the apprentice chef, Hyunbin, tries to warn his master about the intruder, Gwangsu stands in total shock. He recognizes our hero immediately, tearfully bowing and expressing his relief that young Master Taiha is safe. This reunion triggers a specific memory for our hero. He recalls being in the car 17 years ago, looking at the driver. Back then, Suyok had identified Gwangsu as one of the loyalists. Guangsu had modestly told the young master that he was only just starting compared to the others, promising to serve the boy to the best of his ability from wherever he stood. Back in the present, Guangsu leads Taiha into a private office, expressing his gratitude for the visit. He quickly tosses a document into the trash can, which catches our hero's attention. Guangsu praises Taiha for attacking the Chiangu annex, though our boy considers it a failure since Cheongjin is still alive. When asked about the young man at the bar, Guangsu explains that Hyunbin is his apprentice. Because Guangsu works as a blacksmith in his spare time, he has been training the boy for 8 years. Taiha is impressed by the keenness of the blade Hyunbin used, but his mind remains on the document Guangsu secretly discarded. He recalls that Guangsu had the paper in hand when entering the pub and tossed it without even looking at it. Driven by suspicion, our protagonist retrieves the paper, a bill statement, while Guangsu asks about his past. Our hero realizes it is a bounty poster identifying him as a wanted dead suspect. Because of his actions at the annex, a 20 billion won price has been placed on his head. Standing in the shadows, our boy calmly reveals that he has spent the last 17 years busy with the execution of every traitor who destroyed his family. 17 years ago, within the suffocating silence of an industrial interrogation room, a bloodied Guangsu Gu sat bound at a metal table. The eldest Jin son Guho entered the room mocking the prisoner for his pathetic appearance. Because the funerals for the chairman and Suyak's family had already been concluded, Guho felt he had successfully consolidated power. He attempted to manipulate Guangsu by claiming the company had officially recorded his absence from the yacht as a leave of absence to care for his mother, who suffered from dementia. Unfortunately, this attempt at kindness only fueled Guangsu's rage. He sprang from his chair, screaming at Guho to cut the act. Guangsu realized the entire situation, from the sudden resignation of his mother's caregiver of 8 years to her subsequent disappearance, was a calculated ploy by Guho to ensure Guangsu was not on the yacht to protect his masters. Despite this accusation, Guho remained perfectly calm, sliding a notebook and pen across the table. He pressured Guangsu to write down the names of the remaining loyalists, specifically those who would refuse to serve the new regime. To enforce this, he looked toward the shadows where Baek Junsu stood. When Guangsu desperately asked where Junsu's loyalties lay, the gray-haired man stoically replied that he served only the company, confirming he had effectively switched sides. Back in the present, Guangsu stands in his office, his frame trembling as he realizes the boy before him has become a professional killer. Because Guangsu believes his failure to board the yacht 17 years ago constitutes a betrayal, he tells our hero that he should likely be the next target. Taiha draws his blade, declaring that he has no excuses for traitors. He lunges with a heavy step, delivering an impact that actually causes shards of metal to fly from his own blade. Our protagonist is surprised to see his weapon shatter, while Guangsu simply smiles, noting the blade was in poor condition. Rather than stopping, our boy performs a rapid slip maneuver, moving past Guangsu's defense and transitioning seamlessly into unarmed combat. As they exchange high-speed blows that create sparks of impact, Guangsu watches with internal admiration. He realizes that despite the darkness, our protagonist's predatory focus and speed are remarkable. He wonders how much bloodshed the boy has endured to master such transitions. The tension finally breaks when Guangsu suddenly yanks Taiha into a bear hug, declaring he would gladly face the young master, even if it meant his death. Once they settle into the office, Guangsu clarifies the logic of his survival. He explains that after the yacht incident, Guho Jin carried out a large-scale purge of every loyalist who had pledged allegiance to the late chairman. Guangsu was only spared because Junsu Baek intervened on his behalf, suggesting he be used as bait to lure out other surviving members. Because 17 years have passed without incident, it seemed the company had finally forgotten his existence. Taiha then reaches into his coat and places the black fountain pen on the counter. He explains that his grandfather originally intended for him to give this to the attorney, Insu Kim, but because the lawyer had turned traitor, Taiha was forced to execute him. The sight of the pen leaves Guangsu frozen in shock. It triggers a final vivid memory of the interrogation room, where Guho Jin had mocked his allegiance to a dead man, claiming that even the family attorney had crossed over. In that flashback, Guangsu chose to prove his loyalty through pain, repeatedly slamming his forehead into the table violently, until blood pooled on the floor. He had screamed at Junsu Baek, refusing to surrender or betray the chairman who had rescued him from the life of a street thug. Because of that absolute resolve, he bears the deep scar on his forehead today. Looking at our hero with eyes filled with new hope, Guangsu realizes the chairman's wishes are finally manifesting. He urges our protagonist to move forward and take his rightful place as the next chairman of Cheongu. Within the headquarters of Cheongu Electronics, Director Myung-gi Kim reports a critical weakness to Cheongjin. Because 3 of the 6 board members supporting the vice chairman are currently at risk, the power balance is shifting. Serving these board members are department heads with over 20 years of experience, but tensions are rising because their superiors refuse to step down. Chongjin mockingly labels these veterans as rotten geezers and realizes the group is collapsing. To exploit this, he instructs Myungi Kim to arrange a dinner with the department heads. He logically concludes that since these men have served their leaders for decades, they must possess enough dirt to be leveraged for a betrayal. The plotting is interrupted as Vice Chairman Gwang Hu-yong enters. Although he is an older man, he carries the heavy title of acting chairman. When he requests a moment of Cheongjin's time, the younger director doesn't even bother to look him in the eye. Instead, he smugly tells the vice chairman to send an email, insulting the older man's age by questioning if anyone in his camp is even capable of drafting one. When Gwang Hu-yong tries to step forward to keep the discussion brief, he is physically blocked by the bodyguard, Moon Dane. She cites orders from Baek Junsu that forbid any engagement between factions before the board meeting. Because Cheongu Security commands all forces and has sided with Cheongjin, even the vice chairman is expected to obey. Moon Dane takes a threatening step forward, warning that she will have no choice but to use force if he comes closer. Suddenly, the logic of the standoff changes when Gwang Hu-yong glares at her with an intense, stylized fury. The overwhelming aura of this small giant is so imposing that the bodyguard begins to sweat and visibly shake in terror. Chongjin simply looms over the shaken girl, mocking her lack of composure and docking her pay for 3 months. As Gwang Hu-yong walks past, he leans in to reveal his true hand. He ironically thanks Chongjin for eliminating the loyalist faction and his own father, Guho-jin, as this allowed him to finally claim the chairmanship after 37 years. However, his expression turns predatory as he mentions the 20 billion won bounty. He reveals that the ghost who severed Cheongjin's Achilles tendon, Jin Taiha, is someone he has already located. He tells the director that a mercenary has been sent and the hero will soon be in his hands. He leaves Chongjin with a final ultimatum: decide between death or resignation before the ghost arrives. Meanwhile, at the liquor pub, our protagonist is focused on a different kind of preparation. Because Gwangsu-gu's apprentice, Hyunbin, managed to crack Taiha's knife during their earlier scuffle, our hero requests a blade so firm it can withstand anything. Hyunbin boasts about his sharpening skills in the background, but Gwangsu-gu yells at him to stay focused on slicing fish against the grain. Taiha explains that his request is specifically because of Baek Junsu, who managed to rend a knife with his bare hands. Gwangsu-gu notes that using the name of Taiha's father to act as Ingyu Hong's proxy was a brilliant move that has likely caused a stir within the directorate. Our hero realizes that the vice chairman is likely giving Cheongjin an earful right now, recalling that Gwang Hu-yong's greed was something even his grandfather couldn't control. Gwangsu-gu explains that if Taiha makes it to the board meeting, his existence alone will prove Cheongjin's coup was illegal, stripping him of his seat. Despite this, our protagonist's gloved hand reaches for his broken knife. He knows he must eventually confront Baek Junsu, the man who reigns over all security. When asked if he can win, Taiha clarifies that this isn't about victory. It's a duty to ensure every traitor who betrayed his family dies. Gwangsu-gu, moved by this resolve, slams his hand on the table and promises to prepare a blade that will leave even Junsu speechless. As Taiha rises to leave, he mentions he will stay elsewhere until the weapon is ready. However, the second he exits the pub, he is approached by a bounty hunter in a blue cap. Before our hero can even process how he was located in less than a day, a giant man in a red hoodie, known as Batter, swings a metal baseball bat violently. The strike is so powerful that it sends our boy flying through store signs and crashing into a dumpster. Strangely, the duo, Batter and Pitcher from the Dobang Association, realize the hit wasn't as clean as it looked. Batter notes that Taiha actually launched himself to offset the force his body would absorb. Back inside the pub, Gwangsu-gu hears the commotion and shouts for the young master, but a thin blade suddenly stabs his neck from behind. In a chilling shift, the once clumsy apprentice Hyunbin grips Gwangsu's face with a dark, intense expression. He reveals that his slow-witted persona was an act he maintained for years to hide his status as a top assassin. His eye glows red as he looms forward, revealing that he has stationed people for every possible scenario. He has betrayed his master for one goal: to contend for the honor of succeeding Baek Junsu. The situation takes a dark turn as Gwangsu-gu finds himself cornered by his own apprentice. Because he was caught off guard, the veteran warrior is unable to prevent Hyunbin from stabbing him with a blade coated in Bushmaster venom. The traitorous pupil explains with a malicious smile that while the neurotoxin isn't meant to kill him immediately, the resulting pain will be so excruciating that he'll wish it had. Strangely, this betrayal is linked to a much larger corporate conspiracy. In a hall at Cheongu headquarters, the manic Jin Chong confronts the vice chairman, Gwang Hu-yong. He reveals the existence of an unofficial special ops unit created by Baek Junsu to find a worthy successor. While a man named Do Gyung-han was eventually chosen and the rest of the unit was supposedly purged, Jin Chong admits he couldn't let such lethal talent be discarded. He believes that in a country scarce of natural resources, the company must make the most of its people. As a result, he issues a final ultimatum. The vice chairman must resign and live out his days in peace, or find someone formidable enough to survive a clash with Baek Junsu. Returning to the pub, the apprentice is revealed to be Nameless, the former number 4 of that very special ops division. As Gwangsu-gu's hand begins to tremble from the neurotoxin, he asks if the assassin has been watching him ever since he left the company. Hyunbin confirms he was stationed there indefinitely, with his only ticket out being the discovery of the remaining loyalists. When Gwangsu attempts a powerful punch, Hyunbin effortlessly dodges and delivers a counterslash across his mentor's back. Because he has effectively neutralized the old man, the assassin casually spins his knife and decides it is finally time to head outside to claim the young master's head. Outside, our protagonist is already in the middle of a different battle. He is being harassed by a duo of bounty hunters known as the Pitcher and the Batter. The Pitcher hurls high-speed steel balls that explode on the pavement, forcing our boy to sprint and weave through the debris. Meanwhile, the Batter swings a metal club with enough force to create ripples in the air. Although Jin Taiha manages to evade their coordinated strikes, he realizes that his lack of a weapon is a significant disadvantage. The bounty hunters attempt to persuade him to follow them quietly, noting that they get paid whether he is delivered alive to their employer or dead to others. Because of this, our hero realizes these men aren't working for Jin Cheong. However, the fight is suddenly interrupted when Hyunbin lunges from the shadows. The Batter is furious at the intrusion, but his anger is short-lived. Moving with incredible speed, Hyunbin slashes the Pitcher's arm and cuts down the Batter, dismissively labeling them as roaches and bloated maggots. Our protagonist immediately recognizes the clothes of the pub apprentice and asks why he was undercover. Hyunbin mockingly suggests that Gwangsu is likely on his deathbed due to the venom, but he credits Taiha's arrival for saving him from his miserable stakeout. He explains that he has endured this mission for one reason, a chance to kill Do Gyung-han and seize the seat of the man who betrayed him, Baek Junsu. As Hyunbin leaps toward him with a manic grin, the scene briefly shifts back to the vice chairman's perspective. Gwang Hu-young reflects on Jin Chong's arrogance, realizing the young director is naive for thinking he can hide an assassin under Baek Junsu's nose. He understands that Junsu likely only feigned ignorance of the apprentice because he found the threat unworthy of a response. Back in the street, the confrontation reaches its peak. As Hyunbin closes the distance, our boy remains remarkably calm. Realizing that the time for unarmed defense is over, Jin Taiha calls out for a weapon. Luckily, Gwangsu-gu suddenly attacks Hyunbin, crashing into him with force. Despite being bloodied and poisoned, the veteran loyalist has managed to survive and reach the street. He stands before our hero, holding his blade and ready to fulfill his duty one last time. Hyunbin delivers a devastating blow that sends Gwangsu-gu hurtling through the air, crashing into a nearby structure. Because the elder loyalist is critically wounded, Jin Taeha immediately prepares for combat, firmly gripping his tactical blades. Our boy looks down at the fallen Gwangsu with a focused expression, quietly instructing him to rest while the man slips into unconsciousness. Unfortunately, the hero has no time to linger. Hyunbin leaps down from a nearby ledge with a grin, mocking Taiha for getting distracted during a fight. The assassin strikes the ground with a violent force, causing our protagonist to slide back into a defensive crouch. As the dust settles, Hyunbin taunts him further, marveling at how a poisoned man like Gwangsu could still run to his master's side. Taiha dismisses the jab, asking if the assassin is simply jealous of the loyalty he never earned. Strangely, the air fills with a series of sharp cracks. Before Taiha can react, a utility pole comes crashing down directly toward him. Because Hyunbin deliberately sabotaged the structure, severed power lines begin whipping through the air with electric jolts, causing the neighborhood lights to flicker and die. Amidst the chaos and the screams of confused residents, the assassin dashes forward, mockingly asking if our boy is good at tap dancing, while they dodge the live wires. Their blades meet in a shower of sparks and electricity. During the struggle, Hyunbin attempts to break the hero's spirit by reminding him of his previous failure against Baek Junsu. He questions where Taiha finds the confidence to return when he couldn't even land a single blow on the top enforcer. This pressure forces our protagonist to leap onto a nearby roof to create distance, but Hyunbin quickly follows, looking down on him from the sky and labeling him pathetically weak. The fight spills into a narrow building hallway, where the intensity of the clashes begins to take a toll. While catching his breath, our hero realizes that although the assassin is strong, his movements are bizarre. It feels as though Hyunbin is teleporting, consistently staying a step ahead of every maneuver. However, Taiha notices a vital contradiction. While the man's positioning is blindingly fast, his actual attacks are slow enough to counter. This triggers a flashback to an office where Regina Salerno sits with her feet on her desk. She explains to Taiha that while people think assassins and killers are the same, they aren't, because only one is a professional for hire. Regina explains that real assassination relies on science, from explosives and poison to drones. Because the options are limitless, An assassin must ensure no traces are left behind. When Taiha claims that sounds like his own messy work, Regina playfully kicks her desk, scolding him for painting walls with blood. She points out that the government uses assassination inquiries as traps to kill two birds with one stone, eliminating the target and the assassin. She poses a final question. What happens to an organization that possesses an assassin who never leaves a trace? Back in the present, as Hyunbin lunges with his blade, Taiha realizes that such an individual would grant an organization tremendous power. Our protagonist finally analyzes the pattern. Hyunbin isn't teleporting. He is like a magician, disappearing and appearing with a specific purpose. He realizes the utility pole wasn't a coincidence, but a plan to drive the fight into a dark environment advantageous to the assassin. Hyunbin confirms this, noting he would have rotted in that pub forever if Taiha hadn't appeared to save him from that miserable fate. Our hero finally smiles back, realizing why Cheongjin and Junsu Baek kept him undercover for years. They wanted to raise an assassin, but because Hyunbin keeps choosing messy, face-to-face confrontations like a common killer, they eventually gave up on him. This mockery causes the assassin's eyes to go wide with rage. He flashes back to a training room where he was sent tumbling across the floor, desperately begging Junsu Baek for another chance to fight. Baek Junsu looked down with absolute disappointment, telling the boy he had seen enough. He scolded Hyunbin for being distracted by goals far beyond his reach, declaring that he would never become someone like Do Kyung-han. In the present, Hyunbin screams in a fury, telling Taiha to shut up. Our boy hits back with a final verbal strike, calling him an abandoned coward who ran away with his tail between his legs. This pushes the assassin over the edge. He lunges through the hallway, vowing to take the hero's head back to win everyone's acknowledgement. Hyunbin leaps into an elevator to pursue his target, but his eyes widen as the logic of the trap shifts. A gloved hand reaches out to press the button, and the assassin realizes he is now trapped. Jin Taiha stands in the red-lit elevator as the doors close, noting that he offered plenty of chances. Our protagonist draws his twin tactical blades and announces that it is finally his turn. Inside the red-lit elevator, our protagonist finally corners Nameless as the doors seal them in together. Because the assassin previously used a series of flashy distractions, like toppling utility poles, to lure Taiha into this empty building, Taiha was busy reading his hand. Because the hero has already identified every card the assassin plays, he makes it clear that the price for this game must now be paid. Suddenly, the confined space erupts into violence as Nameless lunges forward. Luckily, our hero is no longer feigning the slight sluggishness he showed earlier. He blocks the strikes and matches the assassin's frantic speed with a level of focus that leaves Nameless sweating in shock. Taiha maneuvers through the elevator with ghostly efficiency, moving so fast that he appears behind the assassin before the man can even register the shift. Because our protagonist sees through the assassin's teleportation tricks, he dismissively notes that the boy is an open book. As the elevator arrives at its destination with a heavy boom, the hero delivers a series of lightning-fast strikes. He mocks the assassin's desperation, noting that there was only one way out of the elevator, and he was already standing at the exit. This forced Nameless into a corner where his only option was a predictable last-ditch struggle. The fight spills out of the lift, and strangely, our protagonist's knife snaps during a heavy clash. Nameless laughs manically, revealing that the weapon was actually a flawed piece he had forged himself during his undercover years. However, his triumph is short-lived. Because the hero doesn't rely solely on his tools, he suddenly grips Nameless by the mouth to silence him. With a powerful surge, our boy slams the assassin through a glass window, sending them both plummeting toward the street in a shower of shards. They crash onto the pavement, but the hero lands on his feet with practiced ease while Nameless lies broken in the dust. Taiha calmly flicks open a lighter to start a cigar, his silhouette stark against the darkness. He admits that Nameless is naturally gifted, but he points out a fatal flaw in the boy's character: betrayal. Because the veteran Gwangsu-gu took him in and treated him like family, the hero finds the assassin's treachery unforgivable. Furthermore, Taiha reveals a tactical irony. Since Nameless used a poisoned blade to strike the hero's knife repeatedly, the venom actually transferred back onto the assassin during the struggle. Luckily for the traitor, a brief flashback reveals that Gwangsu-gu's final request was for the boy's life to be spared. Out of respect for the old man's unwavering loyalty, our protagonist decides to let Nameless live this once. He leaves the broken assassin behind, walking into the daylight with a warning that this luck won't happen a second time. Meanwhile, inside the corporate high-rise, Jin Chung is celebrating what he believes is a total victory. He sips a drink dismissively while Myung-gi Kim confirms that the neutral board member, Do Kyung-han, has agreed to cast the deciding vote for the chairmanship. When Cheong's phone vibrates with an incoming call, he arrogantly assumes it's a confirmation of Taiha's death. He tosses the phone to Baek Junsu, ordering the security chief to ensure the hero's body is dissolved for a clean disposal. He even instructs Junsu to dispose of Nameless at the same time, viewing the failed assassin as a dog that can't be retrained. Baek Junsu walks into the hallway and answers the call, but the voice on the other end isn't a mercenary. It is our protagonist, Taiha explains that he is glad that it is Junsu on the phone because he knew Jin Cheong would be too cowardly to stay on the line. As he stands outside the Chiangu building looking up at the lights, Taiha gives him a final choice: come out and face him, or wait for the hero to head inside. Because he successfully neutralized the assassin Nameless, Jin Taiha now feels ready to confront the man at the center of the conspiracy, Baek Junsu. Our boy doesn't waste time with empty pleasantries, coldly ordering the security chief to come outside unless he wants the hero to let himself in. Junsu remains disturbingly calm, looking out over the city lights as he questions if the hero is merely stalling. He mockingly asks if our protagonist is afraid of failing as he did years ago. This provocation leads our boy to reflect on his original motive. Initially, his return was fueled by a simple, raw desire for revenge for the murder of his family. However, because the situation has grown more complex, he has changed his mind. He wants to know the logic behind Junsu's double betrayal, first of the late chairman and then of Guho Jin. Taiha realizes that despite the shifting power at the top, Junsu is still exactly where he was 17 years ago, serving as the head of security. Through the phone, Junsu offers a metaphorical explanation. He compares himself to a wild beast that would sacrifice everything for its offspring, but would just as reverently snap the neck of a child that is sick or failing to grow. He claims that Cheonggu is not a family heirloom but a legal entity that must be preserved at any cost. Because his original vow to Chairman Seoko Jin was to safeguard the company above all else, he views the murder of Taiha's parents as a necessary sacrifice for that greater cause. Our hero's expression hardens as he realizes the absolute nonsense used to justify his parents' blood. He decides there is nothing more to hear. Just as his hand reaches for the tactical blades behind his back, he realizes that Junsu has already exited the building and is standing directly behind him. Strangely, Junsu begins to use firm hand signals, which leaves our boy in a moment of genuine shock. He wonders what kind of sign language the man is using, but he doesn't have time to process it before a new figure, Do-kyung Han, appears behind him with an intense, neutral gaze. This sudden movement forces our protagonist to hunch low and leap forward to create distance. Baek Junsu clarifies that he didn't come down to trade blows yet, noting that Nameless was never the person the company was truly waiting for. Because the board meeting is the proper arena for their conflict, Junsu and Do-kyung Han simply turn and walk away, leaving our hero clenching his knife in the middle of the parking lot. While the tension at headquarters simmers, the scene shifts to a cigar lounge where Jae-pil Kim receives a report. He learns that the bounty hunters, Pitcher and Batter, have been decimated by the hero. Because the Dobang Association is now involved, Jae-pil realizes the vice chairman, Gwang-hoo Yang, has resorted to calling in external mercenaries since Junsu aligned with the rival faction. He concludes that this is no longer a petty family feud, but a full-scale corporate war. Meanwhile, Vice Chairman Gwang-hoo Yang is busy with a far more lethal preparation. Inside a secret facility, he watches a technician detonate a ceramic explosive that completely shreds a mannequin's torso. Because these explosives are piezoelectric and ceramic-based, they can bypass any metal detector. Yang has secretly installed these devices into every chair designated for his rivals at the board table. He remains unfazed by the unknown location of Jin Taiha, believing that no one can redress the years of wrongs he has endured except for himself. As the day of the meeting arrives, an eerie calm settles over the country, soon replaced by a media frenzy. Reporters swarm the building, confused because no board members have entered through the garage. However, they are stunned to see the lobby packed with the core personnel of Cheonggu security, signaling that a major event is imminent. High above in a luxury office, Jin Cheong laughs at the spectacle. He suspects Jae-pil Kim leaked the meeting info to prevent a quiet coup, but he remains arrogant. When his subordinate, Myung-gi Kim, mentions that Taiha still hasn't been located and that Junsu has moved all security to the first floor, Cheong dismisses the danger. He mocks the idea that our boy would ever have the nerve to use the front door under the gaze of 1,000 cameras. Luckily for the narrative, he is completely wrong. Moving with a quiet authority, our hero, dressed in a sharp suit, walks directly through the crowd of reporters. Because he is reclaiming his inheritance, he ignores the flashing cameras and heads straight for the main entrance. On the 36th floor of Cheonggu's headquarters, a set of ornate double doors has remained sealed for months. This is the chairman's office, a space reserved for the elite who reign over the company, and because of its status, it is a prize coveted by many. Currently, the silence of this hall is broken by a ringing gong as a shamanic rite takes place inside. Within the room, a shaman in red robes performs a ritual dance, surrounded by drummers and half-naked men. In the center of this display, Vice Chairman Gwang-hoo Yang is dancing vigorously before a table of offerings, shouting with an intensity that borders on the theatrical. Outside in the quiet corridor, the stoic Baek Junsu stands guard, serving as the manager of the 36th floor, while this spiritual display continues. From his office, Jin Cheong watches the scene with a smirk, explaining to a confused Myung-gi Kim that the vice chairman is likely using the right to celebrate his anticipated rise to the chairmanship. However, Jin Chong reveals a darker logic behind the old man's excitement. While most people attribute the historical massacre of the Loyalists to Jin Chong's late father, the reality is far more gruesome. Because his father wanted a watchful eye on his rival, Jin Chong witnessed firsthand that it was actually the vice chairman who tortured the Loyalists to death. A traumatic memory surfaces of a torture room where a bloodied man is tied up, screaming in agony. The man pleads that he simply respected the late chairman and knows nothing of a Loyalist party, but Vice Chairman Yang looms over him with cutting tools. Yang demands to know the family secrets, threatening the man with death for his silence. Back in the present, Jin Chong is wondering whether he or the rabid vice chairman will be the one to eventually take our protagonist's head. The focus shifts to the building's entrance, where news crews are struggling to get footage of the blocked-off lobby. Amidst the crowd, Tai Ha-jin is bumped from behind but continues walking toward the entrance. The reporters don't recognize him, assuming he is merely a new hire. Inside the lobby, security guards Hwang Junhyuk and Moon Youngmin watch our boy approach. While Junhyuk is stunned, Youngmin finds it unbelievable that the hero is actually serious about walking into the building. Tai-ha maintains his confidence, recalling a conversation he had by the bed of the poisoned Gwangsu-gu. Because Gwangsu had been hospitalized, our protagonist was curious why the man never fled the country after the massacre of the Loyalists, especially since Cheongu had become a place devoid of hope. Gwangsu offered a peaceful smile, explaining that he remained because he held a blind, resolute conviction that someone would one day come to continue the late chairman's footsteps. It was this impossible baseline conviction that forced Cheongu to keep a spy like Nameless by his side for years. Suddenly, the lobby is filled with a deafening order for everyone to stand at attention. A highly trained security unit, Team Black, marches in under the command of Captain Vue Kim. Because the next chairman is to be elected today, Vue Kim issues a lethal warning to kill anyone who dares pose a threat. Hwang Junhyuk recognizes Vue as the captain of an elite espionage unit that has seen far more field experience than the headquarters personnel. Because Vice Chairman Yang successfully recruited them, the lobby is now a tiger's den with 400 of Cheongu's best ready to pounce. Moon Youngmin narrows his eyes, realizing that while the security personnel serve different factions, their mission to safeguard the company remains a common goal. He watches our hero continue to walk forward, thinking that no matter how suave the guy appears, he is walking into a trap. As the guards prepare to seal the area and pull the shutters, a pistol slide snaps into place. Our hero stops in his tracks, but instead of drawing a weapon, he raises his voice to address the massive force. He shouts with a resolve that echoes through the hall, identifying himself as the grandson of Seoko Jin and the son of Suyok Jin. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd, and even Vice Chairman Yang's eyes bug out in shock. Our hero declares that although he escaped an ambush 17 years ago, his arduous journey has finally brought him home to honor his grandfather's final wishes. He holds up the sleek black fountain pen, asking if anyone present still recognizes the symbol of his inheritance. Hwang Junhyuk's skeptical expression instantly freezes as he hears heavy footsteps approaching the hero. A series of flashbacks reveal the depth of the vice chairman's internal conflict. During his shamanic rite, he had prayed for judgment for his past sins while asking for blessings upon Seoko's heir. In a stunning display, Vice Chairman Yang, the man who once tortured loyalists, is the one who kneels before our protagonist. Following his lead, every security guard in the lobby drops to their knees simultaneously, shouting a welcome to the young master. Reporters and high-ranking officials gape in absolute disbelief as the vice chairman presses his head to the floor, tearfully apologizing for failing in his duty to look after the company. While Jin Chong can only laugh manically in his office at the shift in power, our hero remains cold and determined. He looks forward to the kneeling army and simply states that the board meeting awaits and commands the group to move. Because he has just publicly identified himself as the son of Suyok Jin, the gathered reporters and staff look on in absolute shock, whispering and questioning if the man before them truly is the heir who disappeared 17 years ago. Our hero moves with unwavering determination, his silver cross necklace visible as he passes the stunned crowd. Watching this from the sidelines, Youngmin Moon is left in total disbelief. He is visibly sweating as he tries to process the logic of the scene. He knows the vice chairman was the one who supposedly massacred the loyalists, yet here the man is, acting as a loyalist himself with the elite Team Black by his side. Because of this apparent betrayal, Hwang Junhyuk readies his weapon and calls for his team to prepare for an incoming threat. However, when he questions why they aren't fighting yet, Youngmin hesitates. He realizes that even with the vice chairman's shift in loyalty, his own security forces still outnumber Team Black 3-1. Our protagonist's presence creates a desperate situation for Youngmin. He clenches his pistol, realizing that if this isn't resolved immediately, Chiang may fail to win the directorate's vote. This realization darkens his expression behind his glasses, because a failure here would ruin his career and force him to answer for his own failure during the incident at the annex. He feels his life is effectively over if he doesn't act. Strangely, the tension is interrupted by the arrival of Haran Yon. As an external director for the Chiangu group, she approaches the chaos with a smile, asking what all the ruckus is about. Vice Chairman Guanghu Yong remains stoic, explaining that he has urgently summoned our boy as a key witness for the board meeting. He clarifies the stakes. Because our hero witnessed both the yacht incident 17 years ago and the recent Jin family murders at the Gangbuk Annex, his testimony is vital. He warns the security teams that if these incidents are traced back to the company, they must be treated as a deliberate, organized coup for power. Luckily, Heron Yan finds the situation interesting and decides to lead the way. She notes that ensuring Cheongu plays by the book is her official business, and she mockingly addresses our protagonist as young master as they head toward the elevator. Inside the VVIP elevator, the air is thick with questioning. Heron leans against the wall asking the vice chairman if his hunger for power was all an act. She wonders if he spent decades pretending just to prove his loyalty to a dead man, or if he was simply biding his time for the heir's return. The vice chairman admits that he was actually unaware of the hero's survival until the former vice president of security, Guangsu, contacted him. Because he saw the photo released for the bounty hunt, he finally realized his long vigil had been rewarded. As the elevator arrives, he asks Heron a seemingly random question about whether her childhood elementary school is still around. When she laughs and says it's long gone, he explains that seeing a part of one's past fade away is bittersweet. He reflects that while she only spent 6 years there, he has been with this company for 30 years. To him, if the company disappeared, it would feel as if his very existence had been erased. This is why he endured everything. He held on to ensure that madmen wouldn't bring Cheongu to ruin. The group finally enters the large boardroom for the 81st Directorate meeting, announced formally as they step inside. Myung-gi Kim, Pyodo Jang, and Do-gyung Han watch intently as Harin Yeon takes her seat at the head of the table. She introduces our hero as a key witness, seating him directly opposite his smiling rival, Cheong Jin. The meeting is officially opened, but the agenda is immediately derailed by Taichu Oh, an executive director and staunch Cheong supporter. He slams his hands on the table, shouting that seating a wanted fugitive in a corporate boardroom is an outrage. Vice Chairman Yang attempts to explain that the man is a witness for Director Yan, but Taichu Oh interrupts him, arguing that the annex murders are a matter for law enforcement, not the board. He mocks the vice chairman's age and suggests he is shamelessly grappling at any rope to reach the 36th floor, causing the other supporters to burst into laughter. Our protagonist remains calm and begins to recite a specific list of names. He identifies several elite mercenaries, including Captain Yuri Nikolin of the private firm Watercall. He taps a gloved finger on the table, naming Vladimir Ilyin, Harry Felt, Liam Jackson, and others. He recalls a flashback of himself on a sinking, blood-splattered ship 17 years ago. He explains that of the 8 men who infiltrated the yacht, he has already dealt with 7. Because the last man, a Korean speaker, escaped him that night, our boy is surprised to find him sitting right there at the Cheongu board table. Taichuo breaks into a sweat, frantically demanding proof and claiming our hero might as well say he fought 7,000 men. Our hero looks at him with a cold gaze, stating that proof isn't how he works. He points out that Taichu is failing to read the room. Because Insu Kim is dead, the Jin family has been massacred, and Director Hong is missing. Taichu has no ground left to stand on. Having effectively silenced the room with this visceral reality check, our protagonist looks directly at the terrified director and prepares to speak. As Guangsu-gu has a debt of loyalty to repay, he prepares for his mission at the liquor pub by snapping a tactical knife into its sheath and holstering a handgun. He conceals these weapons under his suit jacket, but before he can depart, a blue van arrives. Suri-yoon and Gray offer him a ride, noting that he looks ready to head toward Cheongu. Guangsu is initially shocked to see the pair from the town that treated his injuries, and he warns them that this is a life-or-death situation rather than a game. Suri simply tips her cap and interrupts him, explaining that they understand the danger perfectly because they have dealt with our hero's reckless ways before. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere turns clinical as Jin Taiha critiques the country's revised inheritance and gift tax law. He explains that Article 1 of this act, which fosters national wealth by exempting intangible assets like stocks from taxation when passed to blood relatives, was passed just 2 months before the yacht ambush. Because of this timely legislation, Guho Jin was able to inherit the combined 28.5% holding of Cheongu shares without a tax burden. When Taichu Oh tries to dismiss this as a common legal benefit, Vice Chairman Guanghu Yang silences him. The Vice Chairman slams the table, reminding Taichu that the emergency committee purged the loyalists and handed Guho the chairmanship just 1 week after the funeral, a coup that only allowed Taichu to sit at the table because his seniors were dismissed. Our protagonist then challenges the board to consider a string of suspicious events as mere coincidences. He notes that the broker who smuggled him into Korea was Cheongu affiliated. The unguarded Insu Kim was his first target, and the Jin family just happened to hold their meeting at the exact villa from his childhood. He points out that Jin Chong was the only survivor of that massacre and questions the chance encounter with Huimin of the Oseong faction. Because the board is stunned by the mention of Oseong, Taiha provides the missing logic. He reveals through flashbacks that Jin Chong hired Huimin to find Insu Kim's killer to avoid using Cheonggu security. Our hero explains that this was a move to gain leverage. By involving an established council member like Oseong, Jin Chong was securing future support for his own chairmanship. Harin Yan realizes this was a solitary power play, as Chiang wanted to join the council alone. This revelation forces Vice Chairman Yang to his feet. He screams for a point of order, moving to adjourn the meeting and form an emergency committee to investigate the yacht incident and the recent murders. He insists on summoning Huimin for questioning, noting that the board's legitimacy is currently in doubt. When Harin Yan asks for a response, Jin Chong initially sits in a silent, sweating rage while wiping his forehead with a striped cloth. Suddenly, Jin Chong shifts into a dramatic, emotional performance. He looks up with a pained expression, accusing the vice chairman of turning away from the truth out of a greed for power. He clutches his chest and trembles while gripping his ornate cane, asking who spilled the blood of their allies and who tore through his own Achilles' heel. He shouts at the board, demanding to know why his sacrifices for the company are being ignored. Our hero watches the display, realizing that Chiang is far more dangerous than the board understands. A red aura begins to rise around Chiang's hand as he grips his cane. With a demonic grin, Jin Chong makes a move that no one expected. He declares that since he is accused of killing his father for wealth, he will return his entire inherited share, including his grandfather's portion, to the state. This calculated act of corporate sabotage leaves Vice Chairman Yang in a state of absolute terror. This calculated move is framed as a philanthropic gesture to support the National Pension Fund, but the logic behind it is far more sinister. Because this donation would prevent equity depreciation from a sudden supply shock, it allows Chiang to appear selfless while effectively weaponizing his grandfather's legacy. Vice Chairman Yang watches in grim suspicion, realizing that by threatening to give away the shares, Chiang is testing the loyalists' resolve. Strangely, Yang begins to wonder if Chiang has secured backing from the powerful Eternal Life sect to maintain his influence even without those shares. Jin Taiha remains cold and unimpressed by the performance. He dismissively tells Chiang to do as he pleases with the money, but he demands that the board immediately reopen investigations into the recent villa massacre and the yacht incident from 17 years ago. This demand triggers an outburst from director Jae-soo Cheon, a supporter of the vice chairman, who slams his fists on the table. He argues that Chiang's eligibility to inherit anything must be determined before the shares are discussed. The confrontation turns visceral when director Cheon accuses Jin Cheong of being a monster. He reveals a horrifying secret. Under the guise of finding the villa killer, Chiang lured the remaining immediate families of his deceased uncles to a restaurant and executed them all. Because a janitor witnessed the slaughter from a storage room, the board finally has a lead on Cheong's true nature. Jin Chong, however, remains eerily calm. He mocks the lack of physical evidence and questions the credibility of a mere janitor, using a smooth, reasonable tone to mask his predatory instincts. Watching this exchange, our hero feels a deep sense of unease. Even though he knows every word out of Chiang's mouth is a lie, the man's charisma is so suffocating that Taiha feels like he is being coiled by a serpent. Realizing that Chiang is stalling for a specific reason, our protagonist urgently requests that the meeting be adjourned. However, the opposition from Chiang's loyalists is immediate. To keep the momentum, Jin Chung proposes a compromise. He suggests the election proceed immediately, with the understanding that even if he wins, his formal installment will be deferred for a month while the investigations are completed. Vice Chairman Yang is skeptical, noting that a real investigation would take at least 6 months. But Chiang aggressively pressures him. He accuses the vice chairman of wanting to hold the acting chairman title indefinitely to sway the results. Under the guidance of the chairperson, Seong-han Lee, the board proceeds to a vote. The vice chairman calculates his odds, believing the vote will result in a tie because of director Ingyu's absence. Unfortunately, the logic of the vice chairman's plan collapses in a moment of absolute betrayal. Just as the count reaches 7 for Jin Chung, the loyalist director Pyodo Jang slowly raises his hand. The room is paralyzed with shock as Pyodo, trembling and sweating, aligns himself with Cheong. Vice Chairman Yang realizes with horror that the words Cheong spoke earlier about not being a monster were a coded signal specifically for Pyodo. In a flash of realization, the vice chairman looks at the boardroom chairs. He had originally instructed Pyodo to install ceramic explosives in the seats of Cheong's supporters to be used as a last resort if Cheong turned to violence. Because Pyodo has switched sides, the trigger is now in the wrong hands. Pyodo Jang, consumed by fear and guilt, presses the remote trigger. Our hero lunges to save the vice chairman, shouting for everyone to get down, but it is too late. A violent explosion rips through the boardroom, sending a spray of blood against the high-rise windows. While the loyalist supporters are decimated in their chairs, Jin Chong sits perfectly still, his face and suit splattered with the blood of his rivals. Amidst the carnage and the screams of the dying, the chairperson, a secret Cheong supporter, calmly continues the proceedings. He slams the gavel twice, officially declaring Jin Cheong the new chairman of Cheonggu. Jin Cheong casually wipes blood from his face with a handkerchief. He looks at the dead bodies and mocks the roaches who thought they could hide from him. Our protagonist, sitting over the unconscious vice chairman and covered in the blood of the fallen, glares back at the new chairman with eyes burning with murderous rage. Our protagonist, streaked with blood and sweat, demands to know how Cheong could be insane enough to orchestrate a massacre in broad daylight. Strangely, Jin Cheong remains remarkably casual, even cheerful. He dismissively deflects the blame onto the traitorous Pyoto, suggesting the man simply had his own reasons for the stunt. Because Cheong feels untouchable, he mocks the foolishness of those who dared to poke a sleeping bear like himself. This arrogance triggers an immediate reaction from Heir and Yan. The director, contorted with fury at being caught in the blast, launches a sudden assault. Unfortunately, her strike never reaches its target. The elite enforcer, Do Gyung-han, intercedes with a cold efficiency, grabbing Heron's arm mid-strike. While she snarls at the leashless mutt to let her go, Cheong remains perfectly still. He deceptively reminds her that he wasn't the one who physically set the bombs, suggesting her murderous intent is misdirected. Seizing the moment, our hero leaps over a desk, hurtling through the air with a tactical blade. Cheong merely glances up, seemingly unbothered, as Do Gyung-han delivers a devastating mid-air kick that sends Taiha reeling across the room. Heron Yan, pushed back by the shockwaves of the struggle, decides to shed her outer garment and prepare for a real fight. She declares that rather than reporting this to her sisters in the Yon household, she will simply finish Cheong right here. Our protagonist stands tall, face to face with the new chairman, vowing that their conflict ends today. However, the intervention of a pained groan from behind breaks his focus. Luckily, Vice Chairman Yang has survived the blast. While the injured elder struggles to his feet, Jin Cheong is already moving to the next phase of his plan. He places a call to Junsu Baek, issuing a command to alert the entire building that Taiha and the Loyalists have orchestrated a suicide bombing. Because of this lie, the lobby transforms into a kill zone. Moon Young-min, hearing the announcement, realizes the civil war has officially begun. A Loyalist guard is shot through the head instantly, spraying blood across the lobby glass. Hwang Junhyuk, casually blowing a bubble of pink gum, draws his handgun and accepts the grim reality. It is now open war. Back in the boardroom, our protagonist assesses his rapidly shrinking options. He realizes that if he doesn't kill Cheong now, he might never get another chance, especially with Do Gyung's backup on the way. He is haunted by the voices of his past, his grandfather's final wish for him to inherit the company, and the Loyalists who knelt before him in hope. Just as Taiha prepares for a final lunge, Vice Chairman Yang reaches out and grabs his arm. Recognizing that they are surrounded, our boy logically suggests they vacate the area while they can. The Vice Chairman, finding renewed strength in the hero's resolve, confirms he can move on his own. Taiha turns back to Cheong one last time, promising that luck won't save him a third time. Cheong merely smiles back, ominously suggesting that Taiha won't live long enough to see a next time. The two move into a dark corridor, but when Taiha suggests the stairs to avoid guarded elevators, Yang stops him. Strangely, the vice chairman insists the elevators will be fine. Because he anticipated Cheong's treachery, Yang had secretly ordered a security check on the transport routes beforehand. The elevator chime rings, and as the doors slide open, our hero is met with a scene of absolute carnage. The interior is piled high with the unconscious and bleeding bodies of Cheonggu security guards. Standing over the pile is Vui Kim, the captain of Team Black, calmly wiping blood from his blade. Because the young master has officially returned to claim his throne, Vui Kim offers a loyal smile. He reminds Taiha that he no longer stands alone, apologizing for the delay before inviting the hero to begin their escape. Outside the Cheonggu headquarters, the situation has escalated into a public lockdown. Police officers have cordoned off the area, using traffic batons to force the media away from the sealed main entrance. While journalists grumble that the security is overkill, their skepticism vanishes when a heavy gunfire echoes from behind the tightly closed metal shutters. Inside the lobby, the building has transformed into a war zone. A massive brawl is underway between rival security factions, with the area descending into a chaos of physical strikes and close-quarters combat. Youngmin Moon attempts to maintain the advantage by ordering his forces to spread out, utilizing handguns to prevent the opposition from closing in. However, Team Black is not easily deterred. Group 2 leader Asura is forced to take cover behind a desk as bullets shred the furniture around him. He realizes with gritted teeth that the opposition has officially lost their minds, declaring an all-out war in the heart of their own headquarters. Luckily, the Loyalists coordinate their counterattack with clinical precision. When a Team Black member is staggered by a bullet that grazes and mangles his ear, he doesn't retreat. Instead, he holds the side of his head as blood sprays from the wound, using himself as a human shield to clear a path. This allows Asura and another member to dash forward. The brutality of the lobby fight intensifies as a bald security guard is neutralized by a headshot, while Team Black members use brute force to shove enemy guards backward, clearing the corridors for their advance. The tide continues to turn as Eerie Kang, a scarred Team Black leader, lunges into the fray. He uses a tactical knife to slash through multiple opponents simultaneously. This entry into the battle leads to a direct metal-on-metal clash with Yongmin Moon. As their blades lock, Yongmin glares, mocking Eerie for returning to Korea after being booted overseas. Eerie Kang notes that it's been a long time, but mockingly points out that Yongmin should have listened to his advice about losing the glasses, since he's finally gone and lost an eye. While the lobby burns, a building-wide intercom broadcast confirms a large-scale terrorist attack, sending terrified employees scurrying for safe rooms. In a darkened office littered with dead guards, Jin Taiha stands accompanied by Captain Vui Kim and Vice Chairman Yang. The vice chairman logically concludes that because most employees were told to work from home for security reasons, these broadcasts are likely a desperate attempt to lure them out of hiding. Taiha notes that the security in the upper floors seems lacking for such a brazen coup, which Yang explains is because the bulk of Cheong's forces are likely busy subduing the media frenzy on the ground floor. Captain Vui Kim confirms that by using the board's private elevator, they have successfully reached the executive lobby on the 11th floor. He analyzes a blueprint of the building, deciding they must use the emergency stairwells on either side of the building to descend. He believes that moving between the two will help them catch the enemy off guard. Taiha somberly acknowledges that under normal circumstances, using any elevator would have been a death sentence. As they begin their descent through a creaking stairwell, Vice Chairman Yang's head begins to clear, allowing him to piece together Cheong's strategy. He realizes that even if the traitor Pyoto hadn't set the bomb off, Cheong would have become chairman anyway by securing 8 votes. However, Cheong deliberately provoked Pyoto, a devoted family man, into pressing the detonator by threatening him. Yang concludes that Cheong cannot allow any loyalists to live because reinvestigations into the Villa massacre and the yacht incident would strip him of everything he's gained. Captain Vui Kim realizes that their survival is a direct hit to Cheong's legitimacy, making it imperative that they escape. While the others focus on flight, our hero walks in the shadows, silently wondering if simply running away is the best way to land a blow on the new chairman. Meanwhile, on the 36th floor, Jin Chong walks toward the chairman's office with Moon Dane. He is annoyed that the elevators weren't shut down in time to catch the rats. Moon Dane boredly admits she stayed away because she knew she would lose the fight. Chong finds her honesty almost amusing, noting he can't even cut her pay since there's nothing left. The new chairman finally meets with the stoic Baek Junsu. As Cheong steps forward, he demands the keys to the 36th floor, celebrating the fact that he has delivered on his promise. Baek Junsu drops the ring of keys into Cheong's hand with a warning not to disappoint the company. Moon Dane watches silently as Cheong clenches the keys, eager to finally see the famed office. When Junsu suggests they evacuate via helicopter due to the danger, Cheong refuses with an arrogant smirk. He is the chairman now, and he refuses to run away from his own building like he did before. Instead, he issues his first official command. He wants Baek Junsu to kill Taiha and every loyalist bastard, demanding their heads by the end of the day. In the center of the Cheongu lobby, the chaotic civil war reaches a fever pitch as security forces engage in a brutal melee. Because the red-haired Asura, a leader of Team Black, understands that their opponents are largely gym brats, trained for corporate protection rather than war, he orders his men to close the distance. He knows that these sheltered guards are vulnerable in close-quarters combat, and he intends to show them the reality of a true fight. Amidst the screaming and the screeching of bodies sliding across the floor, Eerie Kang appears with a manic grin. As a group leader of Team Black, he carries a golden tactical knife and moves with a lethal fluidity that his former subordinate, Yongmin Moon, can barely track. Because Eerie Kang used to be Yongmin's mentor, he mocks the younger man's lack of progress, questioning if his training stopped the moment he joined the Jin family. Yongmin can only grit his teeth in frustration, realizing that while he was sheltered at headquarters, these abandoned dogs were gaining real-world experience struggling to survive overseas. As their blades clash, Yongmin feels the weight of a physical and mental wall. This triggers a memory of a past failure at the villa, where Baek Junsu had calmly demoted him. At the time, Yongmin had argued that no one at Cheongu posed a threat to them, but Junsu had correctly identified the gap in his spirit. Because Yongmin lacked the confidence to face our protagonist again, Junsu realized he had sheltered his student too much, preventing him from overcoming the hurdles that a true predator like Taiha represents. The lobby fight is suddenly interrupted by the roar of machine guns as a hail of bullets shreds the area. A bald man named Pyongwon Ho, known as the Mad Tiger, drops with 2 heavy LMGs. Because he is the vice president of security and a reckless combat instructor, he fires indiscriminately, hitting his own men just as often as the enemy. This erratic behavior leaves even the veteran Asura wondering if the high-ranking leadership has finally gone senile as Pyongwon-ho seems more interested in carnage than tactical precision. Meanwhile, on the floors above, our hero continues his descent. He neutralizes a tactical guard with a clean strike to the neck, noting that the concentration of heavily armed forces on the first floor feels like a deliberate attempt to trap them. Vice Chairman Yong explains that these forces are likely part of Yong Mu-dai, a secret private military project that the Mad Tiger kept running despite board regulations. As the group rushes to back up their allies, Taiha receives a frantic call from Gray. Luckily, Gray has information that changes the momentum of the escape. He reveals that Taiha's guy has already coordinated with the outside. Suddenly, Asura reaches a control panel and slams the keypad, causing the mechanical heavy security blinds to begin to lift. While the confused guards scramble to block the exits, Pyongwon-ho attempts to taunt Asura for quitting without notice. Strangely, Asura merely smiles back, because he knows the reinforcements have arrived. A blue van, driven by Unsuri, comes speeding through the entrance with a violent crash. The impact sends the Mad Tiger flying into the stairs, clearing the path for a new arrival. Gwangsu-gu, the former co-president of security and a legendary loyalist, steps out of the van and clicks his gun into place. After 17 years away, he looks at the crumbling headquarters with a grim expression, noting that the hellish nature of the company hasn't changed a bit. Asura looks toward the vehicle with a confident grin, asking if the timing was deliberate. Gwangsu-gu, stepping back into the company that once ousted him, dismisses the idea of a planned entrance, noting that no one would intentionally time a return to such a mess. As the smoke clears, the rival security guards begin to sweat in panic. While the younger men wonder if this is a new enemy, the veteran Hwang Junhyuk admits he hasn't seen that face in years. Suddenly, machine gun is raised through the lobby, immediately spraying a barrage of bullets. This forced the guards to scramble for cover as Pyongwon-ho snarls at the sight of his direct senior. Pyongwon-ho stands up with a heavy firearm, mockingly identifying Gwangsu as the man who was fired for backing the wrong people. Gwangsu-gu remains calm, retorting that he prefers to be known as the loyalist who resigned instead. This exchange leaves the rank-and-file guards trembling. They realize Gwangsu is the legend who originally built the entire Chiangu security system alongside Baek Junsu. While the stalemate holds, Unsuri and Gray exit the van, shocked by the wreckage of the lobby. Asura is initially confused by the presence of these brats, but Gwangsu insists they are trustworthy. He explains that Gray is a skilled data broker, while Suri was trained as a successor to the powerful Yeon family. Because of their specialized skills, the pair immediately sprints toward the elevator to reach the control room on the first basement floor. Unfortunately, Pyongwon-ho orders his men to kill the intruders. As the guards take aim, Gwangsu-gu lunges forward, grabbing a man's arm to force the muzzle toward the floor. He begins a brutal lecture on combat, delivering a series of powerful strikes while critiquing the guards' poor grip and failure to manage recoil. He slams and kicks the men away, disgusted that the company's combat instructors have allowed the standards to rot so thoroughly. After Gwangsu decimates the initial squad, Iri Kang orders the rest of Team Black to move in. Pyongwon-ho clicks his tongue in annoyance and prepares to fire, but Gwangsu lunges at him. In a display of pure ruthlessness, the Mad Tiger yanks one of his own men forward to act as a human shield. Because he cares more about efficiency than life, he fires a bullet directly through his own pleading subordinate to hit Gwangsu, then slashes outward with a knife. When Gwangsu expresses his fury at the use of a human shield, Pyongwon-ho simply laughs, stating it is only right to remove useless weights from the payroll. As the two exchange heavy blows, the scene shifts to a memory from 2 days ago. Gwangsu had met with Asura to identify the biggest threats within the current board. Asura warned him about Pyongwon-ho, recounting a horrific incident in the Middle East where Pyongwon murdered 16 hostages, and the terrorists alike just to vanish with the ransom. Strangely, Baek Junsu had personally retrieved this killer from Oman, claiming that Chiangu needed absolute power, regardless of the moral cost. Back in the present, the intensity of the duel causes Gwangsu's knife to shatter against Pyongwon's weapon. The Mad Tiger laughs at the broken blade, but Gwangsu remains unbowed as he leans against the wall. He admits that he originally planned to avoid unnecessary confrontations today, but Pyongwon's lack of humanity has forced his hand. A red aura of fury begins to radiate from Gwangsu as he stands up, declaring that the Mad Tiger must die. The history of Pyongwon, the Mad Tiger currently terrorizing the lobby, is rooted in a blood-soaked scandal in the Middle East. Years ago, a militant group seized 16 Korean missionaries in a desert trench, demanding a staggering $50 million for their release. Because the Korean government refused to pay such an exorbitant sum, the terrorists began executing hostages every hour to prove their resolve. During the subsequent negotiations, 2 government officials desperately tried to lower the price, but the militants remained indifferent, executing another hostage mid-conversation to show they weren't bluffing. While the negotiators panicked over the budget, Pyongwon, then a member of the covert Team Red, grew disgusted by the cowardice on both sides. He viewed the terrorists as oxygen wasters and the negotiators as fools ready to squander his precious tax money. As a result, Pyongwon abandoned diplomacy entirely. He opened fire, slaughtering everyone in the room, hostages, terrorists, and negotiators alike. The media later covered the incident as a deadly shootout resulting from high tensions, reporting that all parties were found dead except for one Team Red operative. Crucially, the $20 million arranged for the negotiation went missing from the scene. 6 months later, Pyongwon was living in a luxury villa in Oman, believing he had successfully swept everything under the rug. However, he was tracked down by Asura and Baek Junsu. Pyongwon was initially arrogant, believing no one from the Chiangu group could handle a soldier who had survived a hideout full of terrorists. This forced Junsu to intervene personally. During a violent clash, Junsu easily overpowered Pyongwon, pinning him by the throat. Strangely, Junsu hadn't come for the stolen money. He realized that if Pyongwon had truly wanted the cash, he would have taken it before the negotiations even started. Pyongwon admitted with a manic grin that he destroyed the negotiations simply because he couldn't stand clowns who thought money could fix everything, claiming he saved Korea from becoming a laughingstock. Because Junsu was looking for individuals with that specific brand of lethal conviction, he chose to recruit the Mad Tiger into Chiangu's private ranks. In the present, Vice Chairman Gwang-hoo Young reveals to our protagonist that Junsu's legendary loyalty wasn't always as unshakable as it seemed. 18 years ago, about a year before the yacht incident, the late chairman Seoko Jin expressed deep hesitation about joining the council. Because Guho Jin, the eldest son, was pushing for the alliance, the chairman frequently traveled abroad to seek other counsel, often confiding in the vice chairman about his doubts regarding the council's entrenched corruption. Unfortunately, this absence allowed Guho to build a secret rapport with Chiangu security. A year later, the yacht incident occurred, and it was no coincidence that Junsu, the chairman's personal shield, was mysteriously absent. Our hero realizes that Junsu's philosophy of true power leading the rest likely made him susceptible to Guho's ambitions. Captain Vui Kim sheds further light on Junsu's true nature. He explains that Chiangu security once housed a special ops division, a brutal training ground where each cohort competed to become Junsu's worthy successor. While Junsu appeared to be a devoted mentor who won loyalty through physical and mental training, he actually viewed his men as mere stock. To him, the security firm was a ranch where he could breed and identify the single best warhorse. Because Vui and the other Team Black leaders were disposed of overseas once they were no longer useful, they know the cold logic behind Junsu's mask. They understand that the very chairmanship of Chiangu only exists because Junsu allows it. He is the great power that defines the company, and he is a beast that will mercilessly snap the neck of any offspring or leader that falls sick or fails to grow. As the group moves through the stairwell, our protagonist suddenly stops. He asks Vui Kim to buy him time, a request that causes the vice chairman to panic. Gwang-hoo Young begs our boy to hide and bide his time, fearing that facing a monster like Junsu now will result in certain death. However, our hero refuses to run. He reflects on the legacy of his grandfather, his parents, and even his godfather, Regina Salerno. Because none of them taught him to abandon his family or his convictions, he decides that if Junsu is the force that defines Cheonggu, then Junsu is the one who must die. With a deadly focus in his, our protagonist prepares to confront the heart of the empire, no longer willing to play the role of the hunted. In a flashback from 17 years ago, a young Jin Taiha returns home from school, calling out to his mother. Because he is covered in bruises, his mother is immediately struck with worry, asking if he has been bullied again, suggesting that they transfer schools immediately before his father sees his condition. However, our hero remains remarkably stoic despite the large bruise on his cheek. His mother is left bewildered, questioning why on earth he insists on putting up with such persistent bullying. Back in the present day, our boy stands in a dark stairwell, shocking Vui Kim by declaring his intent to head back up and kill Baek Junsu. Because the majority of the security forces, including the vice president of security, are currently occupied on the first floor, Taiha realizes this is a rare window of opportunity. He asks Vui and the vice chairman to buy him some time, promising to return in just 10 minutes once the job is finished. Vui is skeptical, noting that the dangerous first floor is just around the corner, but our protagonist remains firm as he begins to ascend the stairs. Strangely, Vui stops him with a personal revelation, leaning into the hero's ear in the dark hallway. He reveals that the only reason he and the others became loyalists was because they believed it was the only way to eventually kill Junsu. Vui explains that those discarded from Cheonggu's Special Ops Division joined Team Black simply to stay alive. While they were sent overseas to handle the company's dirty work, their family members were systematically eliminated in accidental deaths to keep Cheonggu's secrets hidden. Because their desire to see Junsu dead rivals his own, Vui desperately tries to stop the hero, yanking him by his collar and shouting that Junsu nearly killed him back at the villa annex. Taiha remains calm, explaining that he was only defeated previously because he was caught off guard while hastily chasing the escaping Jin Qiang. He places his hands on Vui's arms, asking for a simple gesture of trust. He promises that if Vui can buy him those 10 minutes, he will ensure Junsu is taken out once and for all. This sincerity forces Vui to finally let go. Luckily, Vice Chairman Yang intervenes, encouraging the young master to go and promising that they will be waiting for his return. While our hero dashes back up the stairs, Vui questions the vice chairman's logic. Yang admits that his memory had grown hazy with age, causing him to forget the specific kind of person Taiha was as a child. Meanwhile, on the 11th floor, Baek Junsu is effortlessly slamming guards into the floor. He mocks the younglings for calling themselves loyalists when they never even met the founding chairman. A captain named Ledger stands up with a smile, crossing his twin gold blades. He confirms that risking their lives to keep Junsu occupied is the only way to protect the people on the first floor. As the fight rages, the vice chairman continues his story, explaining that Taiha's parents insisted he attend a normal school to be raised like a commoner. When a 6th grader began bullying him for his large allowance, our boy didn't hide. Instead, he drew a circle in the sand on the playground every day, calling the bully out for a one-on-one fight. Because the bully was a coward, he refused to enter the circle and chose to beat Taiha in private instead. During those beatings, Taiha never put up a fight. He simply accepted the violence. The flashback returns to the kitchen, where young Taiha explains his logic to his mother. He tells her that the bully cursed his family and friends, saying things he couldn't repeat. He insists that he can handle the pain as long as she believes in him. In the present day, the adult Jin Taiha finally arrives in the boardroom, surrounded by fallen enemies. Because he carries that same intense resolve, he walks toward Junsu with his blade in hand. He swears that as long as his allies believe in him, he will always win, no matter who he is up against. The hall falls into a lethal silence as Baek Junsu stands perfectly composed. Opposite him, our protagonist stands ready, holding a tactical blade with a focused expression. This sudden meeting throws the guards, Ledger and his companion, into a state of total panic. Because their original plan was to keep Junsu away from the young master, Ledger frantically demands to know why our boy is there. As the pressure in the room spikes to a terrifying level, Ledger begins to sweat and tremble, desperately screaming for the hero to leave before the situation turns fatal. Ignoring the frantic warnings, our hero lunges forward with a massive slam. Junsu blocks the knife strike with his bare palm, and the resulting shockwave proves the immense power behind the hit. Leaning into the struggle, Junsu reveals that he has actually been waiting for this moment. Ledger, watching from the background, is frozen in shock. He cannot process how a human can move with such incredible speed. Taiha unleashes a flurry of rapid strikes to keep the enforcer occupied, but he soon instructs Ledger to head to the first floor. Because he is determined to handle the burden himself, our protagonist declares that he will be the one to deal with this man. This allows Ledger to flee, though he looks back one last time in disbelief. As they move dynamically through the hall, Junsu stands with his back turned, mockingly questioning if our boy actually came with a special plan. Suddenly, Junsu reaches for the hero's face and pins him to the ground in a dark silhouette of power. He dismisses Taiha's efforts, noting that as far as he can tell, the hero's strategy is nothing special. Taiha struggles, his eye visible through Junsu's fingers, before he uses a violent shove to push the enforcer back. Now bloodied from the struggle, our hero reflects on the words of Gwangsu-gu. Because Junsu is a man revered from an era of chaos and bloodshed, his reputation alone keeps the entire council on edge. He is legendary for being the only man to ever face the head of the Oseong faction and survive. In a flashback to their time at the bar, our protagonist recalls telling Gwangsu that any human can be defeated. Gwangsu had laughed and praised that spirit, noting that those who view Junsu as invincible only do so out of self-preservation. Gwangsu then brought up the incident at the villa where Junsu shattered the hero's knife. He explained the logic behind the weapon break technique, which requires striking the blade's precise bevel angle with monstrous brute strength. Strangely, Gwangsu revealed that this impossible technique was actually his own creation. Back in the present, Taiha slashes through the air, but Junsu catches the blade between two fingers. Our hero realizes that Junsu's talent lies in his ability to copy any move he sees, meaning he will only use techniques he is already familiar with. Junsu snaps the metal blade once more, standing amidst the shards with eerie eyes. He moves with a blurring speed, launching a high-spinning kick that our protagonist is forced to duck. Junsu looks back over his shoulder, questioning if a mere replacement blade was supposed to be enough. This triggers a memory of a young, bruised Taiha on a swing set. A younger, empathetic Junsu had offered to step in and help with a bully, but the boy had refused. Instead, young Taiha had asked Junsu to visit his school at noon, just to tell his mother how he won. Back in the present, that same indomitable spirit resurfaces. Taiha lunges forward, refusing to let the same technique defeat him twice. The collision is so violent it creates a burst of energy, and for the first time, Junsu's satisfied expression falters. As blood splurts from Junsu's arms, the enforcer realizes he had forgotten the true nature of the young master. While Taiha's moves may appear reckless, they are actually driven by a calculated purpose and an unwavering conviction. Our protagonist stands his ground, gripping two bloodied knives with eyes emitting murderous resolve. He formally declares that because Junsu became the sworn enemy of his grandfather and parents, he is finally here to claim his vengeance. A flashback to the protagonist's childhood reveals that his tactical ruthlessness was forged long ago. Even as a small child, young Taiha faced bullies who relentlessly struck him, but because nothing could break his spirit, the older boys resorted to shaming his family with hateful graffiti. Our boy didn't just endure the abuse, he provoked a direct confrontation by drawing a circle in the sand. An older boy, 3 years his senior, viewed this as a loss of face and charged in with a plan to end the fight with a single punch. Unfortunately for the bully, our protagonist had already prepared the battlefield. Taiha had hidden a wooden plank beneath the sand, and as the older boy lunged, a quick kick revealed the wood and caused the bully to slip. Because the boy was falling, Taiha was able to launch a sudden, coordinated attack, driving his knee violently into the boy's nose. This move brought the bully to his knees, but our hero didn't stop there. He pulled a rock from his pocket and began to relentlessly pummel the fallen boy. He committed this assault to ensure the insults against his family would never happen again, proving to the other children that he was no longer a victim. Watching from over a fence, a younger Baek Junsu observed the entire ordeal, later reporting to Taiha's parents that the boy had stood up for himself remarkably well. In the present day, the adult Taiha continues his high-speed assault, sliding across the floor with his blades drawn. He launches a slash that Junsu barely dodges, resulting in the blade slicing deeply into a marble pillar behind the enforcer. As Junsu examines the cut, he is internally surprised. He realizes the blade cuts through stone like paper and maintains its sharpness despite the extreme wear. He credits the young master's skills for the ability, but finds the quality of the knife itself to be truly remarkable. The enforcer suddenly counters by catching Taiha's arm and violently twisting his wrist toward the floor. Because the hero aimed too low, Junsu finds the opening to force a flip and a retreat. He mocks the hero's current progress, recalling how the young Taiha once used meticulous planning and patience to topple a playground bully. He questions if 17 years of planning and a mafia life have truly only resulted in this single blade strategy. The pressure from Junsu becomes clinical as he unleashes a barrage of heavy strikes. He eventually grabs our hero by the chest. Junsu mocks our protagonist, asking if he honestly believed that the strength he gained overseas would be enough to defeat someone like him in a country where bloodshed is a daily occurrence. This assault concludes with Taiha being sent flying into a wall with a massive impact. Strangely, as Junsu stands in the center of the room, blood suddenly splatters across his own chest. The enforcer is stunned, wondering when the hero managed to land the strikes. As our bloodied protagonist lies on the floor, he recalls the teachings of Regina Salerno. She once explained that some people are simply God's favorites, born with innate talent and skills that make everyone else feel like mere mortals. Because Regina viewed herself as one of these all-around wonders, Taiha had asked her if it was possible to win against such monsters. With a confident smile, the underboss of the Salerno family assured him that he could, simply because he is her pupil. In a moonlit forest clearing years ago, a young Jin Taiha struggled to find his footing while enduring a grueling training session. Regina Salerno stood over him, casually resting a red toy hammer on her shoulder as she mocked his exhaustion. Because our protagonist was barely able to stand, he began to doubt his own potential, wondering if he could ever truly compete with those in a league of their own. Regina responded to this insecurity with a smirk, before suddenly swinging the toy hammer into his side with massive force. The impact sent the young hero spinning through the air until he crashed into a tree. When the boy questioned if the toy was actually made of steel, Regina simply explained that if he intended to do nothing but take hits, he could never expect to win. Later that night, as the two sat by a waterfall, Regina provided a more clinical explanation for his training. She explained that muscles are divided into red, slow-twitch fibers for endurance and white, fast-twitch fibers for power. Because our protagonist possessed exceptional fast-twitch fibers and long legs, she determined that speed was his ultimate weapon. Although the young man had already committed to using knives to complement that speed, he remained haunted by his lack of intel on Baek Junsu. He knew that the chairman's bodyguard was undefeated against everyone except the Oseong boss, making him a mountain our boy felt unready to climb. To snap him out of his reflection, Regina suddenly lunged at him with a real knife. Because he felt the immediate threat of death, our hero's instincts took over, allowing him to dodge a strike he usually failed to avoid when it was just a toy hammer. Regina revealed the cold logic of her teaching. Taiha was the type of person who only truly improved when his life was on the line. She recalled how he once stabbed his own hand to show his grit, proving he only acts when death is near. She told him that his only path forward was to treat every encounter as a kill or be killed fight. In the present day, adult Taiha stands on a blood-stained floor, clutching those memories as he faces his own mortality against Baek Junsu. Meanwhile, the lobby of the headquarters has descended into a brutal slugfest. The Mad Tiger, Pyongwon Ho, launched a blow of strikes at Guangsu-gu, screaming for the older man to die. Luckily, Guangsu remained steady, catching the Mad Tiger with a massive punch to the face and following up with a rapid sequence of heavy blows. Unfortunately, Pyongwan's stamina proved to be unbelievable. He retaliated with a punch that sent Guangsu sliding across the room, prompting the red-haired ally, Asura, to rush to his side. While Guangsu admitted he was no longer in his prime, he noted that Pyongwan was a brute whose strength far outweighed his actual skill. Desperate to turn the tide, Pyongwan screamed into his radio for the Youngmu division to reinforce him, but his subordinates reported that they were trapped. This was because Yunsuri and Gray had successfully taken over the control room. By hacking the building's systems, they lowered heavy containment barriers, effectively blocking the armed forces coming down from the 8th floor. As Guangsu listened to the update over his earpiece, his relief was short-lived. Gray reported that our protagonist was currently on the 11th floor, engaged in a solitary duel with the white-haired Baek Junsu. This revelation left both Guangsu and Asura in a state of pure shock. Asura frantically asked about their captain, who had gone to rescue the others, but Suri struggled to keep up with the chaotic reports. While trying to identify the mustache captain on the monitors, her eyes suddenly widened in disbelief. On one of the screens, she spotted a woman, Lady Heron, with her arms chained high above her head, held captive within the very building they were trying to dismantle. As Suri was once a trainee at the Doyusa, she recognizes the high-ranking lady and uses the intercom to reach out. At first, Heron is skeptical of this stranger, but her eyes widen when Suri reveals herself as the successor who famously ran away after breaking a sacred tree. Luckily, the shared history bridges the gap. Heron realizes that Suri is likely in the building because of her connection to Jin Tai-ha. However, Heron remains a realist. She warns Suri that the girl isn't skilled enough to mount a rescue. Because the monster Baek Junsu raised, Do-gyung Han, is currently stalking the dark corridors toward them, Heron issues a final desperate command. She instructs Suri to deliver a vital message to the head of the Yan family, realizing that the current situation has escalated far beyond a simple kidnapping. Meanwhile, the lobby has descended into absolute carnage. Asura and Guangsu-gu are hunkered down behind a desk, struggling to survive a relentless barrage of pistol fire from rival guards. Asura is frustrated, shouting that while our hero is off fighting the legendary Baek Junsu one-on-one, they are stuck in a stalemate on the ground floor. Guangsu-gu reflects on the sheer gravity of the moment, finding it almost unbelievable that our boy is actually holding his own against the strongest man in the company. Strangely, the pressure on the loyalists is relieved when a silhouette blurs through the air behind the enemy lines. Captain Vui Kim appears like a ghost, spraying blood across the floor with a lethal horizontal slash that decimates the guards. Because Vui Kim and the vice chairman have finally linked up with the lobby team, the group feels a momentary surge of relief. However, the situation remains dire. Vui Kim reports that they are still dangerously outnumbered. He reveals that our hero promised to finish his duel and return in 10 minutes, and only 5 minutes remain. Vui makes it clear that if our protagonist isn't back by then, they must pull out immediately, even if it means leaving the heir behind. Unfortunately, their window of escape is slammed shut when Pyongwan Ho arrives with a new nightmare. A squad of elite soldiers in full tactical gear, the Yongmude, appears from behind the security barriers. Guangsu-gu is horrified to see this unofficial armed force, as their presence is a flagrant violation of the committee's rules. Pyongwan Ho issues a command to take no hostages and kill everyone in the lobby. Realizing they can't win a head-on fight against a small army, Vui Kim orders Asura to escort the vice chairman to the main gate. Despite Asura's worry about our hero upstairs, Guangsu-gu and Vui maintain a baseline conviction. Because he is the master they've pledged their lives to, they believe he will inevitably win and return. High above on the 36th floor, the atmosphere is disturbingly quiet. Jin Chong has finally breached the chairman's office, only to find it is a modest, cluttered space filled with old electronics and a simple fan. He mocks his father and grandfather for maintaining such a dump, though he notes their drive to stay humble was likely their only virtue. Moon Dane stands guard, urging the new chairman to flee before the loyalists reach the top. Because Do-gyung Han is still making his way down after dealing with Harin, she realizes that if Jin Tai-ha reaches this floor, she cannot protect Chiang alone. Jin Cheong remains arrogant, laughing at the idea that Baek Junsu could ever fall. He sits at the desk and picks up an old red rotary phone, explaining to Dane that this device is a direct line to the 4 remaining emperors of the committee. When Dane asks about his ultimate goal, Cheong reveals that he has no intention of simply being one of 5 rulers in a small country. Instead, he plans to merge with the Oseongpa by winning over powerful figures like Cheon Huimin and Baek Junsu. Because these organizations value raw power above all else, Cheong intends to use them to wipe out the other committee members. His plan is to become the one and only emperor of the nation, and he reveals that this was the secret contract he made with Baek Junsu from the start. Back at the 11th floor executive lobby, the human cost of this ambition is visible. Jin Tai-ha is covered in blood and gasping in agony as he grips a bloodied knife. Standing over him is the white-haired Baek Junsu, his face splattered with gore but his posture remaining unshakable. Meanwhile, in the chairman's office, Moon Dane stands before the new chairman, expressing her disbelief at his current strategy. She is concerned because Chiang is considering a partnership with the Five Stars faction, the very group responsible for assassinating the president and destabilizing the nation. Because this syndicate operates purely on a hierarchy of strength, Chiang remains composed as he dials a red rotary phone. He explains the logic of his plan by comparing the faction to a group of beasts. He believes that to rule them, one simply needs to eliminate their leader. As he smirks and twirls the phone cord, he notes that even a man as disciplined as Baek Junsu understood this necessity, which is why the enforcer spent years grooming a successor in the Special Operations Division. Meanwhile, the executive lobby is consumed by the sound of clashing metal and shattering wood. Our protagonist and Baek Junsu are locked in a high-speed duel, their movements leaving trails of dust across the dark floor. Because Junsu possesses overwhelming physical power, he delivers a sweeping kick that connects with the hero's side, sending him reeling. Our boy crashes onto the stone floor and skids backward, struggling to push himself back up. Baek Junsu stands tall and evaluates the situation, internally acknowledging that while Taiha is inferior in raw strength and stamina, he possesses one divine talent that cannot be easily blocked: instantaneous speed. As Jin Taeha lunges forward again with explosive energy, Junsu relies on his vast experience to anticipate the strike. Although the speed is blinding, Junsu uses the protagonist's own momentum to flip him over his shoulder, slamming him headfirst into the floor with a violent impact. Baek Junsu stands in the center of the room, reflecting on how he has mastered every martial art developed throughout human history for survival and conquest. Strangely, despite this absolute mastery, Junsu realizes he has yet to land a clean, decisive hit on the hero. Our protagonist skids away, breathing heavily as blood drips from his face. He realizes that Junsu is not just strong, but specifically trained to hunt killers. Because of this, Taiha knows that if his reactions had been even slightly slower, his head would have been crushed. Fortunately, his hands are still functional, which drives him to roar and charge once more. He never repeats the same technique twice, cycling through unpredictable styles like Muay Thai, Aikido, and boxing, to prevent the enforcer from establishing a rhythm. Baek Junsu is impressed by the hero's unyielding resolve, but he remains steady as the two clash blades inches apart. Our protagonist explains the logic behind his persistence. While Junsu spent years honing skills in a training hall, Taiha has spent 17 years risking his life in a quest for revenge. Because of this gap in life-or-death experience, the hero is able to execute a calculated gamble. Junsu suddenly realizes he has been played when a knife, which appeared to be lost earlier in the struggle, drops perfectly into Taiha's palm. The enforcer realizes the hero didn't lose the weapon. He threw it there on purpose to create this exact opening. This moment triggers a memory of Regina Salerno, who once taught a young Taiha to endure until the very last flicker of his life's candle. She explained that by hiding his emotions and waiting for a single 0.1 second window, he could unleash a power that none could oppose. Back in the present, our hero grips his knife and delivers a massive leaping slash. A giant cross of blood erupts as the blade finally strikes Baek Junsu across the torso. Surprisingly, as blood pours from the massive wound, Baek Junsu begins to smile. He looks toward the ceiling and speaks his final words, acknowledging that after 17 years of walking a thorny path of blood, the young master has finally found his answer. Despite his own defeat, the enforcer views this as a victory for the late chairman Jin Seoko, as the rightful heir has finally proven himself to be the ultimate predator. In 1988, while thousands of snow-white balloons were being released into the sky to celebrate the Seoul Olympics, a much darker reality was unfolding in the district of Incheon-dong. Because the government launched a big city renewal project, the celebratory anthem of the games was drowned out by the roar of excavators tearing through residential neighborhoods. These real estate sharks arrived in designer tracksuits, causing longtime neighbors to turn on one another as they split into factions of landlords and tenants. Tragedy struck our enforcer's family when his father, who had raised him alone, was beaten to death by hired thugs wielding steel pipes. Amidst this nightmare, a young Baek Soo-hyun stood firm, telling her younger brother, Baek Junsu, that it wasn't the time for tears. Because their father was gone, Soo-hyun became the boy's hero, working tirelessly and taking care of him without ever letting her grades slip. Baek Junsu realized he had nothing to offer but his own body, so he spent his dawns delivering newspapers and his evenings hauling scrap metal to support her. Soo-hyun spent her nights studying by candlelight, fueled by a dream to join the Cheongu group as a semiconductor engineer. She wanted to change the world and wrote about these aspirations in a diary using a fountain pen their father had bought her. Unfortunately, these dreams were cut short. After Soo-hyun completed her college entrance exams, our boy returned home with a celebratory cake, only to find their entire block engulfed in a violent orange blaze. A neighbor revealed the horrifying truth. Hired punks had intentionally torched the neighborhood, starting with Soo-hyun's home. Junsu sprinted toward the fire, but he arrived too late. He found a young passerby, the future chairman Jin Seok-ho, kneeling in the dirt and covered in raw, charred burns. Even as the flames ate the flesh off his back, Seok-ho had tried to pull Soo-hyun from the inferno. Ultimately, he was left to cradle the charred remains of his sister, screaming into the night sky. The day after the fire, the grief-stricken Junsu transformed into a force of vengeance. He single-handedly charged a line of demolition crews and riot police, leaving 8 thugs and 3 officers dead from ruptured organs and skull fractures. Strangely, the government chose to bury the case and erase Junsu's records to protect the image of the Olympics. This led to Baek Junsu sitting in a dark interrogation room, where a woman known as a scouter approached him. Because she recognized his raw, untapped strength, she snatched him from the gallows and sold him to an elite overseas kill squad known as Ordo Nox. For 10 years, Baek Junsu rose through the ranks of these elite assassins, eventually reaching an executive level under the nickname Tacitus. He eventually retired on one condition: he must never leave South Korea again. Because he had nothing left but a desire for justice, he returned to Seoul to hunt down those who colluded with the government to build luxury apartments over his sister's grave. His mission led him to the high-rise headquarters of the Cheongu Group. He infiltrated the chairman's office, a shabby trailer that served as a remnant of the company's early days, and pressed a knife to the throat of Jin Seok-ho. However, the logic of the revenge shifted when Seok-ho saw Junsu's reflection and immediately burst into tears of relief. Because the chairman had searched for Junsu for a decade, he begged for death to ease the grudge of the sister he failed to save. When Junsu pulled back Seok-ho's collar, he discovered the horrific burn scars the man had earned while trying to rescue Soo-hyun 17 years prior. This revelation forced Baek Junsu to listen to the truth. Seok-ho explained that while he had been in talks for the redevelopment, the state had rushed the demolition without his knowledge. He had rushed to the site and pulled Soo-hyun from the fire with his own hands, an act that had haunted his dreams ever since. Baek Junsu recalled his sister's dream of joining Cheongu to change the world. Because he saw that Seok-ho still possessed that same crazy ambition, he chose to spare the man. He handed Seok-ho the fountain pen, telling him to stop crying, and instead use it to prove he could change the world without selling his soul. Jin Seok-ho pledged to cherish the pen forever, viewing it as a vessel for the noble intentions entrusted to him by his sister and Baek Junsu. Because he wanted to honor those memories, he vowed to build a company that truly served the people. Watching from the shadows, a younger Baek Junsu listened to these vows before walking away. He felt he couldn't keep the pen as a namesake, despite his sister's memory. Because he had spent a decade as an assassin, spilling countless lives, he felt the weight of his sins ran too deep. He feared that holding such a pure keepsake would cause his sister to haunt his very dreams, dragging him back toward a light he no longer deserved. Instead, Junsu focused on the raw violence of his present. He entered a restaurant and confronted 2 men, Kim Cheol-min and Jang Hong-sik, identifying them as members of the Insang crew. Because they were part of the group he sought, he neutralized one of them instantly. As a woman's scream pierced the air, a group of aggressive thugs rose to challenge him. Junsu looked at them with a cold detachment, realizing that the 10 years he spent training for revenge against the men who burned his home had become a hollow pursuit. He beckoned the entire group forward, and within moments, the restaurant was a ruin of overturned tables and unconscious bodies. As Junsu stood amidst the carnage, a mysterious man in a white suit entered the room. This was Park Du-cheol, the first in command of the Oseongpa. He noted that Junsu clearly knew how to play and asked for his name. When Junsu asked if Du-cheol was the boss of the thugs he had just decimated, the man confirmed it with a broad smile. Junsu lunged with a punch, but for the first time in his life, his attack was blocked. Park Du-cheol caught the fist in his palm with ease. Because his strike was stopped, Junsu finally looked at his opponent clearly, noting that the man's eyes radiated an incredible, tiger-like vitality. They fought for over 40 minutes, an intense duel that left the restaurant's other executives as mere spectators. Eventually, Junsu fell to his knees, panting and defeated. He had never encountered a human who possessed such monstrous strength using only bare fists. Expecting death, Junsu told the victor to kill him. However, Park Du-cheol laughed, claiming the fight made him feel like he was at an amusement park. He demanded to know Junsu's story. Exhausted, Junsu explained his quest for revenge, only to learn that his original enemies, the Insang crew, were already gone, swallowed up by the consolidation of the Oseongpa. When Junsu dismissed the man as just another thug, Du-cheol roared with laughter. He argued that their status didn't matter as long as they had the power to achieve their purpose. He explained that they used force to stop corrupt politicians and loan sharks when the state had failed the people. Surprisingly, Du-cheol let him go, silencing his subordinates' objections by acknowledging Junsu's right to seek his own path. After completing his revenge, Junsu returned to Jin Seok-ho and volunteered to be his bodyguard. He was curious to see how the man would grow the Cheongu group. For years, he watched as Seok-ho built a company beyond reproach, showing deep loyalty to his loyalist faction, while his own incompetent children, Gu-ho and Ju-hee, began to scheme for power. Eventually, Chiangu became the global technology leader Junsu's sister had once dreamed of. Unfortunately, as Jin Seoko aged, he began to lose his vigor. He turned a blind eye to corruption and stopped looking toward the future. Seizing this weakness, Guho Jin entered the office with a grin, announcing that the committee had finally invited Chiangu to join. This news sent Seoko into a rage. Because he remembered the sister who died in the fires of a state-meddled redevelopment project, he believed corporations should never interfere in state affairs. Junsu soon learned the secret behind the chairman's sudden lethargy. Seoko had terminal bile duct cancer. He realized the chairman was tolerating corruption only to avoid making enemies for his chosen successor. While the IMF crisis threatened to collapse the company, Seoko remained unshakable, believing in his people to rebuild. He eventually selected his third son, Jin Soo-hyuk, to lead, specifically to train the brilliant young Jin Taiha. However, the internal rot was spreading too fast. Guho Jin approached Junsu, urging him to join the committee's coup and claiming the leader of the Oseongpa remembered him. Because Junsu had already made a dark choice to protect the heaven Soko and his sister dreamed of, he lied to the chairman. He claimed he couldn't accompany him on an important world tour due to his sister's death anniversary. As the sun set, Junsu stood alone, accepting that his place would be in the deepest pit of hell for the betrayal he was about to facilitate. Because he felt he had to protect the legacy at any cost, as the yacht exploded into flames amidst a pouring rain. He swore to safeguard the dream, even if he had to suffer eternally in the blackest flames for his sins. Years ago, Jin Seoko stood alone in an autumn forest, surrounded by falling red maple leaves. Because he was weakened by the incurable approach of death, the chairman worried that his empire would collapse. Baek Junsu, standing by his side in the forest clearing, acknowledged that no one else could grow the company like Seoko had. He realized that the chairman's children and subordinates remained loyal only to him because no one had the strength to leap over the colossal mountain that Seoko represented. This vulnerability was dangerous. Junsu feared that if a monster like Park Du-cheol decided to devour the firm, there would be no one to stop him. In the present day, Baek Junsu stands in a dark hall, blood dripping from the stump of his severed arm. He realizes that the only way to safeguard the legacy is to join the committee until he gains the power to protect it himself. Because of this singular focus, he delivers a massive shadowed kick that sends our protagonist flying through the air. Taeha's ribs crack internally, forcing a cry of agony as he realizes that despite his own growth, the enforcer has somehow gotten even faster. Our hero struggles to his feet, bloodied and gasping, wondering how a strike he was certain he blocked could cause such damage. He barely slides under the next strike, shocked to find that while he is caught up in speed, Junsu still manages to land a heavy blow to his abdomen. As blood spills from our boy's mouth, he executes a vertical slash with murderous intent. He knows that those who fear death are easy to handle, and he has long abandoned that fear. Strangely, Junsu's past actions were all a calculated play for time. Putting the weak Jin Guho out front was merely a distraction until he could find a true successor, someone with power even greater than his own. Back in the present, Taiha hunches over, clutching his bleeding side. He realizes his ribs are shattered to the point that his internal organs might spill out if the wound opens further. However, he screams at himself to ignore the pain. Because he has lived for this specific moment of punishment from the start, he charges toward Junsu, blood spraying from his open wound. Watching the hero sprint, Junsu finds himself unable to stop a knowing smile. He recalls a past meeting where the sociopathic Jin Cheong mockingly questioned why a man of Junsu's ambition was being so quiet. Cheong, who had the depravity to kill his own brother, suggested that Junsu should devour the entire committee, rather than just joining it. Junsu took an interest in him because he saw Cheong as a potential necessary evil for Cheongu, a man willing to leap over the walls of the established power. During that meeting, Chung revealed he had footage from an armed helicopter proving our protagonist was alive. Because Taiha was found on a Salerno family ship, Cheong viewed him as a troublesome loose end that needed to be measured for death. Junsu, however, closed the laptop and insisted they leave the boy alone, noting that the mafia was ruthless enough to handle him. Back in the present, the duel reaches its peak. Baek Junsu performs a high vertical kick, but our hero counters with a desperation that defies logic. Taeha bites down violently on Junsu's neck, creating a window to lunge behind him. He stabs the enforcer through behind from both sides with his tactical blades, twisting the steel until a spray of blood erupts. As the life begins to fade from Junsu, he recalls a final moment on a private jet with a maniacally laughing Jin Cheong. Cheong had ordered him to kill the old-timer and then eliminate the hero to cover their tracks. Junsu had lied and told Cheong the task was finished, but in reality, he chose not to kill the boy. He believed that if Taiha was the real one, he would survive the state where survival was difficult and escape the flames. Now as blood splatters his face, Junsu realizes he has won. He sees that the bloodline of the master he followed has splendidly inherited a brilliance that does not fear death. Because our hero endured hellish trials and leaped over every scheme, he has surpassed the very walls Junsu spent his life building. In the bright sunlight of his fading mind, Junsu sees the child who inherited Seoko's intellect, now walking the path of his own warrior life. With a final, screaming slash from the young master, Junsu realizes his long apology to the late chairman is finally complete. The legacy of Baek Junsu ends as his severed head tumbles across the floor of the executive hall. In his final moments of consciousness, the fallen enforcer reflects on the complicated bond he shared with the late chairman, Jin Seoko. He realizes that the day his sister died in the flames was the turning point that set them on two very different paths. While Seoko chose to build an empire, Junsu had lived a lie, harboring a silent resentment toward the chairman's growing softness. He wonders if Seoko truly saw through his betrayal or was simply oblivious. Because he viewed Seoko's kindness as cowardice, Junsu had judged him unworthy. But as he stares at the black fountain pen now held by the bloodied Jin Taiha, he realizes he was the one being judged. Seoko had conducted a rigorous personnel evaluation and concluded that Junsu was never meant to inherit the company's future. He accepts that Seoko left a different future behind, one that walks a path Junsu could never follow. Inside the hall, the silence is heavy as our protagonist falls to his knees, gasping for air. Although he has won the duel, Jin Taeha is bruised, bloodied, and huffing in total exhaustion. He realizes he has lost a dangerous amount of blood and worries he won't be able to reach the allies waiting for him downstairs. Unfortunately, the situation on the lower floors is deteriorating rapidly. The elite Team Black is being pinned down by soldiers in heavy tactical gear, forcing Eri Kang to struggle against a relentless barrage of machine gun fire. Because they are being overwhelmed by superior equipment, the pressure on the loyalists has reached a breaking point. Vui Kim looks at his watch and realizes that 11 minutes have passed, exceeding their agreed-upon time. He logically concludes that because our boy hasn't returned, the mission has failed, and the young master must be dead. This forces him to issue a heartbreaking order to retreat to save the remaining men. Gwangsu-gu reacts with pure shock, shouting that they cannot leave yet, but Vui Kim remains firm. He believes that the moment Baek Junsu comes through those doors, the entire team will be finished. As the elevator doors rings and the sinister Do Kyung-han stands inside, our bloodied hero sits slumped, desperately pleading with his own body to move because he knows someone is coming. Suddenly, a figure stands tall over him, and Taiha looks up in recognition. Downstairs, the panic peaks as Gwangsu-gu tries to hold the line for just one more minute, only for Vui Kim to yank him back, screaming that they have to face the failure. Strangely, the retreat is interrupted by a dash through the lobby. Nameless suddenly appears, carrying a bloodied and unconscious Jin Taiha on his back. He screams at the team for their hesitation, announcing the impossible truth. Baek Junsu is dead, and Taiha is the one who killed him. This revelation leaves Pyongwon Ho and the rival guards in a state of frozen disbelief and total disbelief, as the pillar of their power has finally collapsed. While the loyalists scramble to escape, the scene upstairs remains chillingly quiet. Do Kyung-han stands alone before the severed head of his mentor. He touches his chest with a puzzled expression, wondering if the death of the man who raised him finally means he is free. Rather than showing grief, he merely smirks through the blood splatters on his face and walks away, leaving the past behind him. Outside, the escape is nearly thwarted by the pressure of the pursuit. Vui Kim offers to stay back and hold the line as a penance for doubting the hero, but Gwangsu-gu refuses to let him play the hero. Because the company's future now rests on the younger generation, Gwangsu reminds Vui that he needs to remain and serve the young master. The veteran loyalist decides to make a final stand alone, reflecting on his journey from the slums to the heights of Cheongu. He entrusts the company to the group and prepares to face the oncoming guards with a dark, defiant smile. Luckily, as the groups escape, they are intercepted in the garage. A white sedan screeches to a halt. Jaepil Kim, the underboss of the Oseong faction, looks out from the back seat and offers his assistance. Although Yunsuri and Nameless are suspicious of his motives, Jaepil explains the logic of his intervention. He realizes that if our protagonist dies now, Cheongu's lies will deceive the council and disrupt the balance of power. Because he never places a losing bet, Jaepil decides to shield the heir to ensure the truth survives. The news of the defeat eventually reaches the 36th floor. Moondane receives the report over the phone, confirming the unthinkable. Jin Taeha has indeed killed Baek Junsu. This reality shatters Jin Chang's composure entirely. In a fit of manic rage, the new chairman slams his red rotary phone down and screams our hero's name. Within the quiet interior of the Bowman Gukbab restaurant, the intensity of the recent coup has been replaced by the rhythmic beep of a medical IV drip. Inside a back room, Jin Taeha lies unconscious and heavily bandaged. Aunt Nana has finished performing emergency surgery, explaining to Jaepil Kim that a fractured rib fragment had actually pierced his large bowel. Luckily, the resulting hematoma wasn't life-threatening, though she keeps him on a steady course of antibiotics to prevent infection. Because Taeha is the rightful heir to the Cheongu group, his safety is now a massive political liability. Jaepil Kim stands in the kitchen when Nana suggests he take the boy to a proper hospital to avoid peritonitis. Jaepil logically concludes that he cannot move the protagonist. If Oseong were seen providing medical care to the man who dismantled Chiangu's leadership, they would be accused of orchestrating the coup themselves. Nana mocks the idea of thugs caring about politics, but Japal remains focused on the blood they would lose if they didn't use their brains. Before stepping out into the alley, he even offers Nana a prestigious university professorship, an offer she flatly rejects by slamming her knife into the cutting board, stating she prefers saving lives as a hobby. Outside, Japal meets with Vui Kim's men in gray, reassuring them that our boy just needs rest. As he drives away, he leaves a message for the hero to join him for a smoke once he wakes up. However, as the luxury car speeds through the market, Japal's inner monologue reveals a darker calculation. He reflects on how Taiha isn't just an extraordinary killer, but a royal, with the eloquent negotiation skills and the tactical mind to swallow the entire corporate world whole. Because Taiha has now killed the legendary Baek Junsu in the very heart of Cheonggu, Japal realizes the boy is the real deal. This leads him to a chilling question. If our hero is powerful enough to overthrow the entire system, would it be safer for Oseong to just kill him now? Driven by this urgency, Japal calls for an immediate meeting with his executives. Back at the restaurant table, the atmosphere is heavy with paranoia. Gray urgently argues that the group needs to evacuate the district immediately. When Vui Kim and Nameless question the logic of moving a wounded man, Gray points out the suspicious nature of their hideout. He asks why Oseong, who manages 30 hospitals, would bring a patient to a gray zone restaurant that serves blood sausage. Because this area is a lawless neutral ground, Gray realizes they are only safe as long as Oseong finds them useful. The moment that utility fades, they will be wiped out. To secure their future, Gray holds up a USB drive containing the past month of CCTV footage from Cheonggu's secret basement control room. As a data broker, he knows that this information is a currency he can trade for weapons, money, or a truly safe hideout. Meanwhile, a different kind of negotiation is happening on a K-rail subway train. Vice Chairman Gwang-hoo Yong is forced to ride public transit, standing over a man lounging across the seats. This is Min Chung-heo, the vice chairman of the Dobang Association. Heo mockingly asks if the fancy corporate cars are all gone, but Yong ignores the insults. With a wide-eyed desperation, the vice chairman begs Heo for help in placing our protagonist on the chairman's seat. Heo initially laughs, demanding compensation for the pitcher and batter incident first, which Yong agrees to pay at a staggering rate of 1.3 billion won. However, the tone shifts when Yong offers a dangerous trade. If Heo assists the young master, Yong will help Heo eliminate the current Dobang chairman to seize that position for himself. This cold ambition causes every man on the train to draw a gun on the vice chairman. Heo pulls down his sunglasses, his one eye revealing a predatory interest in whatever is making the old man so gutsy. Elsewhere, night falls over the traditional estate of the Yan clan of Cheongju. High in the air, Yoon Sori is held suspended by nearly invisible wires, a signature restraint of the clan's chiefess, Baekchung Yeon. Watching from the rooftop, Baekchung mockingly notes that her dear former disciple has finally returned. Because Sori fled the clan years ago, the chiefess suggests she has only come back to die for her past wrongs. Luckily, Sori isn't intimidated. Despite being bound in midair, she looks up with a fierce expression and tells the deranged hag to cut the act and open the door. Under the traditional eaves of the Yan clan's foundational training ground, a tense negotiation unfolds over a cup of high-grade Hadong tea. Baekchung Yeon, the clan's chiefess, praises the refined taste of the tea, noting that once someone experiences such quality, they can never return to cheap street coffee. Despite the hospitable offer, Suri-yoon refuses to relax because she is on a strict mission from the imprisoned Lady Heron. She demands to speak with the head of the clan personally, but Baekchung is skeptical. The chiefess finds it hard to believe that a high-ranking officer like Heron could be bested by the Cheonggu group, though she wonders if Heron's lack of a sword at the board meeting was her downfall. Suri explains that she witnessed Haren's predicament via the CCTV in the control room, but Baekchung remains dismissive, labeling Haren's attempts to help a man named Taeha as foolish. To move forward, the chiefess sets a firm boundary. As a second-rank official, she must be the one to judge whether Suri's message is worthy of the clan head's ears. When Suri resists, Baekchung's gaze turns cold, and she threatens to rip the girl's tongue out for playing games. She points out the flaw in Suri's logic, noting that if the message were truly from Heron, Suri would know the protocol requires speaking to the second-rank official first. This pressure forces Suri to recall a flashback where Lady Heron gave her these specific instructions. Heron had emphasized that the message was of the utmost importance and must not be shared with anyone below the third rank. Crucially, Heron told Suri that if she weren't welcomed, she should ask for Baekchung specifically, knowing the chiefess would respond. Realizing her attempt to make her former master squirm has failed, Suri finally delivers the cryptic phrase, Seobiol stands overturned. Baekchung immediately recognizes the weight of these words because they signal that a coup has occurred. She agrees to inform the clan head, but instructs Suri to head inside and rest, making it clear the girl is not permitted to leave. Suri realizes she was never going to be allowed to walk away, which Baekjung confirms with a smile. The chiefess explains that the Yeon clan has maintained its exclusivity for over 1,000 years, dating back to the legendary Manhwa cadets. She admits she only tolerated Suri's rebellion because she knew the defector would eventually return. Suri clenches her fist but agrees to stay under 2 conditions. She must be allowed to visit her father twice a week, and the clan must help Taiha just once. She explains that this request is a personal plea to Baekjung as her master, fueled by a debt of gratitude for Taiha saving her hometown. Baekjung finds the request self-righteous and questions why a high-ranking official would care about such petty matters. However, Suri catches her master's interest by suggesting that Baekjung keeps her around simply because she wants her. To demonstrate the reality of the clan's power, Baekjung leads Suri through the garden where young trainees, aged 4 to 6, are practicing. She explains that the clan scouts children with exceptional potential, training them to become either elite warriors in the Western Division or intellectual diplomats in the Eastern Division. Because only those who possess beauty, strength, and intellect are chosen, they are brought in young. Baekjung notes that she herself was a rare exception, brought in at 17, while she scouted Suri at 19. Suddenly, Baekjung uses her invisible wires to snatch the young trainees, suspending them in the air. She tells Suri that she would sacrifice all these children without a second thought just to have a talent as blessed as hers. To test if Suri's skills have withered, she initiates a lethal exercise involving 8 complex wire knots. If Suri fails to unravel them, the children will either fall to their deaths or be strangled. Suri can only glare in fury, calling her master an evil woman as she prepares to fight for the children's lives. A few days later, the scene shifts to the Gukbab restaurant. Gray and Aunt Nana are jokingly presenting a new menu item, a tepid iced Americano, to mock our protagonist's tastes. Jin Taeha finally wakes up in his bed, still connected to an IV, and looks at the strange drink with complete bewilderment. His confusion turns to annoyance as a news report on the television announces that the new chairman, Jin Cheong, is preparing his inauguration speech. Surrounded by Vui Kim, Nameless, and his other allies, our hero acknowledges that while he has returned to the land of the living, he feels absolutely terrible. In the assembly hall, Jin Cheong addresses over thousands of members of the Cheonggu security force. Standing at a podium flanked by stone-faced guards, the new chairman delivers an inauguration speech that feels less like a corporate address and more like a declaration of war. He vows to lead the company into a global era while honoring the founder's footsteps, but his tone shifts into a manic intensity as he pumps his fist and grips his ornate eagle-head cane. He declares that Cheonggu will never waver in the face of terrorism, and promises that no matter how deep the darkness descends, the light of the company will never fade. Back at the Gukbab restaurant, our protagonist watches the broadcast alongside Vui Kim, Gray, and Nameless. Gray mocks the aggressive nature of the speech, but Vui Kim realizes the logic behind it. With the core executives gone and Baek Junsu dead, Cheong is desperate to rally the remaining forces. Despite the bandage on his cheek and his lingering wounds, our boy is focused on the fate of Gwangsu-gu. Because Gwangsu is not on the official casualty list, Taiha instructs Gray to continue the search, hoping to at least find his body if he hasn't survived. While the hero recovered, the rest of the team remained active under the directive of Vice Chairman Yang. Vui Kim explains that the Vice Chairman has gone to seek help from the Dobang Association, leveraging his personal ties. The logic is simple. Assuming the chairmanship is meaningless without the support of the council members who control the country. Simultaneously, Yoon Suri has returned to her roots at the Yeon clan of Changju. Gray reveals that she is on a double mission to reveal that Cheonggu is holding one of their own captive while seeking the support of the very people who taught her those wire techniques. Amidst these shifting alliances, a message arrives from Jae-pil Kim of the Oseong faction, inviting our protagonist back to the cigar lounge. Despite Aunt Nana's warnings from the kitchen that a slight fall could still be fatal and Vui Kim's suspicion that it's a trap, the hero prepares to go. He explains that his time in the mafia taught him that while confidence is half the battle, one must always believe in themselves to survive. Because he is committed to this path, he puts on his suit jacket and black gloves, asking his men to have faith in him. Luckily, his caution is justified. Upon arriving at the Solvere Cigar Lounge, Taiha and Vui Kim are intercepted in the parking lot by Mansu Kang and Jingu Yang, the Oseong factions number 12 and number 19. Mansu attempts to force a change of location, threatening to beat the hero if he doesn't comply. Jingu Yang adds that they have orders to kill him if he resists. Recognizing the strength of these opponents, Vui Kim prepares for a fight, but our protagonist remains calm. He notices smoke coming from the lounge and realizes his true target is already inside. As Taiha walks toward the entrance, the Oseong thugs lunge to stop him, but the hero's specialized team intervenes instantly. Nameless appears from the shadows, pinning Mansu Kang to the ground with a knife laced with neurotoxin. When Jingu Yang tries to swing a heavy bat at our boy, Eri Kang blocks the strike and neutralizes the giant with a huge punch. Vui Kim and the others take a stand against the remaining thugs, proving their absolute loyalty. Because they have total faith in their true master, they hold the line so the hero can have his meeting. Inside the lounge, a loud laugh echoes through the room. The Oseong boss, Duchil Park, sits with Jaepil Kim, mockingly scolding his subordinate for testing a man who was strong enough to kill Baek Junsu. Dukiel waves our hero over, officially identifying himself as the number 2 of the faction. Taiha ignores the pleasantries and heads to the counter to select a specific cigar, eventually sitting opposite Jaepil. Jaepil attempts to apologize, explaining that the scuffle outside was a necessary performance to make their meeting look like a coincidence to outside eyes. However, our hero has no interest in small talk. He lights his cigar and looks toward Jaepil, telling him to leave the room. Because he recognizes who holds the real authority, Taiha dismisses the subordinate so that the adults, the true power players, can have a real conversation. This bold move catches Jaepil Kim off guard, but Duchil Park allows him to stay. Jaepil complies, noting that he will check on the men to ensure no problems arise outside, leaving with a wish for a fruitful talk. Once alone, Duchil leans forward and reveals the dark history of his underboss. He explains that Jaepil was once a righteous prosecutor until the Oseong faction murdered his family. Driven by a thirst for vengeance, Jaepil eventually blew up the former underboss in a car explosion. When Duchil finally caught him, he was moved by the man's defiant scream, claiming he would show the world a place where beasts like Duchil couldn't survive. Because Duchil found this righteous fire interesting, he took the former prosecutor into the fold. Strangely, our hero remains unimpressed by this tale. He notes that the Oseong faction seems to be out of control and questions why they even bother with such complex mergers. Duchil laughs, attributing it to a youthful ambition for world domination. This casual attitude pushes our protagonist to his limit, and he slams his hand onto the table to demand the elder's full attention. Outside the lounge, the tension has reached an unexpected stalemate. Because both sides recognize each other as high-level professionals, Taiha's Team Black and the Oseong thugs have actually become quite chummy. They trade cigarettes and compare tactical knives, even discussing if such weapons are sold in Korea or acquired overseas. Jaepil Kim observes this with a stern suspicion, wondering when everyone became so friendly. Fui Kim thanks Jaepil for his time regarding the board meeting, but Jaepil remains focused on the test at hand. He warns the men to keep their distance, as the boss's whims are lethal. When the red-haired Nameless reacts to this as a threat, Jaepil clarifies the logic. Dukiel plans to recruit them, but should they refuse or fail to impress him, they won't leave the place alive. He reminds them that the legendary Baek Junsu was only respected because he was one of the few men to ever face Duchil and live to tell the tale. Back inside, Duchil gets straight to the point. He acknowledges Taiha as the heir and offers him a deal: work for Oseong, and he will personally deliver Jincheong's head by the end of the day. However, he warns that even if our protagonist becomes chairman, the company will be permanently barred from the council simply because Dukiel has willed it. Our hero responds with a cold, logical counterproposal. He explains that revenge is a personal duty to honor the dead, meaning the death of Jincheong is only meaningful if he delivers the blow himself. Furthermore, he clarifies that his roots now lie with the Salerno family in Italy. Because he is determined that Oseong likely won't interfere with his revenge, he boldly offers to let Dukiel leave in peace. This arrogance triggers a massive surge of murderous aura from Dukiel, who looms over the table like a monstrous silhouette. He screams at the arrogant bastard for thinking he stands a chance while still recovering from his wounds. Taiha doesn't flinch, exhaling a calm puff of smoke and noting they aren't monsters or monkeys who should make a ruckus in a nice establishment. The arrival of a startled waiter breaks the tension, forcing Dukiel to dismiss his excitement with a laugh. Because he recognizes the genuine, predator-like conviction in our boy's eyes, the Oseong leader decides to spare him, noting that he can tell the hero is genuine. As the meeting concludes, Dukiel instructs the hero to relay the truth of Cheong's coup to the council. Taiha stands his ground as he makes it clear that while they can handle the politics, anyone who dares to block his path to revenge will be eliminated without hesitation. The funeral hall is a somber landscape of white lilies and rising incense, all centered around the memorial portrait of the fallen master, Baek Junsu. Because the pillar of Cheonggu's security has finally crumbled, Do Gyung-han stands alone before the altar, bowing his head in a silent, solemn tribute. Behind him, a sea of guards in suits press their foreheads to the floor. This display of absolute grief, however, cannot mask the growing anxiety among the survivors. Moon Young-min and Hwang Junhyuk exchange hushed, panicked words, wondering if the company can even survive now that their legendary shield was defeated in a one-on-one duel. Strangely, the funereal silence is shattered by the heavy stomp of a black shoe. The mourners turn in alarm as Dukiel Park, the formidable boss of the Oseong faction, strolls into the room while casually smoking a cigar. When a terrified official tries to demand respect for the dead, the number 2 ranked gangster simply sneers, demanding a bottle of soju instead of an apology. His presence causes a ripple of awe through the crowd, Even in his embarrassment, Huiman Cheon recognizes that the boss personally coming to pay respects confirms the rumors of the legendary rivalry between Du Cheol and the deceased master. Ducal Park's tribute is as violent as his reputation. He drops into a cross-legged position before the altar and plants his lit cigar directly into the incense pot alongside the green sticks. After shattering the top of a soju bottle with his bare hand, he drinks deeply from the jagged glass, offering a grim grin to the portrait. He notes that because a real deal opponent took Junsu out, the man has nothing to be embarrassed about in the afterlife. Luckily for the Oseong faction, they aren't just there for a drink. The underboss, Jaepil Kim, watches as Dukeol suddenly turns his predatory gaze toward the Cheongu mourners. The atmosphere turns lethal as Dukeol barks a warning, telling the twerps from Cheongu to go hide like rats in their tiny building. He declares with a grin that until the Oseong faction says otherwise, killing scum like them won't even be considered a crime in this country. As Dukeol begins to depart, he is suddenly blocked by the silent, towering figure of Do-kyung Han. The two men lock eyes in a heavy stalemate. Dukeol's smile returns, noting that it's surprising to find people willing to come at him 2 days in a row. He leans in close, questioning why a man like Do Gyeong is bothering to prance around with a human mask on, sensing the suppressed violence beneath the guard's suit. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a circular building deep within a forest, where the council's authority is being asserted. So Hui Yeon, the third-ranking official of the Yeon clan, stands before the new chairman, Cheong Jin. She delivers a cold decree. In 2 weeks, Cheong must appear before the council to justify his bloody succession. To ensure compliance, she presents a vial of poison, explaining that without an antidote, he will succumb to an agonizing death within 14 days. Cheong Jin merely grins at the threat, prompting an outburst of rage from So Hui. She drops her professional mask, admitting she would rather kill him on the spot. She warns him that even if the council finds him innocent, any harm brought to Heron will result in him being ripped to pieces. Rather than showing fear, Cheong Jin erupts into laughter, grabbing the glass vial and, to So Hui's horror, shattering it between his teeth. He mocks the council's rules, claiming they have no idea what he and Junsu truly poured their hearts into creating. While Cheong Jin descends into madness, Do Gyung Han returns to a minimalist apartment. Standing under a shower, he reveals a back and shoulders covered in a roadmap of jagged scars. These marks are the physical remnants of his past under Baek Junsu, who once commanded him to forget freedom and spend his life bound by obedience. Because Junsu once forbade him from killing, noting that Do Gyung enjoyed the act far too much, the guard has lived a life of forced restraint. However, the logic of his world is changing. Do Gyung places his palm against a hidden wall, revealing a lit display of 3 Japanese katanas. In the dark room, surrounded by dozens of surveillance monitors tracking the faces of his enemies, he slowly draws a blade. Back in the circular hall, Cheong Jin stands with blood dripping from his shredded lips. He issues a final, terrifying message for the council. He will play their game for now, but if any of them dare to assist Taiha, they are already dead. In a dark urban alley, the silence is shattered by a sudden and lethal ambush. Do Gyung Han, moving with a speed that defies the human eye, utilizes twin blades to cut down 2 thugs before they can even finish a threat. This efficiency leaves Asura, the Unit 2 leader of Team Black, in shock seeing his men coughing up blood. Because Asura has spent years overseas in deep cover operations, he is stunned that anyone managed to track his team's movements so easily. However, a glance at a nearby brick wall reveals the simple logic of his defeat. He had forgotten to account for the local CCTV cameras. Black doesn't hesitate to capitalize on this lapse, charging forward with a curved blade. The alleyway erupts into a rapid clash of metal, but the struggle is entirely one-sided. Although Asura is a veteran, he finds no openings in the younger man's defense. This forced realization hits him hard. Do Gyung is not just playing with him, but is the true, monstrous successor to Baek Junsu. With a final, precise lunge, Do Gyung Han slits Asura's throat, ending the fight immediately. As the killer walks away, the dying Asura uses his last ounce of strength to clutch the wall. He realizes he must find a way to warn our protagonist that this man is the real deal. Meanwhile, the crisis within the Cheongu group has reached a breaking point. Inside a high-rise office, Executive Director Taechu Oh reports that the Oseong faction has successfully launched a total blockade against the company. Because the rivals have shut down access to executive clubs and ordered supplier strikes, the corporate leadership is paralyzed. To make matters worse, Director Myong-gi Kim reveals that 8,000 employees, including seasoned department heads, have submitted resignation letters in just 3 days. Despite the looming collapse, the new chairman, Jin Cheong, merely smiles. He views the chaos not as a disaster, but as the fireworks of a new era. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocks the building, blowing the 36th floor chairman's office into debris. Jin Cheong explains the logic behind the blast with chilling nonchalance. He felt the old office had a foul stench, and decided that total destruction was the only way to clean it. He uses this moment to announce Cheongu 2.0, a radical restructuring designed to shed all outdated traditions. As part of this purge, he officially disbands Cheongu security and transfers all personnel to the Yongmu Corps. Pyongwon-ho confirms that the era of fighting with knives is over, as the group has been rebranded as the heavily armed PMC, Black Tech. Jin Chong warns his remaining executives to stop whining and get the staff back in their seats, threatening to treat them like useless cattle if they fail. Later that night, the tension shifts back to the chairman's office, where Do-kyung-han arrives carrying a blue cooler box. He thumps the container onto the table, revealing Asura's severed head inside. Jin Chong is revolted, not by the violence, but by the smell lingering on his expensive suit. He mockingly questions if Do-kyung is satisfied now that Junsu is dead, but the guard responds by lunging forward and grabbing the chairman's face in a vice-like grip. Jin Chong remains unfazed, reminding the killer that his training specifically ensured he could never kill the chairman. He mocks Do-kyung's anger, suggesting the guard is actually furious that our protagonist stole the chance to kill Junsu personally. Because a premature assault on the Jangseo district would trigger an unwinnable war with the Oseong faction and the Yan clan, Jin Chong orders Do-kyung to stay away from the office for 2 weeks. He instructs the killer to focus on picking off anyone who leaves the district, biding their time until the Yongmu Corps is fully prepared. However, he gives a final, sharp permission. If the urge becomes too great, Do-kyung should simply drag our hero out and kill him in the open. The scene shifts back to the Allies, where Vui Kim and our protagonist stand in shock before a white delivery truck. Aunt Nana discovered the vehicle parked outside, containing the body of Asura. Vui Kim is devastated, noting that a top-tier special ops leader like Asura shouldn't have been taken down so easily. However, he notices a specific code smeared in dark blood on the body. Because it is a secret signal used only by their unit, they are able to translate the message. Our hero realizes that the successor, mentioned in the dying note, isn't a reference to himself, but a warning about Do-kyung-han. He looks at the portrait of his fallen allies, realizing that the enemy is using these brutal murders to systematically drag him out into a final, lethal confrontation. The focus shifts to a high-stakes strategy session between our hero and the surviving loyalists. Vice Chairman Gwang Hu-young begins by explaining the upcoming corporate fallout. In exactly 13 days, the council is scheduled to hold a formal hearing to determine the legitimacy of Jin Cheong's succession. Because of the sheer brutality Cheong displayed, the vice chairman believes the new chairman's execution is virtually certain, especially since the Dobang Association is now convinced that Cheong instigated an illegal coup. Unfortunately, the legal path isn't quite as simple as it seems. Suri Yeon, who has recently returned from her negotiations with the Yeon clan, reports that they are facing a similar situation with a few added complications. During a flashback to the clan's traditional estate, Chiefess Baekchung Yeon explains the logic of the council's regulations. They move strictly by established rules, following only those they trust without exception. While the CCTV footage provided by Gray is an important resource, the chiefess warns that it isn't conclusive evidence that mandates an execution. When a surprised Suri points out that she delivered the message of a literal prisoner, Baekchung remains dismissive. She notes that Heron's confinement doesn't appear to have direct ties to the coup, meaning Cheong's death isn't 100% guaranteed. Consequently, Suri suggests threatening Cheong to secure Heron's release. Baekchung quickly rejects as she explains that because Cheonggu remains a member of the council until the hearing, Heron will be in immediate danger if Cheong dies prematurely. To ensure the situation doesn't go sideways, the chiefess insists that Heron must come to the council to testify as an eyewitness. She offers a specific stipulation. If our boy can rescue Heron and bring her to the clan within 13 days, she will provide her help. This news leaves Vui Kim and Iri Kang in a state of surprise, as they recognize Baekchung as a legend with a fearsome reputation. Gwang Hu-young stands to clarify just how great this woman really is. He describes a famous incident where Baekchung single-handedly executed 80 leader-level figures to punish the betrayal of a former council member named Geom-gae. Because of this massive slaughter, the Geom-gae organization fell and was replaced by the Dobang Association, ultimately earning the Yan clan's acceptance as leaders. This revelation clarifies a previous mystery for our protagonist regarding his deal with Jae-pil Kim. He recalls Jae-pil adding a condition that the leadership of the Yaburi gang be passed to Hwaryong Lee. When Taiha asked if he was overstepping by questioning the move, Jae-pil explained that on the record, it made communication easier. However, off the record, it was a precaution, because only one person in Korea reached such a high level with silver wires. Our hero finally realizes that Jae-pil was reacting to Baekchung's legendary skill. Realizing it is now his turn to act, Taiha turns his attention back to his captive, the former executive Ingyu Hong. While Hwaryong stands guard, the hero stands dominantly over the bound and kneeling Ingyu. He explains that Jin Chong plans to keep him preoccupied for the next 2 weeks by holding 2 people in separate locations, Lady Heron and his mentor, the former vice president of security Gwangsu Gu. Because Ingyu spent years climbing the ranks at Cheonggu, Taiha demands to know every secret hideout where the two could be held. Ingyu is terrified, stuttering that Chiang is a merciless bastard to traitors and will surely kill him. However, Guanghu Yang interjects, calling him a fool. He points out that since Dogyong Han has raised a blade, Ingyu's head is already at risk. The mention of the deranged bastard Dogyong causes Ingyu to groan in horror, noting that even Baek Junsu could barely control him. Our boy leans in with a threat, noting that if Ingyu wants to live, he must prove his worth. He adds that the local residents of the Jongseo district are quite eager for the director to lose his value, which finally forces Ingyu to scream for them to stop and promise to talk. Later that day, Taiha meets Gray outside a cafe to test his professional abilities. He instructs Gray to use Ingyu's info to find the locations where the two are being held. Although Gray is initially overwhelmed, arguing that the search isn't as easy as it looks and that Ingyu might be lying, our hero makes the priority clear. They have 13 days. He tells Gray that he plans to trust him with this, officially naming him as the first member of his team. As night falls, the group prepares for the next phase of the mission. Vui Kim expresses concern about Dogyong's potential for an ambush, but our protagonist admits his current physical limitations. Because his injuries haven't fully healed and he lacks experience in rescue operations, he reveals he has decided to call in reinforcements. Suddenly, sounds echoes through the rooftop as a figure crashes into the scene. The Aswang, Jerome, leaps from the shadows with a grin, wielding his red staff. He mockingly asks if Vendetta called him because he was finally ready to die, but our hero remains authoritative. Instead of a duel, Taiha formally invokes the protocols of the Mafia underworld, hiring Jerome as a mercenary through Ordo Nox to assist in the upcoming rescue. The power struggle reaches the heart of the nation as Jin Xiong visits the Blue House Palace complex. Inside a formal office, Senior Secretary Seongjae Choi warns Chiang that his unannounced visit is risky, given the swarm of reporters outside. However, because the sect leader has a vested interest in Chiang's welfare, Choi is forced to listen. Our antagonist dismisses the pleasantries, tapping his eagle-head cane impatiently and demanding the secretary act according to his high-ranking position. Chiang reveals his true intent. He has a specific prisoner he needs to move out of the country immediately. Meanwhile, the Jongseo district has become a fortress of digital surveillance, with active cameras and tracking systems monitoring every card payment and internet search. Because of this intense pressure, only two men manage to bypass the net. The first is Guanghu Yang, who receives protection from the Yan clan as a volunteer witness for the upcoming council hearing. Although he was sidelined by the company, the vice chairman held his position for 30 years, meaning he knows too much about the council's shady internal affairs for Chiang to ignore. The second man is Nameless, who is spotted walking through the alleys for a secret meeting. He meets a black tech agent, Junyak Huang, on a park bench beneath a high-rise bridge. Junyak is annoyed, noting that Nameless cut all contact after joining the Special Ops Division. Because he is a corporate agent, Junyak threatens to call the company to have the fugitive caught, but Nameless knows the man too well. He realizes Junyak only views the call as a hassle, because there is no compensation involved. To fix this, Nameless hands over an envelope containing cash equal to the agent's annual salary. Luckily, the money works. While Junyak counts the cash and wonders how a fugitive is richer than a working man, Nameless asks for the location of Haran and Guangsu. Junhyuk claims he doesn't know about Guangsu, but he confirms that Haran was moved to a port this morning to be shipped out on a boat. When Junhyuk questions why a former monitor like Nameless would suddenly join the Loyalists, Nameless somberly admits he simply had nothing else to do. Back at the cafe, Eerie Kang slams the table in a rage upon hearing that the transfer happened today. Vui Kim realizes that if Haran is sent overseas, finding her within 2 weeks will be impossible. Our hero turns to Guanghu Yang for a geographical deduction. Analyzing a map on his tablet, Yang rules out Incheon because it is jointly used by the council. He also excludes Ulsan, Pohang, and Busan because they are Oseong territory, while Mokpo and Yeosu are under Dobang and Oseong control. Because the remaining coastal ports belong to the Yeon clan, Yang identifies Oxio Port in the East Sea as the only option. It is a restricted trade port controlled by the local government with minimal customs presence, making it the perfect place to hide someone. Our protagonist realizes the Eternal Life sect must be involved as they control the nation's administration. While Nameless suggests a small boat could have been used from a tiny port, Yang dismisses this. He explains that Chiang would never opt for something so sloppy, even in a desperate situation. As the group plans their move, Gray enters the cafe in a panic. A call is coming through the tablet found on the neck of Asura's corpse. Taiha orders him to answer, revealing a glitchy video feed of Jin Chiang. The chairman mocks the full house of morons in the cafe and shows them a bloodied Junyak Huang on his knees. Because Chiang heard the agent was spreading rumors, he decides to make an example of him. Despite Nameless's furious screaming, Chang shoots Junhyuk in the head, spraying blood across the screen. While the group is stunned by the cold-blooded murder, Vice Chairman Yang suggests they hang up, realizing Chiang is only stalling for time. Chiang smirks, claiming the chairman of Cheongu has better things to do than stall. He continues to taunt them about Heron's location, suggesting he would never move her somewhere as predictable as a shipping lane. Heron is trapped inside a white straitjacket, suspended by chains inside the Seohui, a 3,000-ton class submarine deep under the East Sea. Chiang addresses our hero directly, suggesting that as family, they should have a private talk, but the vice chairman dismisses the move as a desperate ploy. Trusting his own instincts, our hero asks his allies for a moment of privacy. Before the cafe is cleared, Gray leans in to whisper a final reminder that every word is being recorded. This prompts a mocking threat from Jin Xiang through the glitchy monitor, as he warns the little brat that he might find out exactly how his father died. Luckily, our boy remains unfazed and signals his team to trust him. Once they are alone, Jin Xiang begins to reflect on how Taiha has managed to survive this long. He admits that he has been mulling over the logic of the hero's resilience, noting that the hero should have died back at the villa or during the board meeting where he was merely an uninvited guest. Jin Xiang confesses that he hates when his plans go off track, admitting that he never anticipated the death of Baek Junsu, or the fact that so many loyalists were still crawling around like roaches. Because our protagonist is currently lying low, the new chairman wonders why a man who usually rushes through the front door has suddenly become so cautious. Jin Xiang even suggests that perhaps the legendary Junsu went easy on the boy, which would explain how Taiha survived the villa massacre and made a comeback. He mocks our hero for having no plan following that incident, claiming Taiha only kept his life through sheer luck. Our protagonist coldly tells him to get to the point. This forces the chairman to reveal his hand. He is holding Guangsu captive. He claims he kept the veteran loyalist alive before he could lose his head and offers a trade. He promises to release Guangsu in 2 weeks if Taiha hands over the vice chairman and takes his local crew overseas. Our hero immediately analyzes the logic of the trap. He realizes that because Guanghu Yang is a vital witness for the council hearing, Chiang is desperate to eliminate him to prevent his testimony. Jin Chang doubles down on the pressure, questioning how long the hero and the residents can honestly survive. He warns that once redevelopment begins, everyone will have to leave, and suggests that the Oseong leader, Jae-pil, will inevitably abandon them. He threatens to slaughter everyone, elders and children alike, the moment the council's protection is gone, claiming that because Cheonggu controls the nation's industry and telecommunications, there is no place for the loyalists to hide. However, the tide turns when a subordinate interrupts the chairman with an urgent call from the Secretary of Political Affairs. A panicked Seongjae Choi screams through the phone, demanding to know why Jin Cheong involved the secretary in a mess that has drawn the attention of international powers. It turns out that a mysterious English-speaking man recently called the secretary with a terrifying revelation. This stranger identified a massive cache of American-made weapons, rifles, rocket launchers, and grenades, tucked away in the cargo hold of a secret trade ship docked at Okseo port. Because these weapons were secretly planted by U.S. intelligence for covert operations, the stranger notes that exposing their presence on a Korean trade vessel would create an international scandal far worse than anything the secretary could imagine. The man behind the call issues a single demand: do not transfer the truck at Okseo port onto any submarine. He makes it clear that while he doesn't care about the cargo, he wants all Cheonggu-related business kept on land. This mysterious caller, who identifies himself as a father concerned for his boy, is revealed to be Caesar Salerno, the Don of the Salerno family. He is shown smiling over a plate of pasta, noting that any parent would worry when their child plays near water. Because the Salerno family has the backing to create a geopolitical nightmare, Secretary Choi informs Jin Cheong that he can no longer assist with the transfer at Okseo port. He declares that he wants nothing to do with Cheong's side hustle, leaving the chairman in a state of shock. Our hero immediately capitalizes on this. Taiha uses a hunting metaphor to explain the situation. He notes that a hunter first pinpoints the territory and sets up barriers to trap the prey. Our protagonist looks directly at the screen, revealing the symbol on his hand, and draws a tactical blade. He clarifies the logic of their struggle, stating that he didn't jump into Cheong's world, he trapped Cheong in his. With intense resolve, our hero promises that there will be no more talking. He vows to make every remaining moment of Cheong's life a living hell before personally delivering the killing blow. As our boy walks away with a confident smile, he thanks the chairman for the vital information regarding Okseo port.